Meet our young chef hero cooking up a storm in a wholesome slice-of-life comedy. As he slices ingredients with precision and speed on his cutting board, tossing a delicious-looking pasta dish in a hot pan over the stove, before happily serving his creation to a customer with a bright smile. Growing up in rural Hiroshima where his family runs a cozy local diner, he naturally fell in love with the culinary arts from a young age. Dreaming of taking over the family business right after graduating from high school, but his father insisted he first master the basics by making his own lunches, which led to some disastrous, barely edible meals that made him lose weight, until a friend advised him to buy a cookbook and follow the recipes, resulting in delicious bento boxes that actually made him gain those pounds back, gradually mastering everything from traditional Japanese dishes to Western cuisine and sweet desserts. Strengthening his resolve to work alongside his dad as a professional chef, only for his father to demand he start from the absolute bottom, forcing him to wake up at 5 in the morning for prep work and spend his nights washing endless stacks of plates until 10 p.m., thoroughly drilling the absolute fundamentals of kitchen management into his daily routine. Then, upon graduation, his father suddenly tells him to go train in Tokyo, explaining that he has already taught him every single thing he possibly could. So our young hero sets off for the big city to start his culinary journey. Arriving in Tokyo, he finds out his dad already signed a lease for his apartment, which turns out to be a super cozy, slightly run-down place in the city, marking the official start of his intense culinary training at 18 years old, where he works grueling hours from dawn to night and spends his days off tasting food. Never once complaining because his absolute love for cooking keeps his spirits high, leading his head chef to declare after 2 years that he has nothing left to teach. So our 20-year-old boy packs his bags to return to his family diner in Hiroshima, expecting a completely normal trip home as he waits at the bullet train platform, taking that fateful step forward to board the Shinkansen like any other passenger. But the moment his foot is about to touch the floor of the train, a bizarre glitch in reality happens right at the entrance of the train door, causing his eyes to widen in sheer shock as the ground suddenly vanishes, sending him slipping right through the solid floor into a bottomless abyss, plunging our poor chef into a dark void while gravity completely loses its mind, falling faster and faster until his vision fades to black and he passes out, only to wake up in a strange bed, realizing his second life has just begun. Greeted by a handsome blonde guy who asks if he is finally awake, leaving our boy staring blankly at this random dude wearing full metal armor, wondering who this gorgeous knight is and why he is dressed so strangely, trying to understand if he somehow stumbled into an elaborate cosplay event. This knight explains that our boy was found collapsed in their camp with absolutely nothing on him, asking if he can recall any details about how he ended up there. Repeating the words camp and nothing in his head while trying to process the situation, clutching his forehead as he realizes none of this terminology makes any sense. So he nervously sits up and asks where exactly they are right now, prompting the blonde knight to explain they are currently in the Rinbel Hills, which only leaves our young chef looking completely blank and utterly clueless, politely asking which Japanese prefecture this Rinbel place is supposed to be in. His savior looks totally baffled, explaining that Rinbel is on the Sabra continent, leaving our hero to wonder if his language is somehow failing to translate, before another voice suddenly calls out from the entrance of the tent, revealing a whole squad of incredibly diverse fantasy characters stepping inside, making our boy stare in absolute disbelief at this bizarre new crowd, as he scans the group of heavily armed warriors and beast-like companions, desperately trying to convince himself that this is just some high-budget cosplay event, until he locks eyes with a massive, terrifying giant wearing full armor, who is casually holding a giant, dangerously sharp battle axe in his hand, sending a shiver down his spine as he realizes that weapon is real. Breaking the tension, the knight asks the lost kid for his name, and our nervous young chef politely introduces himself to them as Shuri Azuma. This handsome blonde knight introduces himself as Gangrave, the leader of this local mercenary group, and our poor chef can only sweat nervously while repeating the word mercenary in his head, wondering if this is actually just some weirdly intense name for a modern idol group, while a pretty female warrior nearby whispers that the kid might have severely bumped his head, prompting Gangrave to close his eyes and offer to explain the situation from the very beginning. Recalling how Shuri suddenly wandered into their active campsite looking completely exhausted before collapsing face first, leaving him passed out cold on the dirt while they tried to figure out his identity. So Shuri weakly explains that he has absolutely no memory of how he got here, as the heavily armored giant and the dreadlocked warrior listen intently to his confusing story, with the rest of the diverse fantasy squad gathering around with curious looks, leading the mercenary leader to narrow his eyes and ask where exactly he came from, which gets a tired, deadpan response from our boy who simply tells them he is from Japan, making the blonde knight look completely baffled as he repeats the unfamiliar country name, causing Shuri to panic and explain that Japan is a well-known island nation, instantly shocking the female warrior who wonders if he sailed all the way from the outer seas. Though Gangrave quickly pinches his temple and decides to stop overthinking this bizarre geographical mystery, forcing our young chef to slowly process the terrifying realization that he is definitely not in Japan, sitting up in pure panic as he realizes this Sabra continent place is completely real, before his head starts spinning wildly from the sheer shock of being transported to another world, with Gangrave gently telling him to calm down and rest his exhausted, mud-covered body. This dreadlocked mercenary casually mentions he was the one who wiped Shuri's body clean, making our boy blush in embarrassment before Gangrave sighs and reminds him they are mercenaries, meaning they are currently in the middle of an active, highly dangerous war zone, so keeping a completely mysterious stranger around is a massive security risk for them, which instantly makes Shuri freeze up as he starts putting the pieces together. Realizing with absolute terror that these heavily armed warriors probably think he is a spy, especially when he looks over at that giant, razor-sharp battle axe resting nearby. But the mercenary leader quickly clarifies their actual stance on the matter, explaining that if Shuri is just a confused local villager with severe memory loss, they have no intention of hurting him as long as he answers honestly, because while Gangrave does not truly believe our boy is some kind of secret agent, he still needs to guarantee the absolute safety of his entire mercenary squad, prompting Shuri to frantically nod and swear that he will not tell a single lie, starting by introducing himself as a 20-year-old chef from rural Hiroshima, Japan, only for Gangrave to stare blankly, having never heard of either of those places, while also pointing out that Shuri looks way too young to be 20, leaving our baby-faced hero to desperately plead that he is telling the absolute truth, leading Gangrave to stroke his chin and ask if he is an outlander, forcing Shuri to tilt his head in confusion at this unfamiliar fantasy world terminology. As the rest of the battle-hardened mercenaries watch this bizarre interrogation unfold, this mercenary squad members exchange highly skeptical glances as they listen to his bizarre explanation, leaving our poor chef sweating bullets because he knows his story sounds completely made up. So he desperately raises his hands and swears that he is telling the absolute truth, prompting the blonde mercenary leader to stare at him with a piercing, unreadable expression, which only makes Shuri panic even more as he frantically tries to find the right words. But Gangrave casually waves his hand, telling the kid to relax because they will not hurt him, before sighing deeply while wondering how to handle a kid suffering from such severe memory loss, forcing our nervous hero to meekly ask what is going to happen to him now, as Gangrave bluntly points out that they cannot afford to feed someone who cannot contribute, sending a cold wave of dread washing over Shuri as his options quickly vanish. Thinking fast, our boy asks if he can simply work to earn his keep, which gets the leader thinking that having an extra hand for basic chores might actually work, though he still offers to drop Shuri off at a nearby village instead of keeping him. But the mention of an active war zone makes Shuri freeze up in sheer terror, realizing that wandering into a battle-torn land alone is basically a death sentence, especially since no random village would ever welcome a suspicious stranger during a war, meaning his absolute best chance of survival is staying right here with these mercenaries. So he squeezes his eyes shut and prepares to beg for his life, pleading with Gangrave to let him do any kind of chore because he has nowhere else to go, instantly impressing the leader enough to let him stay under strict supervision. Shuri sweat drops, realizing that being under constant surveillance is just the price of survival, as the mercenary squad stares him down while Gangrave asks what skills he actually has, prompting our young chef to quickly analyze his options to secure a safe spot, knowing that sticking close to these powerful warriors is his only shield against this war zone. Because wandering off alone into a lawless battlefield is basically begging for a swift demise, meaning he absolutely must find a useful role here if he wants to stay alive, though his panicked brain is currently spinning in circles trying to find a solution, forcing him to look back at his life and remember what he does best, visualizing the familiar, comforting motion of preparing ingredients and seasoning a delicious dish, until a sudden spark of inspiration hits him right in the middle of his panic, leading him to blurt out that he wants to cook, surprising everyone in the tent. Gangrave freezes in absolute shock, his eyes widening as he processes the kid's unexpected words, before leaning in close with an intense look to ask him to repeat that, leaving Shuri to nervously stammer that he really just wants to make some food, which prompts the mercenary leader to ask if he actually has any real culinary training, getting a confident nod from our boy before Gangrave suddenly pumps his fist in excitement, making our young chef completely baffled by this bizarrely enthusiastic reaction from the leader, especially when he notices the rest of the battle-hardened squad looking incredibly relieved too. So Gangrave happily declares that Shuri is officially appointed as their new camp cook, leaving our poor hero staring blankly as he realizes his culinary journey is starting again. Shuri quickly agrees but nervously points out that a random newcomer suddenly taking over might cause some tension, prompting Gangrave to scratch his head and admit there is a slight catch to this arrangement, telling our young chef that it is much easier to show him rather than explain it, leading them out of the tent to reveal a massive, bustling military camp packed with active soldiers, which instantly makes Shuri realize the scale of the dangerous war zone he stumbled into. While watching battle-hardened mercenaries casually playing cards and resting between their intense training sessions, cementing the terrifying reality in his mind that he has definitely been transported to another world, as he follows the squad through the sprawling maze of tents and heavy supply wagons, noticing that every single person around him has incredibly vibrant anime-like hair colors. Soon, they arrive at a crude outdoor setup with basic iron pots hanging over cold fire pits, leaving Shuri completely horrified to learn that this bare-bones campsite is their actual kitchen, while Gangrave casually explains that their mercenary group does not actually have a designated cook, shocking our young chef who cannot believe a massive army operates without any culinary staff, though the leader sighs and admits it was his mistake for failing to recruit anyone brave enough, because most professional chefs would obviously prefer the safety of a peaceful town tavern over a war. Meaning the soldiers have simply been taking turns preparing their own meals on a rotating schedule, resulting in absolutely terrible food that is barely edible right before they head into a major battle. So Gangrave offers a simple test to see if Shuri can actually make something delicious, making our hero momentarily stunned by the sudden high-stakes cooking challenge thrown his way, before he confidently smiles and accepts the test to secure his survival in this crazy new world. Shuri peers into the storage area, wondering what kind of dish he can actually whip up, checking out the basic kitchen tools alongside a meager list of standard vegetables and flour, which includes a few onions, some potatoes, and a handful of carrots sitting in the corner, before he notices they also have milk, cheese, salt, and pepper available. Turning back to the mercenary leader, our boy nervously asks if this is really all they have, prompting Gangrave to explain that 3 months of constant warfare has left their food supplies completely depleted, especially since they plan to end this war tomorrow, but today's cook already gave up, leaving Shuri to use these exact ingredients to prove his culinary worth in this crucial test, sending a wave of panic through our young chef as he realizes the massive responsibility, staring at the empty wooden crates that used to hold their bread and preserved rations. While Gangrave smiles eagerly and asks what kind of meal he plans to make, thinking deeply, Shuri places a hand on his chin to brainstorm the perfect recipe, finally smiling as he confidently suggests they make a nice warm batch of cream stew, only for the mercenary leader to tilt his head in complete and utter confusion, making our young chef blink in surprise as he addresses the baffled knight, wondering if these fantasy world warriors have seriously never heard of cream stew before. So he quickly explains that it is basically a delicious, comforting soup made with milk, finding it incredibly bizarre that such a common dish is totally unheard of in this land, as he also realizes how weird it is that they can even understand his language, since all these fantasy vegetables look and taste exactly like the ones back home. Shuri looks around the camp, still completely baffled about where in the world he actually is. But he decides to let his cooking do the talking as he grabs a kitchen knife, noting that while these fantasy tools look a bit different, they will still get the job done. So he ties his apron tight and gets ready to whip up some delicious cream stew, even though they do not have any standard Japanese seasonings like soy sauce or consomme. First, our boy starts chopping the vegetables into even cubes to ensure they all cook perfectly, explaining that using extra onions is the secret to making it flavorful without any fancy broth, before tossing them into the hot pot to sauté once the butter has fully melted, which prompts the blonde mercenary to ask if the order of the vegetables really matters, leading Shuri to explain that timing is everything when you want to blend flavors perfectly. Next, he sprinkles in some flour to create a thick base for his hearty stew, before slowly pouring in the milk while stirring constantly to keep the texture smooth, only for the blonde mercenary to gasp in absolute shock at how white the soup is, leaving our deadpan chef to point out that cream stew is obviously supposed to be white, though the terrified warrior still looks incredibly suspicious of this bizarre, pale concoction. To finish it off, Shuri slices some cheese into the pot and adds salt and pepper, proudly presenting a steaming, delicious bowl of freshly made cream stew to his skeptical audience. But the blonde mercenary just stares at it, completely terrified by its unfamiliar milky color, forcing our tired chef to repeat himself for what feels like the 100th time, as the warrior nervously admits he has absolutely no idea what cream even is. Shuri hands over the bowl, telling the skeptical leader to just try it without complaining. And Gangrave reluctantly takes his first bite, his eyes instantly widening in sheer shock, leaving the entire camp holding their breath as they watch their leader's reaction, as he slowly chews the warm, savory mixture while processing the unbelievable flavor, before finally gulping it down with an intense look of pure concentration, until his eyes suddenly light up with a brilliant spark of culinary revelation, making our nervous young chef sweat bullets as he waits for the final verdict. Only for Gangrave to immediately scoop up an even bigger spoonful of stew, while the rest of the battle-hardened squad watches in absolute silent suspense, completely unable to believe that their terrifying boss is reacting this way, where even the toughest warriors in the camp lean in to witness the spectacle, watching Gangrave completely abandon his manners to shovel the delicious food into his mouth, which leaves the nearby female mercenaries staring in utter, jaw-dropping disbelief, because their leader is chewing with an intensity they have never seen before, sending a wave of confusion through the rest of the onlookers standing nearby, resulting in Gangrave letting out a blissful sigh, his face flushed with pure culinary happiness. This crowd of soldiers stands frozen in absolute shock at this incredibly wholesome sight, staring blankly at the wooden bowl that has been scraped completely clean, prompting Shuri to meekly speak up and ask how the meal actually tasted. With the ecstatic leader slamming his bowl forward and loudly demanding a second helping, Shuri nervously holds out the steaming bowl, waiting for the leader's final judgment, while Gangrave stares down at the mysterious white soup with an incredibly intense expression, wondering how a dish made of simple milk and vegetables could look so thick, before he slowly scoops up a generous spoonful of the hot, creamy mixture and brings it to his mouth to finally take a cautious first bite, sending a wave of pure shock through the onlookers as they witness his reaction, since the mercenary leader completely empties the entire wooden bowl in record time, leaving him leaning back with a massive, satisfied smile of pure culinary bliss, prompting him to suddenly slam the bowl forward and eagerly demand a second helping, which makes Shuri sweat drop and quickly point out that they still need to finish the test, causing the flustered leader to laugh nervously and apologize for getting carried away, before his expression softens into a warm, genuine grin of absolute and complete approval, loudly declaring that our young chef has officially and magnificently passed his test, admitting that it has been a very long time since he tasted real food, which finally allows Shuri to let out a massive, long-awaited sigh of relief. As the mercenary leader continues to praise the dish, amazed that simple vegetables can taste this incredibly good, prompting our boy to smile and explain that a balanced diet is essential, only for the mercenary leader to tilt his head in complete and utter confusion, leaving Shuri completely stunned to realize that these fantasy warriors have no concept of nutrition, so he patiently explains that nutrients are basically the fuel that keeps the body healthy. Shuri stands there completely frozen as the mercenary leader stares at him with wide eyes, suddenly asking our young chef if he is actually some kind of legendary doctor, which leaves the rest of the camp whispering in absolute confusion at the bizarre question, making Shuri blink in utter disbelief as he tries to process what he just heard, quickly waving his hands to explain that he only cooks healthy meals and cannot heal injuries, prompting Gangrave to stroke his chin and wonder if he is a royal court nutritionist, before realizing that our boy does not seem to belong to any known kingdom around here. So the leader suddenly grabs Shuri by the shoulder, giving him a massive fright, as he smiles warmly and officially orders our young chef to work for them, loudly announcing to the entire camp that Shuri is officially hired as their new cook, sending a massive wave of cheers and pure excitement through the hungry crowd of mercenaries, who warmly welcome our nervous hero as he reluctantly shakes hands with his new boss. Meanwhile, the story shifts to reveal the harsh reality of this war-torn fantasy world, where rival armies constantly clash over territory in a brutal, never-ending struggle for power, charging into battle with heavy armor and shouting commands to wipe out their enemies. As the entire continent of Sabura remains locked in this chaotic era of warring states, ruled by ambitious lords who dream of conquering every single kingdom to prove their supremacy, while magic and devastating weapons turn the battlefields into scenes of absolute, terrifying destruction, leaving no room for human dignity in a world where only the strongest survive, as countless soldiers continue to fight and die just to secure wealth and fleeting glory. Gangrave explains that in this chaotic, war-torn era, being a mercenary is actually a highly profitable business. But before he became a legendary leader, he was just a young punk throwing punches, knocking down local thugs who dared to threaten his crew in the back alleys of his hometown, warning them that they were messing with the wrong gang on his turf, which quickly earned him a massive reputation among the townspeople watching his heroic exploits. Our blonde leader reveals that he originally started out by running a small street gang, leading his 7 childhood friends through all kinds of mischief without ever crossing the line, thanks to a highly unique cheat skill that made his life incredibly easy. This overpowered ability allowed him to copy any physical movement with absolute flawless precision, easily disarming a fully trained knight who thought he could bully a common kid, sending the warrior's expensive sword flying through the air in a single, effortless motion, leaving the defeated noble utterly baffled at how a lowborn brat mastered elite knightly swordsmanship, only for Gangrave to casually explain that he simply watched and memorized the moves. His photographic memory meant he could perfectly retain everything he ever saw, read, or heard, eventually realizing that street gangs had no future in this rapidly changing world. So he gathered his talented childhood friends to officially form a brand new mercenary band, and things went beautifully until their small crew suddenly ballooned to nearly 100 soldiers, bringing a massive wave of unexpected expenses like wages, armor maintenance, and horse feed, proving that running a massive army eats up an unbelievable amount of gold every day, though he admits he completely underestimated the most crucial expense of all, which was food. Because their previous cooks served food so utterly terrible that even the kids looked completely miserable, leaving the entire squad deeply depressed over daily meals that tasted like literal cardboard, which forced the exhausted soldiers to blow all their hard-earned cash at local taverns, meaning they never had enough gold left over to properly maintain their weapons and armor, though finding a chef who could cook delicious food amidst the chaos of war was impossible. But Gangrave refused to give up on his dream of building the ultimate mercenary band, because to him, this group was much more than just a simple way to survive, as he secretly harbored a massive ambition to eventually build his very own kingdom. Growing up as a poor war orphan, he had to steal just to get by, quickly realizing that he would have to play dirty if he wanted to change this world, especially after seeing so many other innocent children starving on the streets. So he resolved to take wealth from greedy nobles and use it to help people, throwing himself into countless brutal battles and taking down anyone who stood in his way, though he also tasted bitter defeat and lost many close comrades along the way. Yet he kept moving forward, refusing to let his spirit be broken by the tragedy. 8 years passed, but his mercenary band was still stuck at barely 100 soldiers, making him worry that he had finally hit the absolute limit of his own talent. Until a strange young man suddenly appeared like a beacon of hope in his life, introducing him to Shuri Azuma, the legendary chef who would completely rewrite their destiny. Right here in the middle of their bustling camp hidden deep within the Rinbel Hills, Gangrave scratches his head in absolute frustration, completely stumped on how to handle their current crisis, as he sits at the war table with his top advisors to discuss their failing campaign. Realizing that this supposedly easy gig has dragged on for 3 brutal months of pure attrition, leaving his battle-weary soldiers completely drained and putting the entire mercenary group's survival on the line, since their limited tactical options on these open hills mean they can only launch a risky head-on assault. To make matters worse, Kaguya reports that the enemy is planning to mobilize their entire army tomorrow morning, prompting her to honestly suggest that they pack up and retreat before things get any worse, arguing that staying in this fight without a clear winning strategy will only lead to useless casualties, which makes Gangrave silently agree that forcing his exhausted squad to keep fighting is a terrible idea, wondering if they should just cut their losses and move on to a different battlefield while they still can. Suddenly, our blonde leader turns his attention to Ortros, asking if the silent warrior has any objections. But the intimidating helmeted fighter just stands there in absolute silence without saying a single word, knowing that Ortros has always preferred to let his actions do the talking since their old gang days, as he is the type of loyal brother who willingly shoulders the heaviest burdens for his comrades. Believing that retreating now would mean betraying the memory of all the friends they have lost, their blonde female lieutenant chimes in, admitting that she completely understands the heavy emotional conflict, but firmly points out that staying on this path will lead to the complete collapse of their band, directly addressing Ortros to acknowledge his deep love for their fallen brothers, while reminding everyone that pride must never be confused with reckless stupidity since they are free mercenaries, who have every right to pull out of this contract whenever their survival is on the line. This mercenary leader acknowledges that Arlias makes a really solid point about their current situation, admitting that this grueling campaign has dragged on far longer than anyone anticipated, but as he closes his eyes to deeply contemplate their next move, our blonde leader suddenly opens them with a look of absolute determination, declaring that a mercenary band's reputation is entirely built on their strength. If they run away now, clients will lose trust and stop hiring them, leaving his top advisors completely silent as they absorb his heavy words, until Kaguya quietly bows her head and accepts her leader's final decision, followed by the silent giant Ortros nodding along in complete and loyal agreement. While Arlias smiles warmly and reminds him that they will always follow his lead, this unwavering loyalty brings a soft, grateful smile to the young leader's face, prompting him to suggest they figure out the actual battle plan after dinner, only to stare down at a depressing bowl of completely unappetizing sludge, which makes Arlias blush in embarrassment and apologize for her unit's terrible cooking. Gangrave quickly waves his hands to reassure her that he is not blaming anyone. Yet he cannot help but scratch his head in absolute, painful frustration, realizing that the lack of a decent cook is their biggest weakness, since eating this tasteless garbage every single day completely drains his squad's morale, as the rest of his tired soldiers look utterly miserable outside their tents, knowing that a delicious, hot meal is exactly what they need to win this war. Clutching his head in absolute despair, our blonde leader blames himself for their terrible situation, as he lets out a heavy sigh, realizing how badly he messed up. But he quickly hardens his gaze, declaring that a mercenary band's reputation is built on strength, warning that any sign of weakness will make clients lose trust and stop hiring them, leaving his top advisors completely silent as they absorb his heavy, realistic words, until Kaguya quietly bows her head, fully accepting her leader's final decision, followed by the silent giant Ortros nodding along in complete and loyal agreement. While Arlias smiles warmly and reminds him that they will always follow his lead, this unwavering loyalty brings a soft, grateful smile to the young leader's face, prompting him to suggest they finalize the actual battle plan after dinner, only to stare down at a depressing bowl of completely unappetizing sludge, which makes Arlias blush in embarrassment and apologize for her unit's terrible cooking. Gangrave quickly waves his hands to reassure her that he is not blaming anyone, repeating that it is definitely not her fault while trying to keep the mood light. Yet he cannot help but scratch his head in absolute, painful frustration, realizing that the lack of a decent cook is their biggest weakness, since eating this tasteless garbage every single day completely drains his squad's morale, as the rest of his tired soldiers look utterly miserable outside their tents, knowing that a delicious, hot meal is exactly what they need to win this war. This realization sends our blonde leader right back into a state of absolute screaming panic. Gangrave is suddenly interrupted in the middle of his panic by a loud shout, as their dreadlock scout Tegu bursts into the tent looking completely out of breath, demanding to know why his commander skipped out on their incredibly important strategy meeting. This unexpected scolding leaves the scout sweating bullets as he tries to find his words, stuttering nervously before explaining that he actually found something everyone needs to see immediately. Walking out into the bustling camp, our blonde leader is completely baffled by the news, questioning why they are making such a massive fuss over a simple lost child, though Tegu insists there is something incredibly bizarre about this particular kid's sudden appearance. Suddenly, Gangrave notices a group of curious onlookers gathered right outside the medical tent. sighing deeply because these lazy slackers never show up for actual military briefings. Yet they have plenty of free time to gossip about a random kid wandering around. Even their beast-eared ally admits she is dying of curiosity to see what is happening, while the others agree that finding a random child in a war zone is highly unusual. Our blonde leader grumbles about his talented but highly disobedient squad of problem children, deciding to just push past them and investigate the mysterious intruder for himself, wanting to see exactly what kind of kid could cause such a massive stir, only to freeze in absolute shock the moment he peers inside the quiet tent. Lying peacefully on a wooden cot is a young, black-haired boy sleeping like a baby, completely oblivious to the dangerous mercenaries surrounding him in this chaotic war camp, leaving our tough commander utterly speechless as he tries to make sense of this bizarre situation. Standing outside the medical tent, Gangrave and his top officers gather to investigate the mysterious boy, while Kaguya curiously asks if this random kid is really as strange as everyone claims, prompting our blonde leader to ask their scout which direction the child came from. Tegu sweats nervously, admitting that they probably will not believe his actual explanation, because his scouts claim the boy literally materialized out of thin air right before their eyes. This bizarre claim leaves the entire command squad staring at each other in absolute disbelief, making Gangrave ask Arlius if this could be some kind of legendary teleportation magic. But the magic prodigy immediately shuts down the idea, calling it an impossible ancient myth, leaving our leader completely stumped about how this kid could have suddenly appeared here. Leaning in closer, Kaguya notes that there is definitely something highly unusual about him, pointing out that the boy's facial features look remarkably similar to people from her homeland, which surprises Gangrave since she originally comes from the mysterious and distant eastern lands, though she quickly clarifies that he still feels fundamentally different from her own people, describing his presence as somehow being much thicker and more concentrated than her own, only making our blonde commander even more confused by her strange choice of words. Arlius chimes in to ask if he could just be a completely ordinary villager, yet Tegu points out that his hands are completely smooth without any farming calluses, leading Kaguya to wonder if he might be the pampered son of a wealthy merchant, even though their young scout Lurel argues that no merchant would ever wear such bizarre clothes, causing another advisor to suggest that he might actually be a runaway prince from royalty. Kaguya admits that even in her sacred temple, she has never heard of anyone like him, leaving our blonde leader completely stumped as he realizes they're getting absolutely zero answers, because the sleeping boy's soft face and slender body clearly show he is no fighter or farmer, though his bizarre clothing is what truly catches the experienced mercenary commander's attention. Looking like a simple white shirt and blue pants but holding a far deeper mystery, since the unbelievable quality of these garments is completely impossible to replicate with modern technology, noting that the strange fabric has absolutely no buttons or even a traditional collar, while the flawless stitching and perfect thread spacing look like the work of a literal god, leaving Gangrave completely mesmerized by a beautiful, durable material he has never seen before. Realizing that selling this single shirt to a tailor guild could easily make them a fortune, yet his eyes quickly drift down to the boy's pants, which seem even more valuable, featuring a highly calculated indigo pattern and perfectly placed pockets that serve both form and function, making him sweat in pure shock at an outfit that condenses centuries of future technology, while Tegu chimes in to say the kid feels like he belongs to a different world, repeating those words silently to himself as the bizarre reality of the situation sinks in, sighing deeply because they have definitely brought an incredibly troublesome guest into their camp, but finding some comfort in the fact that no actual spy would sleep with such a silly face, as the scouts explain how the exhausted boy's healthy color returned after a good night's rest, prompting our blonde leader to turn and ask his silent giant for his personal opinion, only for Ortros to slowly tilt his massive helmeted head in complete and utter confusion. Gangrave notes that since the sleeping boy shows absolutely no hostility, they have no reason to harm him, but their resident invention enthusiast Lurel is far more interested in analyzing his bizarre clothing, pointing out that the fabric does not seem to use any known animal or plant fibers, which completely shocks our blonde leader since their top genius is totally stumped by a simple shirt. Meanwhile, Kaguya stares at the boy with a deeply troubled and sweating expression as she processes a wild theory, wondering if this mysterious child could actually be a legendary being from her homeland's ancient myths, realizing that if the sacred temple finds out about him, they might silence everyone to keep the secret, prompting Gangrave to ask if she knows something about the temple's connection to this kid. She quickly brushes it off with a nervous smile, claiming that it is absolutely nothing, though our suspicious commander makes a mental note to interrogate her about this bizarre reaction later. Deciding to handle this directly, Gangrave orders his squad to wait outside while he interrogates the boy. Stepping back inside the tent, our blonde leader greets the black-haired kid who has finally opened his eyes, only for the poor boy to freeze in absolute terror at the massive crowd of intimidating warriors, before nervously asking if this place is Japan, describing it as a distant island nation, which sends Gangrave and Kaguya into a state of pure shock over this completely unheard of country. This bizarre revelation instantly causes a wave of confused murmurs to ripple through the entire mercenary squad, as their scout argues that crossing the deadly outer seas to get here is completely impossible. while another ally admits she has never heard of any civilized lands existing beyond their borders, leaving Tegu sweating bullets as he wonders if another massive continent truly exists out there. Though their elf companion confirms that even ancient history has absolutely no record of such a place, Gangrave ponders the legendary outer seas that supposedly surround their entire continent, which is completely bordered by water and historically impossible for anyone to escape. Especially since these treacherous waters are infested with violent storms and terrifying sea monsters, meaning that if this kid actually came from the outside, it is a massive deal, forcing our blonde leader to close his eyes and process this mind-blowing revelation, before scratching his head in frustration because the mystery only gets deeper the more he thinks. Summarizing the facts that this seemingly helpless young boy is named Azuma Shuri. Hailing from a place called Hiroshima in Japan and claiming to be 20 years old, which completely shocks their beast-eared ally who cannot believe he maintains such flawless, baby-smooth skin, leaving Gangrave to rest his chin on his hand and contemplate their next move, knowing that sending him home is impossible since they have no idea where Japan is. This easiest solution would be to simply kick him out of their military camp, since a struggling mercenary band cannot afford to feed any useless, extra baggage. But as he stares at the flickering lantern on his wooden table, our blonde leader admits that his initial impression of this mysterious kid is that he is incredibly simple, naive, and completely harmless to their squad, meaning he is definitely not a bad guy and leaving him to die would feel terrible, leading to his final, unexpected decision to officially hire the black-haired boy, putting him to work as a simple chore boy to earn his keep around camp. While Shuri nervously clenches his fist, ready to face whatever crazy chores lie ahead, Shuri politely bows and begs the commander to let him do any kind of work, which surprisingly impresses Gangrave since the kid is keeping his cool under pressure. So our blonde leader turns to his squad to decide where to place him, but Laurel immediately gives him a deadpan look of absolute and utter rejection. Explaining that her magic engineering division has zero room for a magicless rookie, Arlias chimes in to say her all-female magic squad is also completely out, leaving Gangrave to realize that both magic-focused units are totally off the table, while Kaguya casually puffs her pipe and rejects the boy from her special ops, agreeing that putting a complete non-combatant into stealth missions is just plain stupid, prompting our commander to slowly turn his gaze toward their silent armored giant. Ortros immediately shakes his massive helmeted head in a very clear no gesture, making Gangrave sigh because sending Shuri to the brutal front lines is obviously impossible, and he definitely cannot join the cavalry since he has never ridden a horse, while their elegant intelligence officer shuts down any hope of joining her spy division. Our blonde leader completely agrees that Shuri is way too naive for espionage, leaving only the scout and archery divisions as their final potential options. Though Tegu frantically waves his hands to say his scouts cannot take him, but their long-haired archer leader surprisingly offers to take the young kid in, giving Gangrave a sudden glimmer of hope that they finally found a home, until the smug archer reveals he plans to put him through brutal Spartan training. Gangrave immediately shuts down the archer's brutal training plan, knowing the fragile kid would never survive, leaving our blonde leader to realize that Tegu's scout division is their absolute last option. But as he looks over at the stress boy clutching his head in deep thought, our boy Shuri suddenly looks up with sparkling eyes and asks if he can try cooking instead, instantly catching the mercenary commander completely off guard with this highly unexpected request. A loud shout echoes right out of the tent as Gangrave asks if he actually knows how to cook, prompting Shuri to confidently explain that he has actually undergone quite a bit of culinary training. So the young boy happily ties on a simple apron to prepare his very first camp meal, staring up at a massive black cooking pot that is almost as big as he is. Kaguya watches with intense curiosity, wondering what kind of strange dish this mysterious boy will create, which turns out to be a rich cream stew that completely blows the commander's mind upon first taste, sending Gangrave into a state of pure, tearful ecstasy over the unbelievably delicious flavor, praising the dish as a mind-blowing culinary shock unlike anything he has ever experienced in his life, noting how the milk creates a perfectly smooth, sweet, and incredibly rich soup base, while the subtle acidity of the cheese beautifully ties all the complex flavors together. Without any hesitation, our blonde leader loudly declares that the boy has passed his test with flying colors, delighting the hungry soldiers who happily dig into the most satisfying battlefield meal they have ever eaten, as their beast-eared ally smiles warmly, completely amazed by this wonderfully unique and delicious creation, while Tegu proudly claims this hearty stew will give them the strength of 100 men in battle, leaving even their silent armored giant to carefully slip a spoonful of soup under his massive helmet. Kaguya blushes deeply, admitting she seriously needs to step up her own cooking skills after tasting this, while their elegant elf companion completely agrees that she has a lot to learn from this kid. Even their resident genius Laurel is totally satisfied, which is an incredibly rare sight for the squad, smugly declaring that delicious food is simply delicious, and there is absolutely no arguing with that. Their energetic scout happily licks her lips, fully agreeing that good food is the ultimate battlefield comfort, as the entire mercenary camp gathers around to enjoy this legendary feast under the evening sky, prompting Gangrave to quietly observe the heartwarming scene with a mixture of awe and deep curiosity, staring at the mysterious, rich stew that is unlike anything ever recorded in their continent's history. Realizing that the boy's bizarre story about coming from beyond the deadly outer seas might actually be true, especially if there is a highly advanced civilization out there and this kid holds their secrets, making him realize that Shuri's incredible culinary knowledge and calm composure under pressure are far too valuable to lose, suddenly snapped out of his deep thoughts by the loud, cheerful praise of his hungry soldiers, who are all eagerly crowding around the young chef to thank him for the best meal of their lives, causing our blonde leader to let out a soft, genuinely warm smile at the wholesome sight. Before the young boy can even process the overwhelming praise, a massive hand suddenly grips his shoulder, as Gangrave pulls him close with a giant grin, officially welcoming him to the mercenary band, leaving Shuri completely wide-eyed and speechless as he looks up at the intimidating yet friendly commander, reassuring him with a warm look that instantly melts away all of his lingering fears and worries, touching the young boy's heart as he realizes he has finally found a safe place to belong, inspiring him to smile back warmly and promise to do his absolute best for his new family. Gangrave officially tasks Shuri with keeping the entire mercenary squad well-fed from now on, and this simple agreement marks the beginning of a legendary tale for future generations, which takes place on a massive continent once plagued by a century of brutal warfare, during a dark, blood-soaked era where endless conflict stained the land in deep red, until an extraordinary leader finally emerged to bring a sudden end to the chaos, introducing the legendary founding king of their unified nation, Gangrave Prada, who overcame countless hardships to become known as humanity's greatest and most beloved hero king, leaving behind a famous, mind-blowing quote that historians would talk about for centuries, when one of his curious vassals asked how he managed to end the war, wondering if it was due to superior tactics, unmatched combat power, or brilliant diplomacy, only for the wise king to rest his hand on his throne, before calmly declaring that a single bowl of delicious stew ended the entire conflict, explaining that while military strength and political charisma are great for building a nation, people will never truly follow a leader unless their most basic needs are met, proving that 3 delicious, filling meals a day are what truly enrich the human heart, revealing how a simple bowl of soup managed to stop the fighting, sharing a profound lesson that his dearest friend taught him from the bottom of his heart. This is the epic story of a legendary king and his 9 heroic companions. Meanwhile, a fierce battle suddenly erupts across the grassy hills of the Rienbel region, as the victorious soldiers loudly cheer after successfully crushing the enemy's main force. This enemy forces completely break down and scramble to retreat in absolute panic, prompting our blonde commander to order a full pursuit to wipe them out, as the unstoppable cavalry charges forward to secure an overwhelming victory on the battlefield. While back at the camp, Shuri hears the triumphant cheers of the returning soldiers. This wounded but incredibly happy fighters march back, eager to celebrate their success, loudly thanking our young chef because his legendary stew gave them unmatched battlefield morale, leaving Shuri to freeze in absolute terror as he looks up at his returning allies, who are all standing there completely covered head to toe in terrifying splatters of dark blood, causing the squeamish modern kid to instantly turn pale and nearly pass out. To understand how he ended up here, let us reintroduce our boy Azuma Shuri, who got suddenly transported to this fantasy world and became the squad's official cook, serving up delicious meals as the mercenary band finally takes a well-deserved break, prompting Gangrave to treat him to a private feast to show his deep appreciation. However, the commander admits he is slightly worried about bringing him into the nearby town, fearing that Shuri's complete lack of local common sense will make people highly suspicious, which forces the nervous teenager to finally speak up and correct a major misunderstanding. Realizing that keeping his host in the dark about his origin feels totally wrong, he takes a deep breath and explains that he is not from the outer seas, courageously confessing that he does not even belong to this world in the first place. Knocking over Gangrave's drink in sheer shock as the commander stares at him in disbelief, Shuri nervously explains his situation, hoping the commander will understand his bizarre story. But Gangrave suddenly slams the table and asks if he came from the legendary Kamakura, leaving our young chef completely baffled by this mysterious and highly dramatic name, which refers to a mythical land of gods spoken of in ancient continental legends, where people with extraordinary knowledge or strange abilities are said to suddenly appear from, as locals believe these otherworldly visitors are chosen messengers sent directly by the gods, prompting the commander to explain that Shuri's modern background fits this myth perfectly. And it turns out that even the concept of magic comes from this legendary place, since the great sage who first introduced magic to their world was a Kamakura native, making our boy nod along as he slowly processes this fascinating piece of history. Suddenly, his eyes go wide as the realization about magic finally registers in his brain, causing him to scream in absolute shock upon learning that actual magic exists here, instantly imagining a classic fantasy world filled with powerful wizards and terrifying dragons, getting super excited because he thinks he might possess some secret, overpowered magical talent, only for Gangrave to casually reveal that Shuri has absolutely zero magical aptitude whatsoever, completely crushing the poor kid's dreams and leaving him slumped over in deep disappointment, though the commander quickly reassures him that his legendary cooking skills are more than enough, before shifting back to a serious tone to warn him about a dangerous organization, sending a shiver down his spine as he wonders who could possibly target him. While pointing toward the temple, a powerful religious nation that actively hunts down otherworldly visitors, Shuri points to himself, realizing his otherworldly origin makes him a prime target for the temple, which means he could easily be executed as a highly dangerous individual if he gets caught. But Gangrave quickly reassures him that keeping his advanced knowledge a secret will keep him safe, advising the nervous kid to simply lie low and work as their camp cook for now. Leaving our young chef completely stunned by the commander's incredible kindness and understanding, as the giant mercenary leader offers him a warm, reassuring smile to ease his worries. Shuri happily smiles back, promising to do everything he can to repay them for saving him. Since the kid cannot safely visit the nearby town, Gangrave asks what he wants instead, prompting our boy to stroke his chin in deep thought while looking around the tent. Later that evening, Shuri is suddenly approached by Asagi, the squad's beautiful special ops leader, who playfully calls out his name, instantly catching the young chef completely off guard. He politely greets her, remembering that she is actually Gangrave's childhood friend and close ally. But his eyes suddenly drop to her incredibly revealing outfit, making him blush instantly. Noticing his intense embarrassment, the mischievous woman teasingly pulls her collar to offer a better view, causing our pure-hearted boy to frantically wave his hands and beg her to stop teasing him, only for Asagi to smirk playfully and ask if he prefers a different body type, prompting Shuri to puff out his cheeks in annoyance, demanding she stop being so weird. She giggles softly, finding it absolutely hilarious to mess with such an innocent and pure kid, before she finally points him in the right direction to find their resident genius companion. Leading our young chef straight toward the quiet tent where Laurel is currently staying, Shuri politely steps inside the tent and greets Laurel, hoping she can help him out, who is casually relaxing in her messy workshop surrounded by books and strange tools, admitting that Gangrave already filled her in on the young chef's situation, prompting our boy to eagerly ask if she can craft some custom cooking utensils. He explains that the standard tools in this world are just too difficult to use, hoping to utilize her advanced magic crafting to reshape materials and add special properties, since Laurel is actually the highly skilled captain of the squad's magic crafting division, making her curiously examine his detailed sketches of a kitchen knife and a frying pan, pointing out that a shallow pan is completely useless for making their usual stews. She also questions why on earth a mercenary squad would ever need a cutting board, forcing Shuri to explain that keeping ingredients clean and portable is absolutely essential, passionately arguing that the current camp gear is completely unfit for proper cooking, remembering with absolute horror how yesterday's cutting board was covered in disgusting black mold, leaving him to shudder in pure disgust at the terrible hygiene of this fantasy world. Seeing his intense passion, Laurel holds up the sketches with a mischievous little glint, letting a smug, confident smirk spread across her face as she makes a decision, declaring that she is suddenly super motivated to bring his modern designs to life, which instantly makes our young chef light up with pure excitement and hope. She tells him she will start right now, instantly scrambling up her shelves, slamming down raw wood and metal ore to begin crafting his legendary new kitchen. Shuri watches in curiosity as Laurel prepares the raw wood and metal ore, and she confidently declares that she will start by crafting a proper kitchen knife, instantly channeling her magic to make the solid metal ore melt like soft clay, leaving our young chef completely horrified by this bizarre display of otherworldly power. He wonders if she just possesses insane physical strength before remembering magic is real, as Laurel explains how she infuses magic to easily reshape and harden the metal, prompting Shuri to ask if magic is the only thing that determines its durability, before casually mentioning how his world uses carbon and heat to remove metal impurities. This completely blows Laurel's mind, causing her to freeze in absolute shock, as she slowly turns around to ask him what he could possibly mean, demanding a thorough explanation of this revolutionary concept he just casually dropped. So Shuri nervously explains that raw metal is naturally full of unwanted elements, which requires extreme heat to separate materials based on their different melting points, making the genius crafter ponder the brilliant logic of using temperature to refine ore. While our boy continues to share basic scientific knowledge from his modern world, Laurel listens with absolute fascination, completely captivated by these advanced metallurgy concepts, muttering to herself about carbon dioxide and chemical reactions as she processes everything, before offering a bright smile and admitting that his explanation was incredibly interesting, looking down at the raw metal ore with a completely new scientific perspective, as she proudly holds it up and reassures him they have high-quality iron. Laurel stares at the iron ore, realizing that the continent's current magic crafting is still pretty primitive, so she decides to manually extract all the impurities right then and there, channeling her magic with absolute focus as Shuri watches her in complete awe, as she literally needs the glowing molten metal like soft dough to squeeze out the waste, leaving our young chef completely stunned as he watches the dark impurities drip away, before she remembers his advice and begins chanting to infuse carbon directly into the mix, resulting in a flawless, incredibly shiny metal ingot that looks absolutely perfect for crafting. Shuri is completely blown away, praising her for such a beautiful and professional finish, which instantly makes the smug little genius puff out her cheeks with pride, letting a warm, happy smile spread across her face after receiving such high praise, because there is absolutely no doubt that Laurel is a certified crafting prodigy, prompting our boy to smile back, feeling incredibly lucky to have her help, as he hands over the rest of his detailed blueprints to start the real work. And after spending several hours of intense crafting inside the quiet camp tent, they finally finish a gorgeous new frying pan, a sharp knife, and a clean cutting board, leaving poor Laurel completely exhausted and face-planted on the table from all the hard work. But Shuri immediately picks up the knife and notes that it feels slightly off, carefully inspecting the blade's precise angle while the tired crafter groans in absolute disbelief, pointing out a tiny warp in the cutting board that needs to be fixed. Before politely asking if she can adjust everything just a little bit more, Shuri asks Laurel what kind of magic items she usually crafts in her workshop, and the energetic genius instantly lights up, absolutely thrilled that he finally asked, proudly explaining that her entire life revolves around inventing bizarre new magic tools, before showing off a special paper designed to transmit voice messages anywhere. Though she admits it is still in development and currently just acts as a megaphone, next presenting a fire-starting card that ignites when infused with a user's magic, which is completely useless to our boy since he has zero magical power. She then presents a flying board that unfortunately only floats a few inches, prompting Shuri to inspect the fire card closely as a new question pops up, asking her about the strange, stylized symbol drawn right in the center. As Laurel explains, it is a magic script painted with crushed magic crystals, special minerals that naturally absorb and store the magical energy floating in the air, allowing magic crafters to reshape objects by painting these powerful symbols on them. Curious about the limitations, Shuri asks why she only writes one symbol per item, making her explain that combining multiple scripts usually causes the magic to run wild. But our clever chef wonders if the issue is just simultaneous activation, suggesting she could write a third stabilizing script to balance the other two, comparing the concept to modern electronic circuit boards that use switches to manage functions, instantly stunning the genius crafter as she suddenly grabs his shoulder, looking at him with absolute awe and declaring that Shuri might actually be a genius. Laurel ponders Shuri's suggestion, realizing a stabilizing script could prevent the magic from running wild. But she quickly worries that a single sheet of paper is simply too small to fit everything, prompting our clever young chef to casually suggest simply layering multiple sheets of paper together. This simple suggestion hits the genius crafter like a literal bolt of lightning, as she points directly at him with a massive, ecstatic grin on her face. She starts spinning around the tent in pure joy, explaining how layered paper can safely hold multiple functions, absolutely kicking herself for never realizing such an incredibly simple concept before, while Shuri just watches her with a sweat drop, wondering if it is really that big of a deal. Suddenly, Laurel calls out his name with intense fire in her eyes, declaring that they are about to start a brand new technological revolution right here, leaving our poor boy wondering what on earth she expects from someone with zero engineering knowledge. Still, if they are actually making a revolution, he realizes there is one specific thing he needs, asking the excited genius if she can help him craft a portable modern cooking stove. He immediately pulls out some blank scrolls to start drawing up the detailed blueprints, and they spend the next few hours designing a stove with heat control, waterproofing, and safety features, finally finishing the complex sketches as night falls over the quiet mercenary camp. Laurel stares at the final designs in deep thought, absolutely amazed by the sheer number of brilliant ideas, prompting Shuri to suggest they finally take a break for dinner and finish up tomorrow, only for the hyperactive genius to instantly reject his proposal with a loud shout. She passionately explains that her brain is running at full speed and stopping now would ruin their momentum. Laurel places her hand on the blueprints, determined to start crafting the stove right away, which leaves our young chef completely amazed by her sudden burst of creative energy, prompting Shuri to roll up his sleeves and promise to help her until the very end. They immediately begin working together to bring his modern cooking stove design to life, as Laurel grinds magic crystals and channels her power to draw the complex scripts, focusing all her concentration on the delicate brushwork required for the final details, until she proudly presents a wooden board featuring two perfectly drawn magic circles, before instantly collapsing face-first onto the table from absolute magical exhaustion, leaving Shuri to look at his tired friend with a warm, incredibly grateful smile. He gently tells her to get some rest while he prepares a delicious meal, happily walking out of the tent with his brand new set of custom kitchen gear, only to find a surprising variety of fresh ingredients and liquid seasonings waiting outside, which prompts him to take a quick taste test of the mysterious dark sauces, realizing in absolute shock that they are actually soy sauce, mirin, and sake. This sudden discovery reminds him of rumors about a legendary village of the gods, making him wonder if other people from his modern world have been summoned here. But he quickly shakes the thought away to focus on cooking for his exhausted friend. Placing his new frying pan onto the wooden board, he prepares to test the stove, which instantly ignites with a perfectly controlled, clean, magical flame underneath the metal, allowing our young chef to happily toss chopped onions and butter to begin his masterpiece. Shuri cooks the chopped onions until they are translucent and then takes them off the heat, mixing them with minced beef, pork, eggs, salt, and pepper once they cool down. He kneads the mixture thoroughly until it gets nice and sticky before shaping it, tossing the patty back and forth between his hands to squeeze out any trapped air. Next, he heats up some oil in his brand new frying pan to get it ready, gently placing the meat patty inside as it starts to sizzle beautifully on the stove, before covering the pan with a wooden lid to let it steam on low heat, flipping it over once it gets a nice sear to cook the other side. After removing the patty, he uses the leftover meat juices to fry up some garlic, stirring in minced onions before simmering everything with soy sauce, sake, and mirin, creating a rich, savory glaze that he pours directly over the juicy cooked patty, resulting in a gorgeous Salisbury steak complete with garlic chips and delicious side veggies. Shuri proudly carries the plate over to Laurel, who is still half asleep at the table, happily offering her the very first taste of his brand new culinary creation. As she picks up her utensils and stares down at the steaming hot meal, only to suddenly freeze up with a look of pure hesitation on her face, quietly admitting to our young chef that she is actually not a fan of meat, leaving Shuri completely dumbfounded as he asks her what exactly she dislikes about it. So she sniffs the plate and explains that the strong smell usually bothers her, prompting our clever chef to smile and confidently reassure her that this dish is different. Shuri explains that the special garlic and soy sauce glaze completely masks any strong meat odors, and as she cuts into the patty, an absolute waterfall of savory juices bursts out, making the hesitant little genius stare at the steaming bite with wide, nervous eyes, before she finally takes the plunge and pops the savory meat directly into her mouth. Slowly chewing, her eyes widen as the rich flavors instantly explode across her taste buds, and she gulps it down in complete silence while processing the mind-blowing taste, instantly shouting that it is absolutely delicious with a massive, sparkling grin on her face, as she eagerly shoves another massive piece of the juicy steak into her mouth. This incredible dish completely shatters her old hatred of meat with every single bite, which brings a warm, satisfied smile to our young chef's face as he watches, feeling incredibly proud that his cooking could help his friend overcome her picky eating habits, until she suddenly thrusts her empty plate forward and loudly demands a second helping. Shuri chuckles and warns her that she will have to wait a bit for another, but the hyperactive crafter instantly yells that she is more than happy to wait, leaving our boy slightly stunned by just how much she loves his modern cooking. Realizing he might end up making these burgers non-stop until the rest of the crew returns, to mix things up, he happily serves her more while planning to make tofu burgers next, as Laurel proudly crosses her arms, completely confident in her status as a genius. And even though she is currently unknown, she is destined to rewrite history, because her legendary talent for magic crafting is about to change this entire world forever. We start with a quick breakdown of how magic works in this fantasy world, where regular magic creates things from nothing while magic crafting reshapes existing items, meaning standard spells can easily summon a blazing fire out of thin air, but crafters absolutely need physical objects like crystals to channel their power. Although Laurel originally wanted standard magic, she quickly realized crafting suited her much better, spending her days glued to her desk researching new technologies through trial and error, which made her daily life incredibly fun and fulfilling as an inventor. Even if the mercenary leader Gangrave was constantly stressing behind the scenes, she occasionally helps the squad as a combat engineer to set up defensive camps, but her expensive research bills are a massive headache for the poor leader, especially since he has to manage all the squad's finances completely on his own. Feeling guilty that her bizarre inventions are not quite ready for practical use, still, she desperately wants to help everyone and hates feeling so useless, which is why she is completely shocked when Gangrave mentions crafting cooking gear, as he explains that their new chef needs tools from his distant hometown, referring to our young boy Shuri who recently joined them as the official cook. His modern dishes are easily the most delicious meals any of them have ever tasted. But the shy genius crafter is still a bit hesitant to approach him, finding his strange appearance and god-tier cooking skills a little too intimidating, prompting Gangrave to gently tease her and tell her to lose the grumpy face. Gangrave suggests that talking to the new chef might actually be pretty fun, and as the leader walks away, the young crafter asks what he means, prompting Gangrave to simply smile and tell her she will understand once they talk, leaving the confused girl completely unsure of what her boss is trying to say. However, she is about to find out the true meaning of his words very soon, since she originally felt that making simple kitchen tools was far beneath her talents. But looking closely at Shuri's detailed blueprints completely changes her mind, revealing revolutionary tool designs and cooking concepts that she has never seen before. This young chef's absolute obsession with crafting the perfect gear proves he is a true artisan, making Laurel realize that Gangrave was totally right about how interesting Shuri is, with their conversation quickly going way beyond just designing basic kitchen utensils. As Shuri casually explains how people in his world mix carbon into metal, he describes heating the materials to remove impurities and strengthen the final product, which is highly guarded knowledge usually kept secret by professional blacksmiths, causing the shocked crafter to instantly demand a full explanation of this technique, sending our poor chef into a sweat as he realizes he just leaked top-secret information. Laurel was even banned from workshops in the past for trying to spy on blacksmiths, yet here is this random cook casually dropping mind-blowing scientific facts to her. So she immediately starts grilling him about what metal is actually made of, leading Shuri to introduce her to the wild concepts of atoms and molecules. Shuri explains that everything in the world is made of tiny particles called atoms, which absolutely blows Lurel's mind as she struggles to process this revolutionary concept, asking endless questions about what water, iron, and even the air are made of, making her realize that all her previous scientific knowledge was basically just child's play. She looks at the metal in her hand, realizing their current technology is incredibly primitive, meaning she needs to completely remove all the impurities to make the perfect material, channeling her magic power to purify the metal using the concepts Shuri just shared, believing that she can successfully mix in carbon to create an incredibly strong alloy. This reminds her of a famous quote left behind by a legendary magic crafter, as she successfully creates a flawless, shiny metal ingot unlike anything she has ever seen, prompting Shuri to happily praise her work while holding his brand new pan and knife, though she secretly complains about how insanely high our young chef's technical standards are. Yet she cannot help but admire his absolute refusal to compromise on his culinary tools. Realizing that Shuri is a true genius who completely surpasses her in creative imagination, staring at him with a newfound sense of deep respect and quiet admiration, until they finally finish their exhausting work and step outside the quiet camp tents. Their hard work results in a beautifully drawn, highly advanced magic stove circle, which was only possible because Shuri kept feeding her brilliant ideas to work with, leaving the exhausted little genius to sleep peacefully with a deeply satisfied smile. Because she has officially crafted her very first masterpiece using her own two hands, Shuri happily promises to cook up some legendary dishes using her newly crafted kitchen tools, which makes our smug little crafter puff out her chest with absolute pride, realizing her inventions will finally be used for peaceful daily life instead of war. After spending her entire life feeling like an outcast obsessed with useless research, but she quickly corrects herself as she looks back at her young friend, knowing that Shuri is the one who gave her this incredible new purpose, filling her heart with a deep sense of gratitude she never expected to feel, as he proudly presents her with a steaming, freshly cooked Salisbury steak. Taking a hesitant bite, she lets the savory flavors wash over her tongue, instantly blowing her mind as she screams about how insanely delicious it is, completely shocked that there is absolutely zero gamey smell or tough gristle, leaving her to savor the rich, juicy waterfall of flavor in pure bliss. This secret lies in the incredible glaze poured over the perfectly seared meat, utilizing a variety of strange spices and seasonings that Gangrave previously bought, transforming that weirdly pungent soy sauce into a culinary masterpiece in Shuri's hands. Proving that his cooking skills go way beyond just making rare or exotic meals, she realizes that combining simple ingredients in perfect ratios is a true form of creation, happily stuffing her face while our young chef watches with a satisfied smile, before he asks if she can craft a few more specialized kitchen utensils, prompting the genius crafter to give a confident thumbs up for more tasty food. Laurel stares at Shuri in silence, processing the incredible meal she just finished, before she suddenly asks how he manages to come up with so many amazing ideas, catching our young chef completely off guard as he holds the empty plates, prompting him to humbly admit that he actually used to fail constantly in the beginning. This confession completely shocks the little crafter, who cannot believe such a talented cook ever struggled, as Shuri recalls his early days of eating his own terrible, burnt cooking disasters, explaining that his father was an incredibly strict chef who never tolerated any mistakes, which drove our boy to train desperately every single day to earn his father's respect. He explains that culinary imagination does not just magically appear overnight without constant trial and error, requiring a chef to constantly think of new ways to make their dishes taste even better, a simple philosophy of hard work that he proudly carries with him every single day. Leaving Laurel completely mesmerized by his deep dedication to constantly improving his craft, she looks back at her own past, remembering how proudly she showed off her inventions, realizing that most of her creations were actually completely impractical and useless, only serving to pile up in her workshop as expensive, unfinished junk that nobody could use, which constantly stressed out poor Gangrave as he struggled to pay her massive research bills. This realization hits her incredibly hard as she looks down at her hands in deep thought, understanding that she was always too satisfied with just creating something brand new, rather than focusing on improving what already existed to make it truly useful. Realizing she had completely stopped growing because she never looked at what lay ahead. Feeling completely down, she wallows in guilt over her past failures and useless inventions. But Shuri suddenly interrupts her thoughts to ask about a strange device lying nearby, pointing directly at a flat, hovering board that she had previously written off as a complete failure, explaining how it could easily transport heavy luggage without any risk of damaging the cargo, leaving the young crafter completely frozen in shock as his words sink in, because she cannot believe how easily this kid solved a problem that stumped her for years. Realizing she was too focused on making a flying board for people to ride, while Shuri saw its true potential as a revolutionary shock absorber for heavy transport. Staring at him with soft eyes, she quietly thanks him for opening her mind, which immediately sends our poor chef into a state of utter and hilarious confusion, as she explains that he gave real meaning to a tool she considered a total waste, showing her that even failed experiments can have a beautiful purpose in this world. Looking at her box of old junk, she vows to find uses for everything she makes, taking her very first step toward becoming a crafter who designs things to help others, determined to create tools that will genuinely make people's daily lives much easier. Which brings us to the next day where Gangrave asks what she wants from him. Standing proudly by his side, she looks ready to show off her latest creation, confidently telling her boss that she has a brand new invention for him to inspect, prompting the exhausted leader to sigh and ask if it is just another unfinished prototype. But she proudly puffs her chest and declares that this one is officially complete. Laurel proudly holds out a small, dark, round stone, claiming she actually made two brand new items, prompting a very skeptical Gangrave to ask what a tiny little pebble is supposed to do. But the smug little crafter simply tells her boss to keep his eyes glued to the field, before she winds up her arm and chucks the mysterious black stone far into the distance, triggering a massive earth-shattering explosion that completely obliterates the quiet landscape in a flash of smoke, leaving the poor guild leader standing there with his jaw practically dropping straight to the floor, as Laurel casually explains that this little masterpiece is her newly designed bursting stone. Once the user chants the activation keyword, a 3-second countdown begins before it detonates, sending Gangrave into a panic as he realizes how insanely dangerous this thing is to carry around. But she quickly reassures him that she built in some incredibly advanced safety features, starting with a lock that prevents activation unless the stone is actively held in someone's hand, meaning the countdown will only trigger once the weapon is actually thrown away from the user, and it will refuse to detonate if it detects the thrower is still standing too close. Revealing that she actually developed these brilliant safety ideas after consulting with our young chef Shuri, Gangrave is completely blown away, admitting he has never heard of such revolutionary magic runes before, as Laurel proudly pulls out her second invention, a cubic timed ignition stone, pointing her finger toward a large rock sitting peacefully in the middle of the open field, confidently declaring that the target area will burst into flames in exactly 5 seconds. This two of them watch in silence as the mental countdown ticks down to 1, before a massive pillar of fire suddenly erupts, proving her new tools are absolutely flawless. Gangrave stands completely frozen in shock, staring at the smug little genius standing right beside him, pointing out that she is supposed to be a magic crafter who cannot use actual magic, as she holds up her second invention, explaining it can delay its activation for up to 2 hours, before burning for 10 seconds and leaving absolutely zero trace of evidence behind in the crater. This makes the guild leader realize its incredible potential for covert operations, promising to fund her research. He tells her to keep up the good work and push her research even further, while staring at the massive crater and wondering when she managed to develop such a weapon, only for her to casually reply that she literally just finished making it a moment ago. Gangrave immediately accuses her of lying, arguing that finding so many multi-effect runes takes years, but she simply winks and tells him to take a much closer look at the stone. Confused, the guild leader grabs the small cube to inspect its surface, gasping in horror when he sees a ridiculous number of magic runes crammed together, which was only possible because she applied the concept of modern electrical circuit boards from Shuri, organizing the magic flow into a stable program with touch-activated switches and voice-activated commands. This brilliant breakthrough causes Gangrave to burst into a fit of loud, joyful laughter, praising her as an absolute genius who has completely revolutionized the world of magic crafting, though Laurel quietly reflects on his praise, knowing she is not actually a genius, because the true genius is Shuri, whose incredible ideas she merely borrowed to guide her hands. She realizes that only amateurs get drunk on their own talent and neglect their training, but she is determined to change her path and grow into a truly great crafter. Laurel realizes she needs to study the wisdom of those who came before her, pushing herself to work twice as hard to one day surpass Shuri's incredible creativity, which is how Laurel Branch eventually became known as a legendary hero of future civilizations, leaving behind revolutionary daily tools like the modern magic stove that everyone still uses today, along with early communication devices and magic-powered cars that laid the groundwork for modern society, earning her the legendary title of the Mother of Invention for her era-defining technology, because even during times of war, she focused on creating appliances that made life easier. Despite her massive success, she actually turned down the prestigious role of Chief Magic Engineer, choosing instead to open her own private academy to pass down her knowledge to others, eventually growing into the massive branch Magic Engineering Academy we see in the present day. Surprisingly, this prestigious school barely has any departments dedicated to researching weapons of war, reflecting Laurel's deep belief that technology should never be used to fuel endless conflict, warning that advanced weapons would only turn the continent into a scorched, lifeless wasteland. And her beautiful philosophy of peace continues to inspire generations of young students today. At the very heart of all her incredible, life-changing inventions was a simple core belief, establishing the words creative ingenuity as the official guiding spirit of the entire academy. Interestingly, historical records also note that she was an absolute fanatic for Salisbury steak, happily stuffing her face with the delicious meal that first changed her perspective on life. Though rumors say her obsession with eating them was slightly out of control. But now, it is finally time to talk about the legendary chef himself, Shuri Azuma. Our young chef Shuri actually has a very interesting history with his childhood friend Yamagishi, who has been walking to school with him since they were just little kids, and remained his absolute best friend all the way through their high school graduation. Their legendary friendship first started back when they were in the 3rd grade, when Yamagishi looked over at Shuri's desk and nearly threw up from sheer shock, because Shuri's lunchbox was filled with a completely black, gooey, burnt disaster. This terrible cooking was a weekly occurrence, causing poor Shuri to slowly wither away, prompting Yamagishi to finally speak up and ask if his mother was okay, only for Shuri to stare back at him with completely dead, hollow eyes. Politely explaining that the terrible, burnt mess was actually his own failed creation. Confused by his polite tone, Yamagishi asked if he had ever tried reading a cookbook, which completely caught the young boy off guard, leaving him frozen in shock, because out of all the things Yamagishi wanted to say about that terrible meal, this was the one simple question that would completely awaken Shuri's hidden potential. He excitedly thanked his classmate, realizing that reading a cookbook was the ultimate solution, promising to share his future meals with Yamagishi if they actually turned out well. And within just 2 months, his lunch boxes transformed into absolute culinary masterpieces. Yamagishi became deeply fascinated by Shuri as they continued to grow closer over the years, but the more time they spent together, the more he realized something hilarious. Because outside of his god-tier cooking, Shuri was completely average at sports and academics. Yamagishi is completely shocked to hear that his weird friend Shuri has gone missing since morning, leading him to frantically search the school until he runs into a very confused chef, who asks if the strange kid currently occupying his professional kitchen belongs to him, revealing our young cooking fanatic humming happily while staring at the massive stoves, which gets him a massive scolding and makes Yamagishi realize his friend is definitely not normal. Even at a theme park, Shuri has no idea what he is supposed to do there, forcing his loyal best friend to basically babysit him all the way into middle school, where Shuri finally starts acting like a regular human being and blends in with others, before the inseparable duo eventually enrolls in a high school close to their hometown. This is where our boy's legendary culinary skills finally start getting him some serious attention, especially when their teacher announces they will be running a simple yakisoba stall for the festival, prompting Shuri to immediately volunteer to upgrade the dish into a gourmet Chinese-style gravy noodle, while his unmotivated classmates watch him happily carry all the heavy ingredients and equipment alone. He confidently declares that any food sold to customers must be an absolute masterpiece, immediately taking charge of the kitchen and directing his classmates on how to prep the noodles, gathering a massive pile of fresh pork, shrimp, vegetables, and traditional Chinese seasonings, before slicing the meat and vegetables into perfect, bite-sized portions with expert precision. Next, he carefully deveins the fresh shrimp and removes any excess moisture, stir-frying the pork and veggies before coating the shrimp in starch to fry them separately, and finally pouring in a rich broth of oyster sauce and sake to simmer everything together, adding starch slurry to thicken the sauce and finishing it off with fragrant sesame oil, before pouring the rich, glossy gravy over the crispy noodles to complete his legendary pancake yakisoba, which immediately blows the festival customers away with its restaurant-quality taste and incredibly deep flavors, even covering up his classmates' messy noodle frying skills to make the dish an absolute masterpiece, turning their simple school festival food stall into a massive, record-breaking hit that easily goes down as the most successful project in the entire school's history. Shuri continues this legendary streak by successfully running food stalls 2 more times before graduation, while his loyal best friend Yamagishi stays right by his side through all 3 years, happily acting as the ultimate taste tester for every single one of Shuri's wild culinary experiments. Though Yamagishi actually has a pretty mysterious and chaotic side of his own, like the time he went on a solo trip abroad and completely vanished for weeks, only to casually return the day before school started, claiming he was busy gambling overseas, leaving Shuri to wonder about his friend's insane card tricks without asking too many questions. Fast forward to graduation night, the two friends reflect on how quickly their school days passed, as Shuri packs up his bedroom while chatting on the phone with his best buddy, who smiles warmly and asks if he is finally ready to head off to Tokyo, pointing out that Shuri will probably stay exactly the same no matter where he goes, which gets a soft chuckle from our chef, who admits he prefers staying true to himself, knowing his upcoming culinary apprenticeship will be brutal, but promising to never give up on his dream, as Yamagishi laughs, reminding him that he is the crazy guy who would grow soybeans just to make miso. Shuri sheepishly admits on the phone that he actually failed a lot during his early attempts, but Yamagishi points out that his homemade miso still tasted way better than anything from a store, causing our young chef to smile warmly as he listens to his best friend's encouraging words. Before yawning and mentioning that he needs to get some sleep since his big journey starts tomorrow, Yamagishi goes completely silent on the other end of the line, holding his phone tightly, as he looks down at his packed bag and hesitates to say what is on his mind, leaving Shuri waiting in confusion for his friend to finish whatever he was about to say. Ultimately, Yamagishi brushes it off and simply tells him that they will meet again in 2 years, ending their final conversation with a simple goodbye that marks the end of an era. However, those 2 years would pass without the two best friends ever crossing paths again, bringing a sudden and mysterious end to Shuri's ordinary life on Earth as he knew it, because his destiny was about to take him to a completely different world beyond his wildest dreams, where we find our boy happily serving delicious hot meals to a group of hungry fantasy adventurers. This brings up the age-old question of whether true culinary genius is born or made, especially since Shuri used to struggle endlessly in his kitchen, constantly failing to get things right, leaving him completely lost and wondering how to improve his skills despite working himself to exhaustion. While reflecting on the idea that talent is natural, but effort is something you build yourself, he remembers feeling completely overwhelmed by these heavy thoughts during his early days of training. Recalling how his father's philosophical words about hard work never quite made sense to him, but now he is ready to introduce himself to this new world as the legendary chef Shuri. Shuri has been living on the Sabula continent for about a month now, and while he managed to find familiar Japanese seasonings like soy sauce and mirin, his search for a way back to Earth has turned up absolutely nothing. Though he learned these rare seasonings were originally developed by someone from Kamakura centuries ago, but details beyond that legendary creator's identity remain a complete and frustrating mystery. Today, the mercenary group has set up camp near a coastal forest for a battle, specifically fighting over the local salt rights since salt is an absolute necessity for cooking, especially since Lurel's extreme Salisbury steak obsession means running out of salt would be disastrous. Luckily, she performed incredibly well in the last battle and brought back massive rewards, prompting Shuri to hope Gangrave might finally hire some extra kitchen help for him soon. Looking around the bustling mercenary camp, our young chef gets straight to work, stirring a massive pot of hot, bubbling soup to feed the hungry soldiers, before taking a quick sip from his ladle to check the seasoning, only to suddenly freeze in place as he spots a strange figure nearby. Watching a mysterious cloaked person quietly slip away into the shadows of the dark forest, Shuri quickly turns to a nearby girl and asks if she saw that person, which completely startles her, causing her to drop a massive stack of wooden plates, leaving her frantically apologizing while Shuri tries to assure her that everything is fine, as we learn that this incredibly clumsy and flustered girl is named Kaguya, who surprisingly serves as the highly capable captain of the mercenary group's intelligence unit. Kaguya actually has a fascinating past as a combat priestess from a holy temple, making her a remarkably polite, graceful, and elegant lady in Shuri's eyes, which is a total lifesaver since she keeps him safe from Asaga's chaotic charms. As she quickly bends down to gather the dropped plates from the ground, a massive armored warrior suddenly steps up to help her clean up the mess. Kneeling down with surprising gentleness to pick up every single wooden plate, this towering giant currently helping them pick up plates is none other than Orthros, this highly respected commander who leads the mercenary group's 2nd Infantry Unit, boasting an incredibly massive build that makes him the ultimate symbol of strength, though he also happens to be a quiet warrior of absolutely zero words. Instead of speaking, he prefers to let his heroic actions do all the talking, prompting Kaguya to turn back to Shuri and ask what he originally wanted, which reminds our young chef to point toward the dark, quiet forest nearby, explaining that he just saw a mysterious shadow slip away into the trees. Kaguya and Orthros share a silent look of instant realization upon hearing this, as she sighs wearily and asks if it is Kuga out there again, leaving Shuri completely puzzled by her oddly casual reaction to this mysterious intruder. She explains that their white-haired companion always trains alone when his swordplay feels off, using intense solo practice as his ultimate way to clear his troubled mind, which makes Shuri nod in understanding as he watches the dedicated warrior from afar. Back at the camp, the hungry mercenaries are finally winding down after a long day of battle, and a satisfied grunt echoes through the tents as the soldiers dig into their dinner, which happens to be a luxurious seafood stew packed with fresh, juicy shrimp and vegetables. Since they are near a coastal town, everyone is absolutely thrilled to enjoy such rare delicacies, while Shuri happily pours some drinks and asks the commander how he likes the meal, prompting Gangrave to smile warmly and declare that our boy can make literally anything taste legendary, even though seafood is usually considered an incredibly expensive luxury in this fantasy world. Mainly because they have absolutely no way to preserve the fresh catch for very long, making Shuri quietly marvel at how advanced modern Earth shipping and refrigeration technology really was. Shuri then decides to bring up the mysterious white-haired warrior he saw sneaking into the forest, which immediately catches the commander's attention and makes him pause for a brief moment, before he sighs deeply, realizing that his stubborn companion is probably out there training again, leading our kind-hearted chef to suggest that maybe they should go check on him and help. But Gangrave quickly shakes his head, explaining that interfering would actually have the opposite effect, leaving Shuri quite confused as the commander admits he has no right to offer advice, taking a massive gulp of his drink to wash down his complicated feelings about the matter, because the truth is that their white-haired friend possesses an incredibly rare godlike talent, explaining that while his unit has powerful magic users and heavy hitters like the giant Orthros, none of them can even hold a candle to Kuga's absolute mastery of the sword, instantly blowing Shuri's mind as he realizes just how insanely powerful his companion truly is. Shuri wonders if this fantasy world has some kind of legendary magic sword techniques, but Gangrave quickly bursts his bubble by explaining that Kuga's style is actually quite ordinary, pointing out that while famous magic swordsmen exist, Kuga is on a completely different level, which still gets our young chef super excited about the ultimate dream of magic swordsmen, though he is left totally confused about how Kuga fights without any magical powers. Gangrave explains that the white-haired warrior is just a normal human with insane physical abilities, before leaning back to share a wild story about a crazy event from their past. Capturing Shuri's full attention as he prepares to listen to the commander's legendary tale, it turns out Kuga once charged way too far ahead into the enemy's front lines, suddenly finding himself completely surrounded and targeted by hundreds of incoming arrows. A hopeless situation where any normal warrior would have simply accepted their tragic end. Yet Kuga somehow deflected every single arrow without sustaining even a minor scratch. This absolutely blows Shuri's mind, making him ask what kind of manga world they are living in. As he literally visualizes his companion as the overpowered protagonist of a fantasy series, Shuri then wonders how the commander can even keep up with such a monstrously powerful ally, prompting Gangrave to explain that his own photographic memory allows him to counter any move, while their giant companion Orthros relies on his unbelievable brute strength to dominate the battlefield. And Aurelius uses long-range tactics to keep enemies at a safe distance during combat. This commander admits that if they ever fought Kuga in close combat, they would lose instantly, leaving Shuri in awe as Gangrave humbly downplays his own skills as mere memory and tricks. Shuri looks down at the delicious seafood stew and wonders what could possibly be troubling their white-haired friend. But Gangrave honestly admits that even he has absolutely no idea what goes on in Kuga's head, explaining that whenever they talk about swords, the conversation gets way too complicated for normal people to understand, which makes our young chef realize he is witnessing the classic divide between natural genius and hard work. This commander takes another bite and notes that if Kuga is training alone, it is his own battle, though he quickly reassures Shuri that there is absolutely no reason to worry about their companion, because the white-haired swordsman is the type of guy who always finds a way to overcome his limits, prompting a warm smile from Shuri as he notes how much the commander truly trusts his friend. Gangrave simply smiles back in silence, appreciating the deep bond he shares with his powerful ally, before holding out his cup and asking our friendly chef to pour him another drink, despite the commander's reassuring words about letting their companion handle his own troubles. This very next day sees Kuga quietly slipping away into the dense forest once again, leaving Shuri completely unable to shake off his growing anxiety for his quiet friend. As he carries a heavy wooden crate through the camp while lost in deep thought, he remembers his own painful days of struggling in the kitchen, feeling completely helpless and alone, and decides he cannot just stand by and do nothing for someone who is clearly hurting. Stepping directly into the dark woods with a small lantern to search for the swordsman, though the eerie shadows and strange noises of the night quickly make him regret his bravery. Recalling the directions to a nearby clearing, he pushes forward through the thick undergrowth, only to suddenly gasp in shock as he spots something unexpected waiting in the darkness. Shuri peeks through the thick trees with his lantern, completely frozen by what lies ahead, where he finds Kuga standing under a beam of moonlight with his sword raised high, taking a slow, deep breath as he prepares to unleash his next strike, before his eyes lock onto his imaginary target with absolute razor-sharp focus, leaving our young chef completely breathless as he watches from the shadows, as the white-haired swordsman shifts into a flawless, low stance to begin his routine, executing a series of incredibly fast and fluid slashes through the cool night air, which sends powerful shockwaves rippling outward with every single movement of his blade, thrusting his weapon forward with a level of speed that defies human limits, while maintaining a perfectly calm expression throughout this intense, high-speed display, before smoothly bringing his sword back down to complete the breathtaking sequence, standing tall in the quiet clearing like a legendary warrior from a myth, prompting Shuri to quietly marvel at how incredibly beautiful his martial arts form is, realizing this is on a completely different level compared to the regular mercenaries, until Kuga suddenly calls out into the darkness, asking who is hiding there, a subtle smile playing on his lips as he senses a familiar presence, turning around to greet Shuri with a surprisingly warm and friendly expression, which makes our flustered chef quickly bow and apologize for interrupting his training, explaining that he only came out here because he was worried about him, though he cannot help but notice how shockingly handsome the swordsman actually is. Shuri is totally stunned by how pretty the swordsman is, comparing him to a beautiful warrior, while Kuga smiles softly and assumes that the commander was the one who sent him, prompting our young chef to explain that Gangrave actually felt completely powerless to help him, which makes the white-haired warrior chuckle, admitting his personal burdens are indeed way too heavy. He then smoothly slides down onto the grass, resting his long sword beside him, before casually gesturing for Shuri to take a seat right next to him on the ground. Kuga admits he is quite impressed that our young chef managed to track him down out here, confessing that he was so incredibly focused on his training that he lost all environmental awareness, though he believes that opening up to Shuri might actually help clear his troubled mind. As our kind-hearted chef smiles warmly and agrees that sharing his burdens will make him feel lighter, this quiet swordsman decides to finally let his guard down and speak his mind, revealing with a serious expression that he is currently stuck in a massive training slump, leaving Shuri completely speechless at the thought of such a legendary warrior struggling, especially since their companion Readoki has been creating incredibly powerful magic tools for their battles lately. Shuri tilts his head in confusion, wondering if those helpful inventions are not a great thing, But Kuga looks away with a complicated expression, unable to fully accept that reality, staring up at the dark forest canopy as he contemplates the true meaning of strength, while clenching his fist tightly as a wave of deep frustration washes over him. He explains that relying too heavily on external tools over raw human skill is highly dangerous, admitting that his own legendary swordplay simply could not match the raw destruction of those bombs. Kuga explains how seeing everyone rely on those magic stones makes him feel completely obsolete, pushing him to train even harder to become faster and stronger than any weapon. But this constant pressure has only succeeded in making his legendary swordplay feel incredibly dull, leaving Shuri to realize that this is actually a deep psychological hurdle for his friend. Our young chef understands how anxiety and impatience can easily trap someone in a vicious cycle, admitting that as a simple cook who has never fought, he cannot offer sword advice, yet he still desperately wants to find some way to help his troubled companion, remembering his own exhausting days of struggling alone in the kitchen to perfect his craft. Suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes our kind-hearted chef as he looks at the quiet swordsman, prompting a literal light bulb to pop up over his head in a moment of inspiration, which immediately catches Kuga's attention as he looks over with a curious expression, only for Shuri to flash a bright smile and ask if he is feeling hungry. This completely catches the legendary warrior off guard, leaving him utterly speechless and confused. As Shuri cheerfully explains that worrying on an empty stomach only makes things much worse, leaving several massive question marks floating over the bewildered swordsman's head in total confusion, before our boy proudly presents a fully stocked cooking station he dragged into the woods. Kuga can only stare in absolute disbelief that Shuri brought all this gear out here, while our friendly chef happily announces they are making a delicious late-night mackerel meal. Though the swordsman wonders if eating such an expensive luxury is really a good idea, prompting Shuri to wink and promise that the commander would never begrudge a hardworking friend. Shuri smiles confidently as he prepares to show off his ultimate culinary skills, presenting some fresh mackerel alongside his homemade tartar sauce and aromatic Sancho pepper, which he proudly crafted using eggs, onions, vinegar, and a touch of fresh parsley. Though the real challenge was making the perfect mayonnaise from scratch using egg yolks, requiring absolute patience and precise technique to slowly incorporate the oil without ruining it. Now our young chef is ready to prove that all this intense preparation was totally worth it, prompting Kuga to look over and ask what he plans to do with the fish. Shuri cheerfully explains that he is going to make a delicious deep-fried dish, which immediately brings a bright smile to the swordsman's face since he absolutely loves fried food. Our boy grabs his trusty kitchen knife with absolute confidence to begin the preparation, catching Kuga's undivided attention as the legendary warrior watches his precise movements, slicing the mackerel with incredible speed to fillet it into 3 perfect, clean pieces, before carefully plucking out every single tiny bone to ensure the ultimate dining experience. Next, he seasons the fresh fillets with a pinch of salt and some fresh ginger juice, before pulling out a highly advanced portable cooler box that Rearoll custom made for him, remembering how much effort the young inventor put into crafting this magical cooling device, which actually cost our poor chef a mountain of homemade hamburgers as payment. He gently places the seasoned mackerel fillets onto a tray inside the magical cooler, before firmly shutting the lid to let the ingredients chill and absorb the flavors, leaving Kuga slightly confused until Shuri explains that letting the fish rest is absolutely essential. Kuga looks surprised as Shuri suddenly pulls out a bottle of alcohol to pass the time, offering his companion a refreshing drink while they wait for the mackerel to finish chilling, which the white-haired swordsman happily accepts, noting that a post-training drink is always truly special, prompting our young chef to curiously ask if he is a true connoisseur of fine alcohol. Though Kuga simply smiles and admits he just enjoys anything that tastes good, Shuri sheepishly scratches his head and confesses that he actually cannot handle his liquor very well, explaining that as a professional cook, he must keep his taste buds sharp and avoid dulling his tongue, yet he still believes that everyone needs to let loose and have some fun once in a while. Catching the quiet warrior completely off guard with this surprisingly mature and thoughtful perspective, as our friendly chef encourages him to take a break and heal his exhausted mind and body. Looking down at the resting sword, Shuri admits he cannot offer any actual martial arts advice, but he genuinely hopes that relaxing for a bit will help clear the swordsman's troubled thoughts, believing that a peaceful mind is the ultimate key to finding the answers he seeks. Before he begins to recall a very important lesson from his own past training days, he remembers a time when he was completely stuck and unable to master a difficult cooking technique, leaving him feeling utterly miserable and defeated as he desperately tried to force his way through, until a booming voice suddenly called out to him in the middle of his despair, revealing it was his old head chef who threw an arm around his shoulder and gave him advice, telling him to drink up, get some sleep, and stop overthinking his problems for a while. Once he actually rested, Shuri realized his stiff movements were just the result of his own anxiety. Shuri recalls how terrible his hangover actually was the next morning after following his chef's advice, but it taught him that forcing things never works when you are completely stuck, as the white-haired swordsman listens quietly to our young chef's heartfelt story, letting out a soft chuckle as he reflects on those comforting words, admitting that he truly believed his own martial arts talent had finally reached its absolute limit, recalling how he recently struggled to defeat massive armored enemies due to their overwhelming physical size, leaving Shuri completely stunned to hear such a legendary warrior speak of his own limitations, knowing deep down that Kuga possesses unmatched skill and never stops pushing himself. Remembering how even the commander once predicted that the young swordsman would soon surpass him, looking over at the quiet clearing where the moonlight shines down on his friend, our young chef finds a sudden surge of determination swelling up inside him, pleading with the swordsman not to dismiss his incredible efforts with such sad words, looking directly into his companion's eyes with a level of absolute sincerity and warmth, telling him that his swordplay tonight was the most beautiful thing he has ever witnessed, insisting that this is not his limit, but merely a temporary wall he must overcome, explaining that from an outsider's perspective, his dedication is nothing short of legendary, declaring that giving up is simply not an option for someone blessed with such rare talent, believing that Kuga's duty is to inspire others and show them what true strength looks like. Leaving the white-haired warrior completely speechless as he absorbs these incredibly passionate words, before a soft smile returns to his face as he quietly contemplates hitting this new wall, Shuri announces that it is finally time to start the cooking process, pulling the perfectly chilled mackerel fillets out of the magical cooler box, carefully washing them with fresh water before thoroughly patting them dry, before preparing to season the fish with salt, pepper, and fresh ginger juice. He squeezes the aromatic ginger juice directly over the fillets to eliminate any fishy odor, while heating up a pot of oil to flash fry some fresh sancho leaves, which he then mixes into breadcrumbs that have been lightly misted with water, dipping the seasoned mackerel into a smooth batter before coating it with the breadcrumbs. He carefully drops the fish into the hot oil to fry it to absolute perfection, before proudly presenting the golden brown fried mackerel topped with his homemade tartar sauce. Kuga stares in absolute awe, admitting he has never seen fried fish look so delicious, as Shuri happily explains that he added a subtle spicy kick just for him, prompting the legendary swordsman to take a massive, crunchy bite of the hot food, chewing quietly for a moment as the incredible flavors wash over his senses, before his face lights up with pure joy at the crispy and fluffy texture. Leaving nothing but an empty plate as they both sigh in complete satisfaction. Rubbing his stomach, Kuga warmly praises Shuri's exceptionally precise and elegant knife skills, which our young chef humbly accepts while admitting he is always incredibly careful, prompting the curious white-haired warrior to ask what exactly he means by that, as Shuri explains that rough handling ruins the flavor, requiring a gentle touch to slice the fish. Kuga repeats Shuri's words about slicing gently, trying to apply the concept to his own swordsmanship. And suddenly, a massive bolt of realization strikes the legendary warrior right out of nowhere, leaving him trembling in shock as he realizes he had been looking at everything completely wrong, realizing that trying to force his way through with raw power is completely impossible for his build, meaning he needs to rely on pure technique and martial arts to build a flawless foundation, which prompts him to suddenly thank our young chef for giving him the ultimate breakthrough, making poor Shuri totally bewildered by how a genius can find answers in the strangest places. Our white-haired warrior excitedly announces that he needs to practice his swordplay one last time before going to sleep, begging his friend to leave him alone so he does not lose this incredible new sensation, prompting our understanding chef to happily accept, heading back to camp as a new day finally begins. As the next morning arrives, Kuga waves with a bright, refreshed smile that relieves all of Shuri's worries. Meanwhile, chaos erupts across the battlefield as massive explosions tear through the enemy lines, throwing the opposing commanders into absolute panic over an unpredicted army of powerful magicians, while the mercenary soldiers cheer wildly for the incredible destructive power of their magic stones. Though seeing everyone rely on these weapons only makes Kuga feel completely silent and left behind, reminding him of his proud role as the captain of the 1st Infantry Unit, where he always charged headfirst into the front lines to defeat his enemies with absolute pride, leading his loyal subordinates who believed their hard physical labor earned them the highest respect, even if the highly paid magic division always seemed to steal the spotlight from them. Yet he still firmly believed that a single sword was all he ever needed to win. Kuga believed his sword was his ultimate partner, but lately things have started to change, starting with the brilliant young inventor Riril, who suddenly unlocked her incredible crafting talents, creating highly destructive explosive stones and timed ignition devices that completely revolutionized their warfare, which made the infantry soldiers absolutely thrilled since they could now blow up enemies with ease. Yet watching his men celebrate only left the proud captain standing in the background, feeling a deep sense of conflict because he simply could not bring himself to rejoice, remembering how he used to charge into battle with absolute pride in his own physical strength, before he began to worry that relying on cheap tricks would make their hard work meaningless. Deep down, he knew that letting his martial spirit fade like that was completely unacceptable, especially since his entire swordplay style originated from his rough childhood days living in the slums, where he had to fight alongside Gangrave just to survive in that incredibly harsh environment, giving him a massive amount of confidence in his blade after surviving so many battles, having constantly faced off against dangerous guards and thugs in brutal life-or-death training matches. To make things even wilder, Gangrave was a rare genius who could match him blow for blow, instantly mastering any complex sword technique after seeing it performed just a single time, But since Gangrave is now the supreme commander, he can no longer fight on the front lines, meaning Kuga wanted to use his own sword to clear the path and fulfill his friend's dream. Unfortunately, his blade had recently grown dull and chipped under the weight of his own anxiety, desperately trying to prove his worth against magic weapons while rushing his training out of pure panic, which only ruined his perfect form and left him struggling against heavily armored opponents. Kuga feels like he has hit a massive wall, staring up a metaphorical staircase of talent. Back at the military camp, a massive argument suddenly breaks out inside one of the tents, where the proud captain grabs his subordinate's arm in absolute anger over their lack of martial spirit. As the sweating soldier desperately explains, they should focus on utilizing explosive stones instead of sword training. Furious, Kuga yells that they are proud infantrymen who must rely on their own muscles and blades. But his men argue that magic weapons are simply safer, more efficient, and guarantee easy victories, leaving the frustrated captain with absolutely nothing left to say as he storms away in disgust, gritting his teeth in silence because he cannot accept this lazy shift in their warrior culture. That night, he slips away into the quiet forest to clear his mind and train alone, determined to regain his sharp edge and rebuild his shattered confidence before the next battle begins. Summoning a glowing, fiery clone of himself through sheer concentration to act as his training partner, which represents his absolute peak form, manifesting as a perfect illusion of his own deadly skills. Facing his ideal self, the young swordsman prepares to push his body past its physical limits, charging forward at blinding speed as both warriors unleash their blades in a deadly dance, clashing with incredible force as sparks fly from their perfectly matched, lightning-fast sword strikes, locking their weapons together in a desperate struggle of raw strength and pure martial technique. Suddenly, a swift blade cuts through the air with terrifying precision and blinding speed, catching Kuga completely off guard as the cold steel stops mere inches from his eyes. Realizing his ideal self has easily bypassed his defense with a flawless, low-sweeping counterattack. Before the fiery illusion fades away, leaving him to contemplate the true depth of his weakness. Gripping his sword tightly, Kuga realizes that his training tonight is still not going well, as his heart remains deeply unsettled and his blade feels completely out of sync, looking down in silence while trying to process the heavy burden weighing on his mind, pondering the real reason why his once flawless swordplay has suddenly grown so dull. His thoughts drift back to his men relying entirely on those powerful explosive stones, but he quickly shakes his head because that excuse is not the real issue, realizing that blaming his men's lack of martial spirit is simply incorrect, since using efficient tools to defeat enemies easily is actually the logical choice. Yet the proud captain is terrified of the day those magic weapons run completely dry, leaving his helpless men to perish on the battlefield while wishing for more explosives. Whereas mastering the blade gives them a real fighting chance to survive any crisis, knowing he can accept death after giving his all, but dying with regrets is unacceptable. This is why he must prove to them that ultimate strength lies within oneself, unaware that someone has been quietly watching his intense training from the shadows, until a sudden rustle in the bushes catches the legendary warrior's sharp attention. Spinning around instantly with his hand on his hilt to confront the mysterious intruder, only to find our young chef standing there holding a lantern with an apologetic smile, letting out a sigh of relief while playfully scolding Shuri for sneaking up on him. He remembers how this cheerful kid joined their mercenary group just a month ago, bringing a warm, comforting atmosphere that has completely transformed the entire unit's spirit. Thanks to Shuri's mouthwatering cooking, mealtime has become the absolute highlight for the entire unit. But to be completely honest, the proud warrior still harbors a few lingering doubts, unable to shake off a deep sense of suspicion regarding our young chef's mysterious background, wondering why on earth he suddenly appeared on that hill without any clear explanation, especially since nobody has ever seen these bizarre, incredibly delicious recipes anywhere else before. Leaving Kuga desperately curious about where exactly the kid learned such legendary culinary skills. However, he decides to keep those heavy thoughts to himself for the time being, only to get completely thrown off by Shuri's hilariously dramatic, teary-eyed expression, realizing the kind-hearted chef was simply worried about him slipping into the dark woods alone, which prompted our boy to grab a lantern and head straight into the forest, recklessly following the legendary swordsman without even thinking about the potential danger, shining a bright light on his friend who was right in the middle of training, making Kuga feel incredibly embarrassed that his inner turmoil was so painfully obvious, sighing at his own immaturity for letting a civilian see right through his tough exterior. Sitting down together on the grass, the warrior finally confesses that he is in a massive slump. Encouraged by Shuri's gentle suggestion that just talking about it might help clear his mind, explaining that while fancy magic weapons are great, a true warrior must rely on their own strength, admitting his beloved sword simply could not match the sheer destructive power of those explosive stones, though he originally intended to keep his composure while explaining his deep frustration. Once the floodgates opened, he just could not stop pouring his heart out about wanting to be stronger. Once the floodgates of his mind opened, all his hidden insecurities started pouring out, and he confesses to our young chef that his beloved blade has grown completely dull, realizing that he might actually be far weaker than he ever wanted to admit, especially since he was secretly feeling incredibly anxious about his own comrade's massive success. feeling deeply ashamed of his own petty jealousy over Real stealing the battlefield spotlight. But the comforting words our young chef offered next completely caught him off guard, simply asking with a bright, innocent smile if the legendary warrior was feeling hungry, leaving the proud captain absolutely speechless by such an incredibly simple and unexpected question, wondering if the kid actually views his deep existential dread as nothing more than hunger. Yet watching our boy happily prepare to cook somehow makes all his worries melt away. Realizing that treating a troubled warrior like a hungry child is surprisingly effective, even the great Commander Gangrave could never solve a deep emotional crisis this easily, making his heavy anxieties feel completely foolish in the presence of such pure kindness, which is undoubtedly a unique magic born from our young chef's incredibly gentle personality, as he begins to closely observe the remarkably smooth and practiced movements of Shuri, whose flawless knife skills make the simple kitchen blade look like a legendary sword, sparking a sudden, intense curiosity in the warrior's mind as he studies those movements, carefully placing the freshly sliced fish into a specialized cooling container to preserve it, before happily announcing that they just need to wait a little while for it, offering a nice bottle of wine to share while they wait for the meal. Sitting together on the grass, Shuri gently explains that he cannot offer any grand tactical advice, but he simply wants the stressed-out captain to take a moment to relax and clear his head, which makes Kuga realize just how incredibly thoughtful and emotionally mature this young kid really is, especially since our boy has a natural gift for empathizing with the heavy burdens of others. Thinking back to his own deep suspicions, the proud warrior feels a sudden wave of guilt. Realizing his conscience is absolutely killing him for ever doubting such a sweet, innocent soul, who must have faced his own fair share of silent struggles since arriving in this camp, yet he still managed to earn Gangrave's complete trust while becoming close friends with Real, proving that a regular civilian with zero combat skills can bring everyone together through pure kindness. Sighing deeply, the captain admits that he truly believed his talent had reached its absolute limit. Looking down at his own hands while feeling completely defeated by his recent failures, knowing he was never blessed with the ideal physical build or raw muscle for swordplay, even though he managed to survive countless brutal battlefields and grow stronger through sheer determination, clinging to that hard-earned strength as his ultimate source of warrior pride on the battlefield. But hearing his friends speak of limits only makes our young chef shake his head, pleading with the captain not to dismiss all his incredible hard work with such sad words, firmly stating that Kuga's swordplay is incredibly beautiful and he has simply hit a temporary wall, which leaves the battle-hardened warrior completely wide-eyed and speechless at such unexpected praise, remembering how he always viewed his blade as a bloody, heartless tool meant only for killing. Yet this gentle kid saw true beauty in his style, giving him hope to overcome his slump. Staring into the quiet night, the captain processes the young chef's surprisingly profound words, realizing that hitting a metaphorical wall might actually be a hidden blessing in disguise, because if his swordplay has truly reached a limit, there must be a way to shatter it, searching deep within his own soul for the vital piece he has been missing all along. Suddenly, our young chef stands up with a bright smile to announce the food is finally ready. Having carefully battered and deep-fried the fresh fish to a perfect golden brown crispiness, presenting the mouth-watering dish with a generous dollop of his special homemade tartar sauce, which immediately blows the battle-hardened warrior's mind the very second he takes a bite. Absolutely stunned by the incredible flavor, he stands frozen in pure culinary bliss, experiencing a spectacular explosion of crispy textures and incredibly tender, flaky fish inside. Praising the perfect harmony of the sweet-sour sauce and the subtle kick of wild pepper, pointing out that Shuri's flawless knife skills are what truly made this fish so incredibly soft. Smiling, our boy explains that the secret is cutting gently, as if caressing the softest parts, sparking a sudden, massive revelation in the captain's mind as those words echo deeply, remembering how he always tried to overpower giant foes with nothing but reckless brute force. Realizing he must develop a unique style of swordplay that relies on fluid precision instead. Having survived countless brutal battlefields, he knows his true strength lies in his refined technique, grabbing Shuri's hand in absolute excitement to thank him for this incredible, life-changing culinary inspiration, sending his young friend back to camp safely before drawing his blade with renewed confidence, ready to completely redefine his swordplay by letting go of his old, rigid habits. Kuga stands alone in the quiet forest, preparing to swing his sword with his entire body, focusing on how the raw power flows seamlessly from his feet all the way to his wrists, realizing that muscles alone are not enough, meaning he must master the alignment of his very bones, taking a sudden explosive step forward to test this brand new theory of fluid motion, as his foot slides across the dirt with incredible speed and absolute precision, only to be suddenly confronted by a spectral projection of his own past self, gasping in pure shock as this imaginary opponent instantly launches a relentless assault, forcing the captain to quickly raise his blade and block the heavy, familiar strikes, clashing swords in a fierce imaginary duel that pushes his reflexes to the absolute limit. But his past self simply overpowers him with the same rigid brute force style he used to rely on, showing him exactly how predictable and stiff his old swordplay really was during combat, sparking a sudden, brilliant realization in his mind right in the middle of the clash, which allows him to unleash a fluid whip-like counterslash that completely shatters the projection, sending a massive shockwave tearing through the dark forest with unbelievable destructive power, leaving the battle-hardened warrior completely breathless as he tries to process what just happened. Feeling a violent, electric numbness suddenly surge straight through his entire right arm, noticing that his beloved sword has actually slipped completely out of his trembling grip, staring at his shaking hand in disbelief because the sheer impact totally overwhelmed his physical limits, looking up with wide, stunned eyes as he searches the dark woods for his weapon, only to find his blade deeply embedded in a tree trunk after slicing clean through it. Laughing heartily, the captain realizes that our young chef was absolutely right about everything, understanding that his supposed limit was actually just a temporary wall waiting to be shattered, prompting him to spend the entire night relentlessly swinging his sword in the dark, practicing his brand new fluid movements until his muscles scream and his body completely adapts. But returning to the camp the next morning brings a completely different kind of trouble. As our young chef stands there giving the battle-hardened captain a massive, endless lecture, keeping that incredibly sweet and innocent smile plastered on his face the entire time, which actually makes the lecture 10 times scarier than any brutal battlefield he has faced, Shuri finally stops talking to ask if his training session actually solved his deep existential crisis, earning a warm, grateful smile from the captain who credits the kid for his breakthrough. But their peaceful moment is suddenly shattered by the thunderous roar of an invading enemy cavalry, sending the camp into a panic as soldiers scramble to prepare their powerful explosive stones, only for Kuga to suddenly leap forward and charge straight toward the oncoming horde alone, leaving his loyal comrades completely stunned by his incredibly reckless and unexpected solo charge, screaming at him to stop because running headfirst into the enemy army is pure suicide. Yet the captain is completely focused on the profound realization he had during his training, as a massive volley of deadly arrows is unleashed directly toward his unprotected body, knowing that his newly refined style of swordplay now possesses two completely different faces, allowing him to face the incoming rain of projectiles with absolute calm and confidence, unleashing his newly awakened style of fluid defense to effortlessly deflect every single arrow. Arrows rain down and land harmlessly in the dirt all around the agile captain, leaving the watching soldiers completely dumbfounded by his impossible display of speed, as Kuga prepares to face the heavy cavalry charging directly toward him, slicing through the lead rider with a single incredibly precise and effortless strike, proving that his newly refined style has unlocked a terrifying level of power, which allows him to weave through the battlefield like a phantom during combat. Realizing that his reaction time and composure have reached absolute perfection, effortlessly dodging every single incoming attack with fluid, snake-like movements during the chaos, knowing his current combat abilities are completely incomparable to his past self, focusing his sharp gaze on the remaining enemies to finish the battle, unleashing a massive, sweeping slash that completely decimates the entire enemy cavalry, leaving his own men staring in absolute awe at their captain's legendary power. Back at the camp, a massive celebration begins to toast their incredible victory, with the soldiers happily cheering and praising Kuga's mind-blowing performance on the field, while the captain quietly sits by the fire to enjoy Shuri's delicious food, only to be suddenly approached by his men bowing down in deep apology, begging their captain to teach them the secrets of his incredible new swordplay. Which makes Kuga internally chuckle at how quickly their arrogant attitudes have flipped, taking a quiet moment to swallow his food before giving them an answer, offering a warm, gentle smile as he happily agrees to train them all. Throughout history, maintaining a powerful kingdom has always required absolute military strength, but over the next 10 years, almost every single martial art completely faded away, leaving only the legendary Kuga style founded by the great sword saint himself, whose terrifying swordplay was so incredibly lethal that it seemed completely superhuman, creating a bloody grassland that people still whisper about to this day. Although he possessed such terrifying power, the legendary warrior had a surprisingly gentle heart, always choosing to fight on the very front lines to encourage his loyal comrades, which deeply inspired his men while leaving his closest friends completely exasperated. Years later, the legendary general looked back on his bloody past and confessed that he honestly believed his path only left a trail of cold corpses, until a certain young chef finally opened his eyes to a beautiful truth, showing him that his blade had actually saved millions of innocent lives instead, giving him a brand new purpose to stand at the very front of battle, acting as both the ultimate shield and sword to protect everyone behind him. This profound philosophy eventually became known as the life-giving sword of salvation, evolving over generations into a modern style meant to subdue foes without killing, as his incredible legacy was immortalized in plays, books, and even deified. Yet after retiring, he preferred a quiet life of fishing with childhood friends, always making sure to enjoy a delicious plate of deep-fried horse mackerel, stuffing his face with a massive smile that showed his eternal gratitude. While everyone happily stuffs their faces with the delicious crispy fish Shuri prepared, memories of the brutal war still linger in the minds of these battle-hardened men, recalling how chaotic the front lines actually were when the enemy launched their surprise attack, forcing our young chef to pack up his kitchen gear and quickly flee the area. But he suddenly stops in his tracks when a strange sound echoes from behind, turning around with wide eyes as he witnesses something completely unexpected on the battlefield. realizing that the kingdom has actually deployed their highly feared elite mage unit, as the powerful spellcasters begin chanting their destructive incantations high above the trees, unleashing a massive, terrifying wave of fire that instantly incinerates the enemy forces, leaving Shuri completely traumatized by the sheer, brutal, destructive power of real magic, which eventually fades away as a blanket of white snow covers the quiet mountains, signaling that several months have quietly passed since that intense battle concluded, bringing a biting, freezing chill that sweeps through the entire military camp, making the shivering soldiers huddle closely around the warm campfires to stay comfortable, prompting Shuri to take a quiet moment to reflect on their current situation, noting how much the mercenary group has changed since their massive victory, especially since securing the salt rights earned them a fortune in gold and endless food supplies, allowing their happy leader to recruit plenty of new soldiers and upgrade all their gear. But unfortunately, he delivers some pretty disappointing news about the kitchen staff, explaining that Shuri's legendary cooking skills are simply too advanced for any normal assistant to learn. Even though it is already winter, a fierce war is raging in an incredibly freezing region. Because nations are constantly fighting over valuable mineral resources like high-quality iron ore, leaving our young chef shivering in his apron as he tries to endure the biting cold, turning around to strike up a friendly conversation with his companion Ruru, only to find her completely frozen solid like a literal block of ice, prompting him to quickly hand her a steaming cup of a special warm beverage, which instantly brings a massive, happy smile of relief to her freezing face. As he explains that he brewed some sweet, non-alcoholic amazake just for her, encouraging the shivering girl to take a cautious, comforting sip of the hot drink, delighting her with its incredibly sweet flavor and lack of any harsh alcoholic bite, though our boy gently warns her to limit herself to just one single cup, since this traditional winter treat was carefully crafted using leftover sake lees. Having managed to acquire the ingredients after begging Gangrave to source some rare Japanese-style alcohol, allowing the rest of the cold soldiers to happily enjoy the warm beverage together, knowing that even a tiny amount of alcohol is perfect for heating up their bodies, while Ruru happily chugs her drink in the most adorable way possible, until a loud, cheerful voice suddenly calls out to compliment the delicious aroma, revealing a friendly warrior named Tegu who eagerly begs for a cup of his own, serving as the highly respected captain of the mercenary group's elite archer unit, sporting stylish dreadlocks and a handsome face with a goofy, lovable smile. Shuri notes that Tegu has an incredibly light, easygoing vibe that makes him super easy to approach, giving off the comforting energy of a friendly older brother who gets along with everyone. So our young chef happily pours a warm cup of the sweet drink for him too, which the excited archer captain eagerly accepts with a massive grin on his face, chugging down the steaming beverage to instantly combat the biting winter chill of the camp. He absolutely loves the sweet, comforting flavor, calling it the absolute best thing ever. But Shuri quickly warns him that he can only have one cup since it contains alcohol, promising to brew a much larger batch for everyone once this brutal war finally ends, though Ruru suddenly chimes in to demand a delicious hamburger before any of that happens, leaving Tegu completely baffled since she literally just stuffed her face with hamburgers earlier. She hilariously argues that yesterday is yesterday, today is today, and tomorrow is a brand new day, declaring with sparkling eyes that hamburgers are always the most delicious food in the world, prompting the guys to sweat nervously at her terrifyingly intense obsession with the food. As Ruru continues her adorable celebration, Shuri looks over toward the main command tent, where Gangrave is currently holding a serious strategy meeting with the other high-ranking military leaders, noticing that the commander is also enjoying a warm cup of his special non-alcoholic brew, which was carefully crafted using sweet rice koji to keep him completely sober during the day. Having gone through immense trouble to secure the rare ingredients from a highly protective local brewery, this leaders discuss how the enemy soldiers are far more accustomed to fighting on treacherous snowy roads, but our young chef suddenly stops when a strange feeling catches his attention. One of the captains at the meeting suddenly turns around with a suspicious look, feeling as though someone is watching their secret strategy meeting from outside the tent, revealing the sharp, intense gaze of the beautiful female mage captain looking right back, while Shuri casually mentions to Tegu that all the high-ranking leaders are currently meeting. This archer captain panics, realizing he completely forgot he was supposed to attend too, but he quickly laughs it off, claiming he prefers leaving all the heavy thinking to Gangrave, leaving our young chef to wonder if that is really an acceptable way to run a military. Though seeing Ruru happily stuffing her face makes him realize Gangrave has to carry everyone. Meanwhile, the mysterious female captain quietly exits the meeting tent with a thoughtful expression, as the other leaders announce that the army will rest today and march tomorrow. This leaves Shuri facing a massive, intimidating mountain of dirty plates that need cleaning, forcing him to scrub them in the freezing cold water until his hands are completely numb. Realizing that doing chores in this brutal winter weather is easily his least favorite job, until a soft voice suddenly calls out to him while he tries to warm his freezing fingers. He turns around to find the elegant mage captain Arlius standing right behind him, knowing she is a highly respected specialist who commands the kingdom's elite magic unit, unlike Ruru, whose unique magic engineering abilities focus entirely on manipulating physical matter, which allows her to easily heat up cooking stones and perform other handy everyday tasks. whereas Arlias possesses a completely different class of magic centered around natural manipulation, wielding the terrifying power to summon and control destructive elements at her absolute will. Shuri remembers her unleashing that terrifying, merciless fireball that completely wiped out the enemy forces, proving that this legendary mage captain is an absolute force to be reckoned with. But despite her terrifying magical prowess, she is also known as a peerless beauty, possessing an incredibly elegant and refined look that instantly captivates anyone who sees her. Our young chef honestly believes that if she were living on Earth today, she would easily be scouted by a major entertainment agency to become a top idol, though he cannot help but notice that her chest is completely flat, emphasizing this physical trait once more just to make sure we all get the picture. Before declaring it one final time as if it were some grand cosmic truth, honestly, Shuri is totally fine with it since he secretly prefers flat-chested girls anyway, but he still wonders why such an elite person would suddenly approach him now, especially since he is absolutely convinced that she does not like him at all. Her cold, piercing gaze always seems to look right through him with intense suspicion, keeping a massive distance between them even though he has worked here for months. And while he has managed to become friendly with her magic unit subordinates, this beautiful captain remains completely aloof and refuses to show him any warmth. Whenever her sharp, cold eyes lock onto him during their brief daily encounters, she is almost always giving him a terrifying, silent glare that sends shivers down his spine, leaving our poor chef sweating nervously as he tries to survive her intense scrutiny. Realizing that to her, he is still just a suspicious newcomer with a mysterious past, Shuri is completely caught off guard when the elegant mage captain approaches him with a serious look, nervously fidgeting with her fingers in a way that seems totally out of character, revealing a surprisingly cute, blushing face that instantly sends our young chef's heart into overdrive, leaving him completely baffled by this sudden, incredibly shy side of the usually terrifying commander. She hesitates for a brief moment, raising a hand to her mouth as she tries to find the right words, before suddenly blurting out her desperate request to learn how to cook from him, which leaves our boy utterly speechless as he tries to process why an elite mage wants culinary lessons, though a quick moment of reflection helps him easily piece together the mystery behind her sudden motivation. It turns out that the beautiful captain is actually harboring a massive, secret crush on their leader Gangrave, having once flashed him an incredibly rare, radiant smile that made her feelings painfully obvious, meaning that literally everyone in the entire mercenary camp is already quietly cheering her on, even though she genuinely believes she is doing a flawless job of keeping her love life hidden. Honestly, Gangrave is the only person dense enough to completely miss all of her incredibly clear signals, prompting Shuri to focus back on the task and ask if she has any prior kitchen experience, only for the blushing captain to sweat nervously and admit that she has absolutely none, forcing him to gently explain that learning to cook is a long process that takes real dedication. While there are plenty of simple recipes, there are no magical shortcuts to mastering the culinary arts. So he asks her what exactly made her want to start cooking so suddenly, causing Arlias to panic and desperately beg him to keep this a total secret from everyone else, as she clutches her chest and prepares to explain the real reason behind her adorable request. Blushing furiously, the elegant mage captain finally confesses that she is deeply in love with Gangrave, which immediately prompts Shuri to think that literally everyone in the entire camp already knows. Though seeing a beautiful woman gush over a handsome guy still sparks a tiny bit of jealousy, as she explains how she constantly watches their commander happily devouring Shuri's delicious cooking, admitting with a dark shadow over her eyes that she actually felt quite envious, leaving our young chef completely frozen in absolute shock by her unexpected confession, since his wild imagination suddenly conjures up a hilarious, overly dramatic romance scenario between himself and Gangrave, quickly shaking that terrifying thought out of his head while sweating nervously in response, while Arlias twiddles her fingers and admits she wants to make Gangrave look her way, feeling deeply frustrated that she cannot do anything helpful for him despite being by his side. Shuri looks at her in a completely new light after hearing her heartfelt confession, realizing how deeply she cares about finding ways to support the person she loves. Understanding that beneath her terrifyingly cold exterior lies an incredibly sweet and passionate soul, so he looks out at the vast, snowy mountain range to gather his thoughts, before turning back to the beautiful mage captain with a gentle, reassuring expression, explaining to her that every single person in this world has their own unique battlefield. My battlefield is the kitchen, but your battlefield is out there on the front lines. Suggesting that she can support their leader best by fighting where her talents shine brightest, which leaves the powerful mage captain staring at him with wide, utterly speechless eyes, though our young chef quickly reassures her that he is still happy to teach her some basic cooking. Shuri knows she is a rare magical genius who is meant to destroy enemies on the battlefield, so he wonders why someone so powerful would suddenly want to step into a completely different arena, leaving the elegant captain standing in absolute silence as she struggles to find her words, before she finally looks up to confess that she has recently fallen into a terrible slump, prompting our young chef to wonder if her magical block is similar to Kuga's situation. She explains that no matter how hard she trains, her firepower and control simply refuse to improve, making her feel as though she has completely hit the absolute limit of her natural talent, which is why she desperately wants to learn a new skill to remain useful to their commander. listening quietly to her heartbreaking worries while deeply contemplating how he can actually help her. He gently points out that while she can definitely learn how to cook over time, she is only doing this because she feels completely useless in her current state, but he absolutely refuses to let her give up on her incredible magical abilities. Explaining that learning to cook takes months and will not solve her immediate desire to support Gangrave. This honest truth leaves the poor captain looking completely devastated and utterly out of options, until Shuri suddenly offers a brilliant alternative by promising to help her with her love life, catching the beautiful mage completely off guard as she blinks in absolute silent confusion, before she suddenly grabs him in excitement, desperately asking if he is actually being serious. Our sweating chef tries to calm her down, asking if she has ever shared a private meal, which immediately sends her into a massive panic as her face turns bright red, leaving her to shyly look away while admitting she has never done anything like that. Shuri enthusiastically suggests setting up a private dinner party for the two of them, which instantly shocks the blushing captain as she realizes what he is implying. Asking with sparkling eyes if such a magical, relationship-boosting dish actually exists. As our young chef explains it is a traditional winter meal from his hometown, she suddenly glares at him, realizing he will be there as the third wheel. But the plan moves forward anyway as night falls over the snowy mountains, bringing a very confused Gangrave to the site after receiving a mysterious invitation, wondering what kind of special dinner party they have planned for him tonight. Shuri welcomes their leader to a beautifully lit, cozy tent set up nearby, politely guiding him toward his seat with a warm and professional smile, revealing a perfectly arranged dining table with a steaming hot pot in the center, which currently contains a simple piece of kelp simmering in boiling water. To create the perfect atmosphere, Shuri actually had Ruru craft the custom furniture, while preparing a special homemade dipping sauce using soy sauce, vinegar, and mirin. Before stepping up to announce that he will be cooking right in front of them, which absolutely thrills their dense leader while leaving Arlias completely frozen in shock. This elegant captain shoots Shuri a terrifying glare for ruining her private moment, causing his wild imagination to conjure up another hilarious, overly dramatic romance scenario, though he quickly focuses back on the food since the broth is already finished. Gently sliding fresh cubes of tofu into the pot to serve a comforting yudofu, Shuri recalls visiting a seaside town a while back where he bought some high-quality kelp, knowing that this specific ingredient would make the absolute perfect dashi broth for his dish, which is exactly what he needs to bring out the rich, comforting flavors of the soup. While the fresh tofu was painstakingly crafted using soybeans and carefully extracted nigari. This crucial coagulant was boiled down in a large cauldron using traditional Japanese methods, requiring him to gather fresh seawater directly from the coast during his previous travels, though he also needed some highly specialized equipment to get the process just right, so he had Ruru craft the custom tools based on his detailed designs. Through endless trial and error with temperature control, he finally perfected the recipe. Even though bribing Ruru with a massive mountain of hamburgers might get him in trouble later, but right now, his guests are staring at the boiling pot in absolute disbelief, wondering if this incredibly simple combination of tofu and broth is really the entire meal. Shuri proudly explains that yudofu is the ultimate winter comfort food because tofu retains heat beautifully, prompting a delighted Gangrave to smile and ask if our young chef will serve them. Only for Shuri to step back and declare that he will not be helping them eat, presenting a special slotted spoon to their leader with a knowing grin. He explains that the true joy of hot pot is serving each other from a single pot, which suddenly makes the beautiful captain realize exactly what our clever chef is trying to do, as he flashes her a subtle, encouraging wink to go get her man, leaving a blushing Arlias to nervously offer to scoop some delicious tofu for their leader. Gangrave happily accepts her offer, completely unaware of the massive storm of emotions brewing inside her, as Arlias carefully scoops a piece of steaming tofu and hands it over with a blushing smile, before our dense leader suddenly offers to return the favor by serving her a portion as well. This unexpected gesture completely breaks the poor captain's brain, sending her face into a bright red panic, while Gangrave happily scoops up some tofu for her with a warm, incredibly charming smile. Leaving Shuri to watch from the sidelines, absolutely thrilled that his matchmaking plan is working flawlessly, since sharing a hot pot naturally forces people to interact and quickly deepens their emotional connection. Suddenly, Gangrave eagerly shoves the hot tofu into his mouth, only to instantly regret his impatience, as our young chef quickly warns him that tofu retains an incredible amount of heat inside. Taking the advice, the mercenary leader carefully blows on his next spoonful to cool it down, before taking another bite, letting the delicate flavors wash over his palate in absolute silence, which instantly sends him into a state of pure, unadulterated culinary bliss as he chews, quietly muttering under his breath about how incredibly delicious this simple hot pot actually tastes. This steaming hot tofu is unbelievably soft, melting away almost instantly with every single bite, while the subtle acidity of the homemade dipping sauce perfectly complements the rich dashi broth, creating a harmonious blend of savory and tangy flavors that elevates the humble ingredient, prompting Gangrave to admit he never expected boiled tofu to warm his cold body so deeply. Arlias is equally stunned, staring at her bowl in absolute disbelief that such simple ingredients taste this amazing. While our clever chef smiles warmly, feeling incredibly proud that his winter comfort food was a massive success, proving that a simple pot of yutofu is truly the ultimate meal for bringing people closer together. Shuri starts sprinkling a special red powder directly onto the steaming hot tofu, explaining to a very curious Gangrave that this magic seasoning adds a perfect kick, which immediately prompts their hungry leader to take a massive bite of the seasoned tofu, sending him into absolute flavor heaven as the spicy chili perfectly cuts through the acidity. Shuri then presents plates of freshly chopped green onions and finely grated daikon radish, showing them how the refreshing toppings and savory sauce completely transform the dish's texture, which instantly makes their excited leader eager to try out all the different combinations. Before Arlias shyly asks him to pass the chili pepper, sparking a natural conversation. Our young chef watches them with a warm, incredibly satisfied smile on his face, realizing that the distance between these two has already closed up quite a bit, though he knows he still needs to give them one final, clever push. So he suddenly asks Gangrave what would happen if they removed the kelp entirely. Gangrave looks completely puzzled, assuming the simple dish would taste exactly the same, but Shuri gently corrects him by explaining that the flavor would change dramatically, because the tiny umami elements from the kelp dissolve to support the main tofu. Adding that without this subtle support, their dinner would not have been nearly as comforting. He explains that people are exactly the same, asking who supports Gangrave from the shadows, pointing out that there is someone always by his side who constantly thinks of him, asking their dense leader if he has ever noticed this incredibly precious person, leaving Gangrave to freeze in absolute shock as the truth finally hits him. Gangrave's eyes widen in absolute shock as he finally puts the pieces together, looking over at his beautiful captain who is currently blushing redder than a winter tomato, as she quietly confirms his realization with a shy, incredibly soft nod, prompting our young chef to quietly slip out of the tent to give them some privacy. Shuri smirks to himself, feeling incredibly proud of his legendary matchmaking skills, wondering when his own romantic Cupid will finally decide to show up in his life, before he suddenly turns around and spots Ruru standing right behind him, leaving our young chef completely frozen in absolute, sweat-inducing shock as he looks ahead, because their entire group of allies is standing there watching the whole thing, looking incredibly smug as they realize their leader's love life is finally moving forward. Only for Shuri to sigh in defeat, realizing his friends are just a bunch of busybodies, especially Kiri, who wears a mischievous grin while admitting she could not miss the drama, while the elegant priestess smiles warmly, claiming she was simply worried about them, even though Kuga tries to act cool by claiming he did not care at all, which immediately prompts his friend to call him out for being a total liar, as Ruru happily chimes in to say she was completely indifferent to the romance, though Kiri quickly teases her for being the most excited one of the bunch, causing their massive armored companion to stand in silent, thoughtful contemplation over the situation. But our young chef cannot help but smile warmly at this chaotic group, knowing they all deeply care about their beloved companions finding true happiness together. Our young chef walks away with a cheeky grin, leaving the lovebirds to enjoy their private moment, while the rest of the gang waves goodbye, promising not to ruin the romantic atmosphere. As a beautiful, quiet morning finally breaks over the vast, snow-covered mountain peaks, Shuri shivers in the freezing cold, blowing on his hands to keep them warm, when a gentle voice suddenly calls out to him, catching our young chef completely off guard, revealing Arlias walking toward him while radiating a literal, blinding aura of pure happiness. She looks absolutely stunning, wearing a soft, incredibly peaceful smile on her face, which completely dazzles our boy as he shields his eyes from her sparkling radiance, wondering what could have possibly caused such a dramatic change in her usual demeanor, before she stops right in front of him to express her deepest, most heartfelt gratitude. Shuri smiles warmly, feeling incredibly relieved that his clever matchmaking plan actually worked out. But his eyes suddenly widen in sheer panic when she mentions binding their hearts, instantly triggering his wild imagination to conjure up an incredibly spicy R-rated scenario, though she quickly clarifies they only promise to marry once they find a permanent home. Realizing how dirty his mind is, Shuri immediately punches himself straight in the face, unleashing a rapid-fire barrage of self-inflicted blows to cleanse his impure thoughts, leaving a deeply concerned captain to watch him beat himself up in absolute confusion, before he quickly brushes it off, trying to act cool despite his swollen, bruised face. He asks if they will officially tie the knot once they settle down somewhere permanently, which she softly confirms, knowing that finding a home for wandering mercenaries is no easy task. Arlias looks at Shuri, expressing her deep belief that her mercenary group can finally find peace, while our young chef smiles warmly, secretly glad to see his close companions finding true happiness, before the two share some casual, lighthearted banter and finally decide to head their separate ways, though Shuri cannot help but recall how he explained the simple science behind cooking perfect yutofu. That culinary lesson apparently inspired Arlias to absolutely dominate her next major battle on the field, summoning a massive, blazing sun of pure magical energy to completely obliterate the enemy forces, which brings back memories of a dark time when Gangrave lay critically wounded and bleeding out, prompting Kaguya and the others to frantically scramble for hot water and clean bandages to save him. Waking up in pain, the mercenary leader immediately asks about the enemy and their current status, as a tearful Arlias reassures him that everyone managed to escape the brutal battlefield alive. Letting out a soft sigh of relief as he quietly processes her comforting words, because deep down, the beautiful captain has always harbored deep feelings of love for him. Ever since their rough childhood days, he was the one who constantly guided their orphan gang, taking on all the heavy guilt and burdens of their survival so they would not suffer, making her long for the day she could finally stand by his side and share them. And it was during this terrifying brush with death that she truly realized her deep love. This realization occurred shortly after they had first established their legendary mercenary group together, when she watched over his broken body, praying desperately for his survival against all odds, during what was easily the most brutal, nightmarish retreat battle in their entire collective memory, leaving behind countless casualties and a heavily scarred leader who barely made it out alive. Gangrave lay there heavily bandaged, hovering on the very edge of life and death, while his young companions stood by in absolute silence, crushed by intense self-blame. But the wounded leader simply smiled warmly, expressing deep gratitude that they all survived, showing a gentle, incredibly reassuring expression that instantly melted all of their worries away, which caused Arlias to blush deeply as a sudden wave of affection hit her. Realizing in that very moment that she was completely and utterly in love, though she currently serves as the proud captain of their mercenary group's magic division. On any brutal battlefield, mages are considered incredibly powerful weapons of mass destruction, capable of dropping massive fireballs, conjuring defensive ice walls, and launching sharp wind blades, by converting their inner magical energy directly into physical elements to alter reality itself. Yet true magical talent is exceptionally rare, leaving most people to become simple craftsmen, since only 1 in 100,000 individuals can actually manipulate mana properly. Surprisingly, their small mercenary group somehow managed to recruit 4 of these legendary mages, which is exactly why they rarely lose battles but struggle to expand their size, because hiring elite magic users normally requires an absolute fortune in gold coins. So Arlias constantly had to convince her loyal subordinates to accept much lower wages, balancing their financial complaints against their shared dreams and deep bonds of companionship. But lately, her fellow mages have been looking incredibly happy and content, completely stopping all of their usual complaints about their low mercenary salaries. And the secret behind this miraculous change is none other than our brilliant young chef. Shuri's cooking is so delicious that the mages happily accept their low mercenary wages, because his meals completely satisfy them and keep them from wasting money eating out, which actually makes staying with the group highly beneficial for their personal finances, leaving Arlias to realize that without our young chef's incredible presence in her squad, her entire magic division might have completely fallen apart and disbanded by now. Meanwhile, the mercenary group prepares for an upcoming battle on the freezing, snow-covered plains, prompting the beautiful captain to check on her mages inside their warm tent, only to freeze in absolute surprise as she catches a sudden, suspicious scent. Recognizing the distinct aroma of hot alcohol wafting from one of their cups, she immediately scolds them for drinking in broad daylight without her official permission. But the girls just stare back at her with completely blank, unfazed expressions, before calmly explaining that Shuri made them a special sweet drink called Amazake, adding that it warms their bodies, keeps their skin smooth, and barely contains any alcohol. They happily giggle about how the sweet beverage is perfect for both beauty and health, causing their defeated captain to facepalm in absolute exhaustion over Shuri's endless influence. Though she cannot deny that the entire atmosphere of her squad has dramatically improved, remembering how these same stubborn mages used to constantly argue and fight with her, whereas now they respond with mature, calm smiles while happily munching on their food. Even Gangrave has started focusing heavily on backline logistics, food supplies, and proper operations, while Ruru uses Shuri's brilliant culinary ideas to invent revolutionary new technologies for their journey. Kuga sits in peaceful meditation, looking like he has finally achieved absolute spiritual enlightenment, while Arlias watches her companions walk away, feeling strangely left behind and lonely. Walking through the snowy camp, she suddenly overhears some mercenaries loudly praising a delicious drink, with the soldiers happily chatting about wanting even stronger alcohol once they return to town. This lively scene makes the beautiful captain realize just how massive Shuri's influence really is, though she secretly harbors a tiny bit of jealousy toward the talented young chef, because he managed to gain everyone's absolute trust almost immediately after joining their group, despite his mysterious background and lack of any official credentials making him highly suspicious. Remembering her initial doubts, she recalls how she used to glare at him with intense hostility, which probably explains why our poor chef still acts incredibly nervous whenever she is around. Shaking off these thoughts, Arlias continues her stroll through the bustling mercenary camp, only to freeze in absolute shock when she spots her beloved leader drinking with the crew. Gangrave happily takes another warm, steaming sip, completely unaware of his captain's sudden arrival, prompting her eyes to widen in sheer disbelief at his incredibly relaxed behavior, as she immediately storms over to scold him for drinking before an important negotiation. Smiling warmly, the mercenary leader calmly explains that his beverage is actually a special type of Amazake, leaving a highly confused Arlias to blink in absolute silence as she processes his words. He mentions that he originally refused to drink alcohol to avoid smelling like booze on duty. So Shuri cleverly prepared a completely non-alcoholic version using 0% ingredients instead, which tastes incredibly sweet, requires a lot of effort to make, and warms his body right up. Gangrave smiles warmly, handing a steaming cup of the sweet beverage over to Arlias, who tentatively takes a tiny, cautious sip to see what the hype is about, realizing that it has a pleasant, gentle sweetness with almost no trace of alcohol, while a deep, soothing warmth immediately spreads from her core to her entire body. Looking around, she sees her fellow mercenaries happily drinking and laughing together, as even their tough leader takes another satisfying gulp with a blissful smile, which makes the beautiful captain bite her lip in a sudden wave of frustration, because she can clearly see just how much Gangrave has grown to like Shuri. However, she knows that trusting someone in daily life is completely different from battlefield trust, where warriors must literally watch each other's backs to survive the harshest of trials, leaving her to watch them from afar while secretly battling a quiet sense of jealousy. Since the young chef has effortlessly earned the absolute confidence of her beloved leader, letting out a heavy, conflicted sigh, Arlias tries to process these complicated emotions, admitting to herself that Shuri's cooking and sweet drinks are undeniably perfect, wondering if she could deepen her own bond with Gangrave if she learned to cook, before she pauses in deep silence, contemplating this sudden and unusual idea. Suddenly, a brilliant spark of inspiration hits her, causing her eyes to widen in excitement, vividly imagining herself serving delicious meals to help support the entire squad, picturing her beloved leader praising her culinary skills and declaring how much he needs her, believing that since her magic has hit a wall, learning a new skill is the perfect path forward. Arlias rushes through the snowy camp, determined to apologize and ask Shuri for cooking lessons. But she suddenly stops in her tracks when she spots our young chef working outside, blinking in absolute confusion as she tries to process what he is actually doing, because the poor kid is kneeling in the freezing snow, washing dishes completely by himself. She recalls how Gangrave ordered the entire squad to rest up for tomorrow's big march, leaving the combat division to relax, sharpen their weapons, and conserve their precious energy. Which is exactly why Shuri refused to let anyone else help with the chores, wanting to prevent the soldiers' hands from freezing up right before a brutal battle. So our wholesome chef quietly took on the massive burden of cleaning up alone, leaving the beautiful captain to watch him from a distance in stunned, silent awe, noticing how his bare hands are completely red and chapped from the icy water, yet he still smiles while scrubbing a seemingly endless mountain of dirty plates. She realizes that since he cannot fight, he believes this is his only way to contribute, even though their mercenary group has grown way too large for just one cook, making her wonder if their leader has any plans to ease this insane workload, especially when she compares his selfless dedication to her own incredibly petty behavior. Remembering how she gossiped, ate his food, and harbored silly jealousy makes her feel terrible, wishing she could literally punch herself for being so incredibly selfish and immature. But she squeezes her hands tightly, gathering every ounce of courage to face him, before she nervously steps forward, blushing deeply as she asks if they can talk. Shuri turns around in surprise, his cheeks flushing slightly as he notices her sudden approach, prompting Arlias to mentally prepare herself to apologize for her past hostility and finally trust him, before she nervously asks if he would be willing to teach her how to cook, explaining that she wants to learn culinary skills specifically for her beloved leader's sake. Our young chef reacts with a surprisingly gentle gesture, catching the beautiful magic captain completely off guard, as he calmly explains that everyone has their own unique battlefield where they can shine brightest, which deeply touches Arlias's heart and makes her clutch her chest in sudden emotional realization, making her realize just how incredibly sincere and pure-hearted this young chef truly is. She smiles back at his warm expression, finally seeing his genuine kindness without any lingering doubts, but her peaceful thoughts are suddenly interrupted when his face shifts into a slightly mischievous grin, looking like he already knew all about her secret crush on Gangrave this entire time. Blushing from embarrassment, Arlias looks down and admits that she has recently fallen into a terrible slump, letting her guard down completely as she confesses her deepest insecurities to the trustworthy young chef, revealing that no matter how hard she trains, her magical abilities just are not improving, leaving her terrified that she will soon become a useless burden to her beloved leader on the battlefield. Shuri listens intently before sheepishly admitting that he cannot really help her with complicated magic stuff, causing the anxious captain to look down in quiet disappointment as she prepares for rejection, only for our wholesome chef to suddenly grin and offer to help her with her love life instead. This unexpected declaration leaves the beautiful captain completely frozen in absolute utter confusion, as she struggles to process the bizarre and hilarious proposal Shuri just laid out for her. Arlias is stunned as Shuri proposes setting up a private dinner for her and Gangrave, since the mercenary group has always made it a strict rule to eat meals together. Our wholesome chef immediately springs into action, planning the perfect romantic setup with absolute precision, leaving the beautiful captain deeply touched by how seriously he treats her secret love life, realizing that this incredibly kind kid is truly a rare gem in their harsh world. Soon, Shuri serves up a steaming pot of yudofu for the two of them to share, explaining that sharing this simple meal is the ultimate way to bring people closer together, as they sit inside the warm tent, happily serving each other like a married couple. But the real shock comes when Arlias actually takes her very first bite, completely blown away by how such a simple dish can taste so incredibly delicious. Feeling a deep, soothing warmth instantly spread from her mouth straight to her core. While the special dipping sauce delivers a perfect balance of rich acidity and fruity aroma, this magical sauce perfectly coats the plain tofu, highlighting its natural sweetness with every bite, especially when adding fresh toppings like green onions and chili to unlock entirely new flavors, making it the absolute ultimate comfort food to enjoy in the freezing snowy weather, which naturally gets the conversation flowing between the two of them without any awkwardness. Forgetting all about the brutal battlefield outside, Arlias loses herself in this blissful moment of pure happiness, with our matchmaking chef watching from afar ready to give them one final gentle push, helping her gather the courage to finally let her true feelings reach her beloved leader, until Gangrave looks at her in surprise, prompting a deeply blushing Arlias to confess. Arlias feels a rush of pure joy, believing her long-held feelings have finally reached him. While our matchmaking chef quietly slips out of the tent to give them some privacy, leaving the two of them alone as Gangrave gently takes her hands in his, looking directly into her eyes as he asks her to listen to him carefully, before he boldly confesses that he actually feels the exact same way about her. Tears of absolute joy well up in her eyes as she celebrates this incredible moment, only for his expression to suddenly soften as he admits they cannot be together yet. This sudden rejection leaves the beautiful captain completely frozen in absolute shock and confusion, as he quietly explains that he might not even survive tomorrow's brutal battle, pointing out that the constant danger will follow him next week and the week after, meaning he truly has no idea when his life might suddenly come to an end. Heartbroken by his words, Arlias tearfully begs him to stop before trying to run away, but the mercenary leader quickly grabs her arm to keep her from leaving, pulling her close as he passionately declares that he still harbors a massive dream, which immediately makes her realize he is talking about building a peaceful new nation, remembering how he has always talked about creating a safe haven for everyone, a prosperous kingdom where absolutely nobody has to suffer from hunger or poverty. Gangrave vows that he refuses to die on any battlefield until that dream is realized, promising that once he finally secures a peaceful land for his beloved squad, he wants to be the one to officially ask for her hand in marriage. Arlias stares at him in absolute disbelief, her heart pounding wildly at his sudden proposal, as tears of pure happiness stream down her face while she playfully calls him unfair, clutching his hand tightly to make sure this beautiful dream is actually real. Gangrave gently caresses her cheek, promising to become a legendary king worthy of her love, before he pulls her close to seal their romantic vow with a passionate kiss, declaring that this is the ultimate promise he can offer her right now. Sobbing with joy, the beautiful captain eagerly nods and accepts his heartfelt vow, only for the entire mercenary squad to suddenly burst into the tent cheering, completely catching Arlias off guard as her face turns bright red from embarrassment, while their tough leader freezes in absolute shock, realizing they had an audience, as their cheerful companion happily congratulates the newly formed couple with a massive grin. Another squad member winks playfully, teasing them about finally admitting their obvious feelings, prompting the braided warrior to laugh and joke about how hot and heavy things got, while the quiet magic user offers her own sweet, sincere congratulations to her captain. Even their giant armored vanguard stands by silently, approving of their leader's romantic success, as the energetic scout winks and joins in on the wholesome celebration. This panicked couple demands to know how long everyone has been standing there watching them, only to hear that the sneaky squad witnessed the entire confession from the very start, leaving Arlias to hide her face in her hands while her childhood friends tease her relentlessly. Despite the intense embarrassment, she realizes she is surrounded by the warmest, most loving family imaginable. While her childhood friends tease her relentlessly, she feels incredibly grateful for this warm family, closing her eyes with a gentle smile as she silently thanks Shuri for everything. Before the next morning arrives with a beautiful view of the snowy mountain peaks, Arlias meets up with our young chef outside to talk about her successful confession, expressing her deepest gratitude to him for helping her connect with her beloved leader, only for the wholesome kid to suddenly start punching himself in the face, throwing a comical flurry of rapid-fire punches at his own cheeks in pure embarrassment. This bizarre reaction leaves the magic captain completely speechless as she watches him sweat drop, before she changes the subject to ask about his mind-blowing culinary and scientific knowledge, which prompts Shuri to explain that in his hometown, everyone learns these things early, leaving her absolutely amazed that such advanced education is considered completely normal there. She curiously asks him about the invisible elements of flavor he mentioned before, wondering what he meant by those incredibly strange terms like atoms and molecules. So our clever chef breaks down the basic scientific principles of fire and heat, explaining how the entire world is actually made of tiny particles bound together. This means magic users are actually manipulating these microscopic particles to alter reality, instantly clearing up the vague doubts she always harbored about her own magical abilities, as she looks at him in absolute shock, realizing he just solved her slump by introducing her to the absolutely incredible world of modern science and chemistry. Even though Shuri modestly waves it off, she knows his wisdom is far beyond hers, Arlias stares at Shuri, wondering who this mysterious young chef could possibly be. But she quickly stops herself from questioning his mysterious background any further, deciding that he is simply a precious friend and savior who deserves her absolute trust. This next day, the mercenary squad finds themselves marching through a brutal, freezing blizzard, making Gangrave worry that the extreme weather will put them at a severe disadvantage, especially since their northern enemies are already highly accustomed to fighting in these snowy conditions. Stepping forward with newfound confidence, Arlias boldly volunteers to clear a path for the squad, keeping Shuri's mind-blowing scientific explanation about microscopic particles close to her heart, as she prepares to face the massive enemy army waiting for them across the ridge. If her new hypothesis about magic and chemistry is correct, this crazy plan should work. Closing her eyes, she focuses deeply and prepares to test her limits like never before. While the enemy forces stand ready, completely unaware of the magical storm heading their way, as a massive rush of sensory information about the surrounding air and snow floods her mind, allowing her to perceive the exact molecular structure of everything before she begins to interfere. Remembering Shuri's lesson that fire requires heat and oxygen to burn, she starts her spell, using her raw magical energy to generate an intense, concentrated source of heat, before fueling the reaction with her own mana to rapidly expand its destructive power, while continuously supplying oxygen to create a massive, self-sustaining inferno that terrifies the enemy. This opposing soldiers scream in absolute terror as a giant sun-like fireball illuminates the sky, leaving her squad mates completely speechless at the sight of this unprecedented legendary magic, feeling the intense, blistering heat radiating from her newly optimized magic as she concentrates. She creates a massive wall of hot air to protect her marching allies, causing the thick layers of snow blocking their path to instantly melt away, while the heavily armored enemy soldiers begin sweating profusely in the sudden warmth, completely ruining their winter combat advantage with a simple wave of her wand, before she confidently tells Gangrave that the enemy's tactical edge has been entirely erased. Grinning with pride, the mercenary leader looks at his brilliant captain with deep admiration, signaling the rest of the squad to charge down the mountain and attack, which results in an absolute one-sided beatdown as they easily overwhelm the weakened foes, as Arlias unleashes another devastating blast of wind to sweep the battlefield clean, leaving the entire enemy vanguard defeated on the snowy ground in record time. Shocked by this legendary display, her fellow magic users eagerly ask how she did it, noticing that their captain seems like an entirely different person after today's battle. But Arlias just smiles mysteriously as she ponders the secret of her success, keeping her finger on her chin as she prepares to drop a massive truth bomb, playfully winking as she claims she learned the ultimate truth of magic from Tofu. Historically, powerful mages were always treated like legendary heroes during the Dark War era, with one extraordinary woman standing at the absolute peak of all magic users, achieving a level of power so supreme she could summon the sun itself to battle, cementing her legacy as the legendary Witch of Truth, Arlias Denjuabulata. Arlias became the queen of the newly unified kingdom alongside her beloved leader Gangrave. But her greatest achievement was keeping her profound scientific knowledge of the truth a secret, establishing the National Magic Academy to educate future generations as its very first director. Today, mages are respected as proud protectors of the kingdom because of the foundation she built, though history also remembers her as an absolute beauty who turned heads wherever she walked, remaining completely devoted to her one true love, Gangrave, for her entire life. Her three loyal disciples, known as the Three Sages, continued her legacy by running the academy, yet no other mage has ever managed to reach her level of ultimate truth since. Before she passed, she left behind a single clue for anyone wishing to understand her power, which eventually became a beloved winter comfort food enjoyed by commoners all across the kingdom. A simple, steaming pot of fresh tofu boiled with kelp known today as yudofu. Every time she ate her favorite dish, she would smile and say the same thing, claiming that this humble tofu dish truly contained the ultimate knowledge of the universe. Meanwhile, back in the present, our mercenary squad is currently traveling south after their big victory, hearing rumors that things are starting to get pretty chaotic down in the southern regions, prompting Gangrave to look back at the carriage and ask if everyone is doing all right, only to find our young chef looking completely exhausted and green in the face. This mercenary leader points out that Shuri looks absolutely terrible riding in the back, as the poor kid mutters that this bumpy wooden carriage is definitely not comfortable, right before they hit another massive bump that sends his stomach spinning all over again. Clutching his mouth in absolute agony, Shuri looks like he might explode right then and there, as his worried companion desperately begs him not to throw up inside the cramped wooden carriage, while our miserable chef complains about the complete lack of modern suspension and rubber tires, prompting Gangrave to suggest that riding a horse would be a much easier alternative. But the poor kid weakly explains that horses actually harbor a deep, personal hatred for him, recalling how the beasts violently buck and kick him away whenever he tries to get close. Gangrave sighs at his dramatic explanation, amused that Shuri keeps his quirky attitude even while dying, before smiling warmly as he admits that this weird charm is exactly what makes Shuri himself, just as their energetic scout Rur suddenly pops her head into the conversation with a grin, which makes our motion-sick chef curiously ask why she is not riding a horse either, only to get a deadpan response that her short legs cannot even reach the stirrups. Changing the subject, Shuri notes that Rur has been conducting some incredibly bizarre research lately, having recently covered her own arms and legs in strange, intricate magical tattoos, explaining how these ancient characters are specifically designed to boost her scouting abilities, leaving our young chef to internally lament that she ruined her perfectly smooth skin. But before he can think further, his vision suddenly begins to blur and spin violently, causing him to collapse forward as his consciousness rapidly slips away from him, sending the entire carriage into an absolute panic as they scream his name, with their companions looking back in sheer horror at his sudden, silent collapse, where poor Shuri shivers on the floor, completely paralyzed by a sudden, burning fever. This mercenary squad quickly sets up a temporary camp in the forest to deal with this sudden emergency, where poor Shuri lies completely bedridden with a massive fever after his body finally gave out, having traveled too fast from the freezing northern mountains down to these warmer southern lands, leaving our miserable young chef to weakly apologize for having to skip his cooking duties today. A stern voice suddenly tells him to shut up and focus on getting some rest, as Gangrave and their skilled medic Kaguya watch over him with deeply concerned expressions, making Shuri feel incredibly guilty for slowing down the entire squad's journey because of his sickness, though Kaguya reassures him by preparing her specialized medical magic to treat his burning fever. Instead of using standard spells, she applies traditional Eastern medicine like acupuncture and moxibustion, utilizing her genius medical skills that she normally uses while spying deep inside enemy territory. Before she gently wipes her hands and announces that the emergency treatment is finally complete, warning him that he still needs proper medicine and a strict diet to fully recover, she looks at him with a serious expression, telling him to take his health much more seriously, before she quietly slips out of the tent to let the poor kid get some sleep, leaving Shuri to beat himself up for failing the most basic adult duty of staying healthy, only for Gangrave to softly apologize to him for letting things get this bad. This leader blames himself for not hiring a kitchen assistant sooner or keeping enough medicine in stock, but Shuri weakly protests, insisting that he should have managed his own physical condition much better, smiling gently as he admits that being able to rely on his leader actually makes him happy, though Gangrave remains serious, declaring that keeping his crew safe is entirely his own responsibility. Shuri lies in bed sweating, weakly asking Gangrave if the rest of the squad is eating well, and the leader smiles warmly, reassuring him that everyone is actually praying for his quick recovery. Smiling weakly through his fever, our young chef mutters that his boss is being way too dramatic, but Gangrave insists it is no exaggeration, admitting they desperately need proper medicine to keep him safe, prompting Shuri to confidently declare that he has no intention of dying in a place like this. After all, he has an ultimate goal of returning to Earth, making a simple cold completely unacceptable, which makes Gangrave smile, mentioning how the entire squad wanted to burst in and nurse him themselves, visualizing his worried companions standing outside the tent with absolute panic written all over their faces. Chuckling softly at the thought, Shuri asks his leader to pass along his deepest thanks to everyone, before Gangrave tells him to stop worrying and finally get some much-needed rest for the night. Left alone in the quiet tent, our sick chef stares blankly at the ceiling in deep silence, realizing that he needs to take matters into his own hands if he wants to recover quickly, especially since his cooking tools and various fresh ingredients are conveniently sitting right next to his bed. Sitting up with what little strength he has left, he decides to whip up a quick remedy. Gathering some fresh eggs, local sake, and sweet honey they purchased from the last village they visited. First, he lights his portable stove to boil water and gently heat up the bottle of sake, while taking a separate bowl to thoroughly whisk the raw egg and honey together into a smooth mixture, before slowly pouring the hot sake into the bowl and straining the liquid into a clean cup, creating a steaming, traditional cup of sweet egg sake known back home as tamagazake. Taking a slow, warm gulp of the soothing drink, Shuri prepares to sweat out his terrible fever. Taking a sip of the warm drink, Shuri realizes his fever has completely numbed his taste buds, but he forces himself to chug it down anyway to get some quick nutrition before sleeping. Lying quietly under the heavy blankets, his mind begins drifting back to his peaceful days on Earth, recalling how his mother would always cook him a warm meal whenever he caught a cold, while his father would bring a tray of hot ginger porridge and sweet egg sake to his bedside, even remembering his old friends calling his phone to check up on him with genuine worry. Yet all of those comforting luxuries are completely gone in this harsh new fantasy world. He walks through his lonely thoughts, realizing he has no family, friends, or modern doctors nearby, letting the burning fever make him feel incredibly vulnerable as he stares blankly into the dark. Reflecting on how several months have already passed since he first arrived in this strange land, with absolutely no clue on how he will ever find a way back home to Earth, prompting the poor kid to weakly whisper for his parents in the quiet of his tent, knowing that sickness always makes people say the most fragile things when they are completely alone, closing his eyes as he silently wishes he could see his beloved family just one more time. Outside, the quiet night passes peacefully over the mercenary camp as everyone sleeps under the stars, until Shuri finally wakes up the next morning with a massive, refreshing stretch of his arms, sitting up in bed to realize he must have slept deeply through the entire dark night, swinging his legs over the side of the cot as he carefully stands up on his feet, flexing his arms with a bright smile as he realizes his terrible fever has completely vanished. Wondering if it was Kaguya's intense acupuncture or his own homemade egg sake that saved the day, Shuri suddenly shivers as a completely different kind of emergency hits his body, sending him sprinting out of his tent to find a quiet spot in the woods, before he finally walks back to the camp feeling incredibly relieved and totally empty, noting how peaceful and quiet the entire camp is under the dark night sky, until a sudden rustle nearby catches his attention and makes him freeze in place. Turning around only to spot their muscular companion Tegu standing right outside his tent, which completely startles the big guy who did not expect to see him awake, asking our young chef if he has been wandering around out here this entire time, leaving Shuri to curiously wonder why Tegu is lurking near his bed so late, realizing that this is definitely way too late for a normal friendly visit, prompting his wild imagination to assume the big guy is trying to sneak inside. Though he quickly shakes his head to erase that absolute nightmare of a scenario, asking Tegu directly what could possibly bring him out in the middle of the night, as the mercenary sheepishly scratches his head and admits he was just worried, wanting to make sure that Shuri was sleeping well and not suffering from his fever, which deeply touches our chef as he realizes how genuinely caring his companions are, knowing he cannot just brush off his illness as a simple common cold. Since a basic cold in this medieval world is often treated as a fatal plague, so he warmly apologizes for the scare and proudly shows off his full recovery, laughing that it is pretty embarrassing to hold back the entire squad over a fever. Tegu stares in absolute shock as Shuri casually announces that his fever has completely cleared up, with our young chef happily declaring that he is ready to get back to work tomorrow, leaving the big mercenary completely speechless at how incredibly fast his companion managed to bounce back, before he suddenly explodes in anger, scolding Shuri for even thinking about working right now, telling him to stop talking nonsense and focus entirely on getting some actual sleep. Without waiting for an answer, the muscular warrior grabs the heavy blanket with both hands, aggressively tucking our startled chef back into his cot to keep him warm, prompting a very sheepish Shuri to weakly apologize for causing so much trouble. Our muscular friend crosses his arms and sighs, explaining that he is not actually angry at him, admitting that the entire squad feels deeply responsible for pushing their chef to his physical limits, looking down with a gentle, apologetic expression as he sits quietly by the bedside, which makes Shuri listen in silence as the big guy opens up his heart, suddenly asking our young chef if he ever wishes to return to his distant hometown. He wonders if there are beloved people waiting back home who used to support him, causing Shuri to tightly clutch his blanket as a wave of homesickness hits him, softly admitting that he desperately wants to go back and see his family again, making the gentle giant nod in understanding, finding his honest answer completely natural. However, Shuri looks away with a sad expression, muttering that he might never return, reminding Tegu that our boy supposedly came from a mysterious land beyond the outer seas, while our young chef silently wonders how long he can keep his Earth origins a secret. Tegu points out that Shuri has a real family waiting for him back home, revealing that he and Gangrave were actually raised as orphans before starting this squad, leaving our young chef feeling incredibly guilty for bringing up his family to them. But the muscular warrior quickly speaks up to clear the air with a gentle smile, explaining that even without parents, the entire mercenary squad considers each other true family, which makes Shuri realize his companion saw right through his clumsy attempt at sympathy, though Tegu admits that traveling beyond the outer seas to find a lost family is a massive journey that none of them have ever even dreamed of attempting, making Shuri stress over how he could ever explain his actual Earth origins, until the big guy suddenly turns to him with a very curious look, asking our young chef if he would mind sharing some stories about his family, admitting that he has always wanted to know what a normal family is like, prompting Shuri to stare back in silence as he processes the heartfelt request. Seeing the absolute sincerity written all over his muscular companion's face as they sit together, before he finally smiles and begins to softly speak about his old life, describing the simple joy of eating dinner together and hearing a warm welcome home, while recalling how kids often rebel before growing up to appreciate their parents, especially after moving out to live alone and realizing how much they truly did. And as the long conversation flows, Shuri feels his homesickness growing even stronger, knowing he still has absolutely no idea how he will ever return to Earth. Reflecting on his past makes our young chef realize something completely unexpected about his current life, as he remembers serving hot meals to the tired soldiers day after day in this camp, thinking about the intense months of hard work, mourning the fallen, and celebrating with the survivors, sharing hearty meals and laughing together through the good times and the bad with his companions, realizing that these chaotic days have slowly become absolutely irreplaceable to his heart. Suddenly, warm tears begin to silently stream down Shuri's face as the emotions overflow, which completely startles Tegu as he looks at the crying boy in absolute confusion, leaving our young chef surprised to feel the wet tears brushing against his own cheeks. So he quickly tries to laugh it off, insisting that everything is totally fine. Tegu looks back with a gentle, sympathetic gaze, feeling deeply for his young friend, gently suggesting that a kind soul like Shuri belongs with his real family back home, but our boy softly shakes his head, admitting that while he wants to return someday, he He could have easily run away from the mercenary squad long ago if he truly wanted. Yet he finally understands that this camp has become his true, irreplaceable home. Picturing the smiling faces of his companions, he realizes how much he loves being here, declaring that he has absolutely no intention of leaving without repaying their incredible kindness, before looking up with a beaming smile to ask if he can stay with them, bowing his head deeply as he formally requests to keep cooking for the squad, leaving the muscular warrior momentarily speechless at the young chef's pure, heartfelt dedication, until Tegu smiles warmly, telling him to save that beautiful speech for the entire group. Tegu smiles warmly, reassuring our young chef that he will always be a cherished member of their squad, and points out that Shuri's physical condition seems to have completely bounced back to normal, prompting our boy to flex his hands and marvel at how incredibly energized he feels. Before he eagerly suggests cooking a warm late-night meal to celebrate his sudden recovery, this gentle giant stands up with a grin, ready to head back to his own tent, but Shuri quickly stops him, asking if he would like to eat together tonight, explaining that sharing this special memory-filled dish with someone would make him incredibly happy, leaving the big mercenary deeply touched by the young chef's sweet and thoughtful invitation. Shuri pulls out a special jar of homemade consomme powder he carefully prepared beforehand, which he made by drying fresh vegetables and grinding them down with aromatic spices, gathering cabbage, carrots, potatoes, onions, and sausages to create a classic comforting soup, starting by peeling the potatoes and cutting them into thick, bite-sized chunks. Next, he slices the carrots into even pieces before cutting them lengthwise into quarters, while chopping the onions and cabbage into perfect wedges to release their natural sweetness, before scoring the sausages with light cuts so they can absorb all the rich broth, boiling the hard vegetables first in water and consomme before simmering everything on low heat. After seasoning the pot with salt and pepper, a steaming bowl of pot au feu is finally complete, which our happy chef proudly serves to his companion with a bright, welcoming smile, sending a mouth-watering aroma of rich spices and fresh ingredients drifting through the cool air. As Tegu takes his first delicious sip, absolutely blown away by the incredibly deep flavors, Shuri explains that this steaming vegetable-packed stew is a classic comfort food called pot au feu, pointing out the thick sausages that perfectly absorb the rich broth as they simmer together, before Tegu notices the massive chunks of potato floating in the steaming bowl, admitting that while he knows our young chef can make literally anything taste amazing, potatoes are so incredibly common that most of the soldiers are completely sick of them, though Shuri just smiles warmly and promises that these potatoes will taste completely different. Trusting his friend, the big mercenary happily agrees that Shuri has never served a bad meal, taking a massive bite of the steaming food with a look of pure anticipation, chewing slowly as the incredible blend of savory flavors begins to coat his tongue, until his eyes suddenly snap wide open in absolute shock at the delicious taste, declaring with a massive grin that this is easily one of the best dishes ever, marveling at how the carrots are perfectly soft and the potatoes are incredibly flavorful, crying actual tears of pure culinary joy as he continues to stuff his face, praising the rich soup for having a gentle aroma but a deeply satisfying, savory kick. Even if he does not have a fancy palate, Tegu knows this meal is legendary, prompting Shuri to take a quiet sip of his own creation to test it, realizing with a soft sigh that it still does not quite match his mother's cooking, explaining to his companion that this was actually a beloved recipe from his family, confessing he made it because he was homesick but he truly wants to stay here, knowing deep down that his love for this mercenary squad is absolutely genuine. Shuri softly admits that thinking about his distant home still makes him feel a bit lonely, which catches Tegu completely off guard as he stares at the young chef in silence, before the big warrior suddenly speaks up with an incredibly intense look on his face, reminding Shuri that he and Gangrave grew up as orphans without ever knowing their parents, meaning the only real family they have ever known is this very mercenary squad. And he firmly declares that Shuri is already a cherished member of that family too, showing that every single person in their camp feels the exact same way about him, urging our young chef to always rely on them whenever he feels lonely or sad, leaving Shuri completely overwhelmed by the realization of how incredibly lucky he truly is, as warm tears of pure gratitude begin to stream down his face once again, while Tegu gently promises that the squad will always protect him and keep him safe, explaining that knowing Shuri's delicious cooking is waiting for them gives them the strength to survive, because eating a warm, comforting meal together makes them feel like they finally have parents, revealing that the entire squad is actually the one who should be thanking their young chef, prompting Shuri to wipe his eyes, deeply moved to have found such irreplaceable friends. Bright and early the next morning, our fully recovered chef happily greets everyone in camp, sending a wave of absolute relief and joy through the incredibly grateful group of soldiers, who immediately start joking about how lost they would be without his legendary hamburgers, making Shuri smile warmly as he realizes just how comfortable and beloved he is here, knowing deep in his heart that he has finally found his true home with them. Shuri reflects on his resolve, realizing he was desperately searching for a solid reason to stay, and silently tells his parents back on Earth that he probably will not be coming home, because he has finally found a brand new purpose in life alongside this chaotic mercenary squad, choosing to dedicate his entire heart to doing everything he can in this strange world, Wishing his family well, our young chef happily waves alongside his new companions, sending a silent, heartfelt thank you to Tegu for helping him find this clarity. Remembering how the big guy always used his cheerful energy to brighten up the camp, while never laughing off Shuri's honest feelings and always taking his words completely seriously. Ever since Shuri fully recovered, Tegu has been training the archers with absolute focus, proving to everyone that beneath his gentle smile lies an incredibly strong and capable warrior. Suddenly, one of the rookie soldiers nervously approaches the big captain during practice, asking if he can get some direct advice on how to properly use a bow, which immediately flusters Tegu as he waves his hands and claims he cannot teach anyone, quickly dumping the teaching duties onto his shocked vice captain before anyone can object. Laughing it off, the big guy runs away to avoid any actual leadership responsibility, admitting to himself that he has always struggled with making big decisions on his own. Recalling how he only joined the squad because he wanted a simple way to survive, even leaving the tactical command of their battles entirely to his trusted second-in-command, preferring to focus solely on shooting down whatever enemies appear right in front of him, content to simply go with the flow of life without ever leading the way. Tegu believes that going with the flow is simply the easiest way to live, and he happily introduces himself as the laid-back captain of the archer squad. Recalling how Gangrave was the one who originally suggested he pick up a bow, it turned out he had a natural talent for it, making him a vital asset. But there is still one bitter memory from his past that constantly haunts him, taking him back to a chaotic day when the camp was panicking over the cavalry. As a young Kaguya desperately wished she could have been there to help, before she angrily grabbed Tegu, demanding to know why he left Gangrave behind. Stunned by her intense fury, the young archer could not find any words to explain, until someone suddenly shouted that the cavalry unit had finally made it back, revealing a severely wounded Gangrave being carried in with an arrow in his chest, leaving Tegu completely frozen in absolute horror at the sight of his leader. This tragic event happened during a brutal battle where the squad was forced to retreat, forcing Gangrave to hold the rear guard alone since the other units were away. While Tegu simply ran away with the crowd because he had no direct orders, with his beloved leader suffering on a stretcher surrounded by weeping companions. This crushing guilt of his own cowardice completely broke the young warrior's spirit, though Gangrave thankfully managed to survive the ordeal thanks to Kaguya's dedicated care, allowing the proud mercenary squad to keep moving forward under their wolf banner. Yet Tegu still wonders if he could have saved his friend by standing to fight. That is why the young archer made a solemn vow to himself right then and there, promising to protect this mercenary squad because they are the only real family he has. Though actually overcoming his passive, go-with-the-flow personality proved to be much harder than he thought, leaving his grand promise completely unfulfilled as he continued to just drift through life, until a fateful day when Gangrave decided to bring a brand new member into their ranks. Introducing a frail-looking teenager who did not seem cut out for the mercenary lifestyle at all. But this young boy named Shuri Azuma possessed an incredible talent that would change everything, serving up mind-blowing dishes that none of the battle-hardened soldiers had ever tasted before, turning their stressful daily lives into a series of warm, incredibly joyful feast times, making everyone feel truly grateful to be alive after surviving another brutal day on the battlefield. As our young chef happily filled their bellies and brought smiles to their weary faces, which actually made Tegu feel a tiny bit frustrated with his own lack of contribution, realizing that Shuri was the one truly protecting and supporting their beloved family from the shadows, even if he had to admit the food was simply too legendary to stay mad at, especially since the squad's elite fighters began showing unbelievable growth after eating his meals, pushing their physical limits and becoming absolute powerhouses on the battlefield because of his cooking, unleashing devastating magic that completely turned the tide of their most dangerous encounters, while even the most skeptical veterans quickly recognized Shuri's worth and accepted him as family. Yet just as everything was going perfectly, our young chef suddenly collapsed from sheer exhaustion, sending the entire caravan into an absolute panic as they desperately call out his name. Kaguya immediately takes charge of the chaotic situation, screaming at Gangrave to halt the entire caravan, while the frantic soldiers quickly carry our unconscious young chef on a stretcher to find a bed, as Tegu and the rest of the squad watch in absolute horror at his sudden collapse, seeing Shuri sweating profusely and groaning in deep pain as a fever completely takes over, which leaves the big archer captain completely frozen in a state of pure shock, especially when the delirious boy weakly mutters an apology for letting everyone down in his sleep, breaking Tegu's heart as he stares at his sick friend with overwhelming guilt, realizing that his own slow brain had completely missed the warning signs this whole time, remembering how they forced Shuri to handle all the cooking duties alone in the freezing cold, knowing that our young chef is not actually physically strong, but just incredibly good at enduring pain, always hiding his extreme exhaustion behind a warm smile just to keep the squad happy, and yet the poor kid is still apologizing to them while fighting a dangerous fever, never once complaining about the massive workload they selfishly dumped on his shoulders from day one. This crushing realization makes Tegu cover his face in deep shame for taking advantage of him, bringing back painful memories of when he failed to protect Gangrave on the battlefield. While outside the quiet camp, Kaguya confirms that Shuri has caught a severe cold, explaining to a worried Gangrave that a simple fever can actually be incredibly deadly for them, as Tegu anxiously peeks through the tent flaps to check on his sick little brother, knowing that while wealthy people can easily afford medicine, the poor often face the grim reaper, because in their harsh world, a common cold is famously known as the poor man's killer. Gangrave steps out of the medical tent, catching Tegu waiting anxiously right outside, and when Tegu asks about Shuri's condition, the leader quietly replies that he is stable for now, though he bitterly adds that proper medicine would have prevented this dangerous fever entirely, clenching his fists as he blames himself for selfishly taking the young chef's hard work for granted, feeling like he repaid Shuri's incredible kindness with nothing but exhaustion and pain. Tegu listens in heavy silence, unable to find any words to comfort his grieving leader, realizing that he was just as guilty for sometimes finding it a hassle to help out. As he sits alone outside, suddenly hearing Shuri weakly call out for his parents in his sleep, prompting the big archer to peek inside, staring at the boy's trembling hand in deep sorrow, as a heartbreaking truth about their young chef finally becomes painfully clear to him. Remembering that Shuri has a real family back home he was desperately working to see again, yet the poor kid kept all his loneliness bottled up without ever complaining about his anxiety, making Tegu wonder if any of them ever bothered to understand the young chef's hidden pain, realizing they do not even know if he has friends or a lover waiting for him, because they were all too busy enjoying his food to ever ask about his life. Leaving Tegu feeling utterly disgusted with his own passive, go-with-the-flow attitude. Suddenly, a quiet voice breaks his train of thought as someone approaches his lonely spot, revealing Kuga and Ortro standing right there with a warm plate of food in hand, offering the big captain a simple meal to keep his strength up during the long watch. But the first bite immediately tastes incredibly bland, reminding him how much they truly need Shuri. Kuga admits that the food is technically edible, but it definitely lacks Shuri's magical touch, teasingly pointing out how mediocre it tastes since his own squad was the one who cooked it, looking down at the pile of bland, unappealing food that barely resembles a proper meal, before noting that Tegu's miserable expression is not actually because of the terrible cooking. Letting out a soft sigh, the scout captain looks away to hide his own lingering guilt, reminding the big archer that he is not the only one carrying a heavy heart right now, which catches Tegu completely off guard as he stares back in silent disbelief, as Kuga confesses that he also wanted to help Shuri but simply could not find a way, admitting with a wry smile that he has absolutely zero talent when it comes to cooking. Tegu quietly argues that having no talent should not be used as an easy excuse for doing nothing. But Kuga counters by pointing out that Shuri is the only one who actually collapsed, making it clear that he hates it when people try to act like the sole tragic protagonist. Instead, he suggests they focus entirely on nursing their sick friend back to health, leaving the apologies for their past laziness until after the young chef is fully recovered, declaring with absolute certainty that this is exactly what he intends to do. Even the quiet giant Ortro stands in silence, seemingly agreeing with his captain's mature perspective, which finally coaxes a soft, relieved smile out of Tegu as he accepts the advice, realizing that the rest of the squad is also sitting around feeling just as guilty, since everyone is currently reflecting on their own mistakes and blaming themselves for the collapse. But this shared pain might just be the wake-up call they all desperately needed. Kuga explains that this might actually be the perfect time for Shuri to face his own limits, suggesting that their young chef finally needs to stop pushing himself so hard and just relax, allowing him to use this unexpected sickness as a rare opportunity to get some actual rest, which leaves Tegu quietly reflecting on the scout captain's surprisingly wise words about letting go. Later that night, a peaceful quiet settles over the mercenary camp under the starry sky. But Tegu still finds himself shivering from the freezing cold as he walks outside, deciding to patrol the perimeter just to make sure everything is safe and secure, until a sudden panicked gasp echoes from the medical tent and shatters the silence. Rushing inside, the big archer is completely horrified to find Shuri's bed completely empty, pulling back the tent flaps in a total panic as his mind starts racing, fearing that the selfless kid ran away alone just to avoid being a burden. When a familiar, quiet voice suddenly calls out his name from the dark. Turning around, Tegu is stunned to see Shuri standing right there in the shadows, looking completely healthy and normal as if he was never even sick, which leaves the big captain staring in absolute disbelief at his friend's sudden recovery, realizing with a massive sigh of relief that the kid just stepped out to pee. Our big archer lets out a happy laugh, thrilled to see his little brother feeling better, though his newfound peace of mind is immediately shattered by the boy's next words, as Shuri beams a bright, cheerful smile and happily announces his full recovery, declaring that he is ready to jump right back into the kitchen tomorrow morning. Tegu immediately loses his mind, yelling at Shuri for trying to work right after collapsing, but our wholesome chef just scratches his cheek and smiles, trying not to worry anyone, which only makes the big archer angrier as he literally shoves the kid back inside, forcing him straight back under the covers so he can actually get some proper rest, before Tegu takes a quiet moment to look around the cramped medical tent, noticing all the heavy cooking gear and ingredients piled up right next to the bed, realizing with a heavy heart that they really did treat their savior like a machine, as he stares at the cold pots that usually bring so much warmth, prompting Tegu to ask a deeply personal question about whether Shuri wants to go home. Sitting quietly under the dim lantern light, the young chef hesitates for a moment, before softly admitting that he desperately misses his family and wants to see them again, though his expression quickly darkens as he confesses that returning might actually be impossible. This shocking revelation completely freezes Tegu, who can only stare back in absolute disbelief. Feeling a deep wave of shame for never realizing how heavy his friend's burden was, because Shuri is actually an outworlder, a rare traveler from far beyond the known seas. According to ancient legends, a powerful god once gathered pure energy from chaos to create their continent, filling the land with humans and animals while promising to watch over them forever. But the leftover chaos was sealed away in the deep, dark waters surrounding their world, creating a terrifying barrier of violent storms and giant sea monsters to keep everyone trapped inside, leaving the people of Subrush to wonder if anyone could ever survive a journey across that deadly ocean, since no one has ever crossed the outer sea and returned to tell the tale. This vast ocean remains a complete mystery, making Shuri realize he might truly be trapped here, because every single ship that ever attempted the journey ended up wrecked on the rocks. Leaving our young chef with absolutely no way to return to his beloved family, Tegu notices the sudden shift in the boy's expression, feeling a wave of awkwardness. As Shuri quickly tries to hide his sadness, feeling guilty for dampening the mood, but the big archer gently explains that his squad grew up as orphans without parents, meaning they already consider each other family and do not need any pity from him, though he admits talking about orphans is a bit too heavy for a hospital room. So he cheerfully asks Shuri to share some happy stories about his own parents instead. This request deeply touches the young chef, who realizes Tegu genuinely wants to listen, prompting him to softly recount precious memories of the warm home he left behind, while the big captain listens in silence, feeling a strong protective instinct swell inside, as Shuri beams a bright smile, talking about how much he wishes to return, only for Tegu to suddenly freeze in absolute horror as he looks at the boy. Realizing that tears are silently streaming down the poor kid's face despite his smile, Shuri frantically wipes his eyes and claims it is nothing, trying to laugh it off. But Tegu covers his face in deep shame, cursing himself for being so incredibly insensitive, realizing he just forced a homesick kid to talk about a family he might never see again. But Shuri gently looks up, softly explaining that his tears are not from sadness. Instead, the young chef beams a bright smile and says he is incredibly glad to have met them, admitting that even though he cannot fight and remains the most vulnerable member, he still wants to stay, leaving the big archer deeply moved by the boy's pure kindness as he quietly looks down, before Shuri suddenly brightens up and announces that he is going to whip up a late-night snack. Turning to his captain with a warm grin, the kid asks if they can eat it together, which completely catches Tegu off guard as he realizes he is about to share a special meal, presenting a steaming bowl of hearty pot au feu packed with fresh vegetables and juicy sausages, taking his very first bite as the rich aroma immediately wraps around his senses. This tender potatoes have perfectly absorbed every single drop of the savory broth, making the big captain realize that this simple stew is easily the best thing he has ever tasted, finding that the deep flavors only seem to intensify with every single spoonful he takes, while the sweet carrots and onions practically melt on his tongue like warm butter. What lingers afterward is the pure, comforting essence of the fresh vegetables, blending together in his mouth to create an absolutely heavenly taste, allowing even a rough soldier like him to appreciate the incredible skill behind it, recognizing the immense effort and dedication required to perfect such a masterpiece. Shuri softly explains that this was his family's recipe, admitting he still feels a bit lonely, revealing the raw, honest feelings that the young chef had been hiding all this time, prompting the big archer to make a firm, silent resolution right then and there. Declaring that it is finally their turn to step up and support their beloved chef, Tegu explains that as orphans, they never knew their parents and only had each other, meaning Shuri is already a vital part of their family despite being from another world, because the young chef has spent so much time looking out for everyone in the squad, proving that his lonely situation is actually not so different from their own. By using his incredible cooking skills to build trust, he carved out his own special place, ensuring that nobody in this camp would ever dream of turning him away again, which officially seals their bond as best friends on this unforgettable emotional night. This next morning, cheers of pure joy echo through the camp as Shuri finally steps outside, leaving the relieved kitchen staff practically weeping with gratitude to see him standing on his feet. While Tegu watches from a distance with a proud, quiet smile on his face, everyone is incredibly relieved to see their beloved chef looking so energetic and healthy again, prompting Kuga to point out that Shuri's quick recovery is thanks to his own healthy diet, since the selfless kid always made sure everyone ate nutritious meals to prevent any sickness, ultimately building up his own strong body to fight off the sudden fever. Feeling completely reassured, the big archer bids his captain farewell to get back to work, heading straight to the training grounds where a stray arrow suddenly pierces a wooden target, catching the practicing recruits completely off guard as they stare at the perfect shot, before a voice speaks up to critique a young soldier's poor elbow positioning. Turning around, the rookie is stunned to find the legendary squad captain watching him closely. As Tegu steps up to demonstrate the perfect form with a powerful, flawless shot, this arrow slices through the freezing morning air with an absolutely incredible speed, leaving the gathered recruits completely speechless as they watch their legendary captain show off, before the projectile slams directly into the dead center of the wooden target, piercing clean through the thick board with a terrifying display of raw power. Tegu lowers his bow with a satisfied grin, feeling better than ever. As he loudly announces that their training is about to get 10 times harder, sending his recruits whispering in shock about their captain's sudden burst of motivation, prompting his second-in-command to ask what exactly caused this massive change of heart. Smiling warmly, the big archer looks up at the bright morning sky, softly explaining that he finally has a precious best friend he needs to protect, realizing that he spent his entire life just drifting along without any real purpose. But now he dreams of traveling to the very edge of this massive continent, hoping to eventually cross the deadly outer sea and find Shuri's lost homeland, so he can tell the kids' parents that their son is doing absolutely amazing. Years later, when the unified kingdom is established, a grand public project is proposed, aiming to create the very first complete map of the entire uncharted continent, since people only possessed fragmented sketches of their own local territories back then. And during the royal meeting, a single legendary hero suddenly raises his hand, known to history as Tegu Valence, the first adventurer and Imperial Guard captain, who happily volunteers to lead this historic expedition and map out their vast world. Tegu spent years traveling to every single corner of the vast, uncharted continent, eventually creating an incredibly detailed map that was shockingly accurate for his era, while also writing a legendary travelogue detailing the unique local foods and customs, which future scholars would treasure for centuries as a priceless window into the past. But right after finishing these monumental works, the legendary archer suddenly vanished without a trace, leaving royal historians completely baffled by his abrupt disappearance from the kingdom's records, until several decades later when the old hero suddenly made a shocking return. Sailing back on a massive ship after successfully crossing the terrifying outer sea, his second book detailed the foreign lands beyond, sparking a massive age of adventure, before he finally retired to a peaceful log cabin to live with his family, always telling his grandkids that his entire journey was driven by a single desire: to find the incredible flavors and warmth he first tasted in Shuri's simple soup. Back in the present, our young chef clenches his fist, feeling incredibly healthy, as he happily stretches under the morning sun, completely over his sudden fever, and immediately gets right back to work cooking up a storm for the camp, though he cannot help but marvel at how massive their mercenary army actually is. Currently, the Gungnir mercenaries are hired by royalty to fight in a major war, serving the mighty kingdom of Nubist, one of the most powerful nations on the continent, which is famous for its absolutely massive grain fields and rich agricultural lands, along with a legendary, dense forest that the locals reverently call the Sacred Woods. Their opponent is the neighboring nation of Yubai, a massive empire famous for mining and metalworking. But because they lack food, they launched a sudden invasion to seize Nubist's rich agricultural lands, even going as far as decapitating Nubist's peace envoy and sending his head right back, completely destroying any hope for peace and dragging both nations into a brutal, endless war. Standing on a hill, Shuri looks out as Tegu points toward their next major destination, which turns out to be the massive, heavily fortified stronghold known as Fort Vainup, a strategic choke point where the mercenary army has been completely stalled for weeks because their supply lines are stretched dangerously thin due to the incredibly long march. Tegu warns that if they do not take this fort quickly, they risk getting completely surrounded, prompting the young chef to ask if they have gathered any intel on the enemy. This captain explains that Asagi and Kaguya are currently scouting deep inside the enemy territory, since they need to make sure their royal employers do not suddenly betray them. But their serious conversation is suddenly cut short by a loud noise from the camp. Turning to look, the big archer spots a dust cloud rising in the distance, realizing that the supply carriages have finally returned from their long trip, which makes Shuri wonder if they brought some much-needed reinforcements to help them, only for a group of stunning, scantily clad women to step out of the carriages. This unexpected sight completely flusters our innocent young chef, who turns bright red with embarrassment, looking over at his captain for some kind of logical explanation, only to freeze in pure shock upon realizing Tegu hired courtesans despite having a fiancé. Shuri furiously lectures his captain, demanding to know how he could betray his fiancé like this, while the panicked archer desperately begs the angry young chef to calm down and listen, before one of the gorgeous women suddenly speaks up to ask what all the noise is about, leaving our boy completely speechless as he recognizes the familiar face of their scout, Asagi, who explains that these stunning ladies are actually elite members of their special operations unit, prompting the girls to tease the blushing young chef for being so incredibly pure and cute, which makes Shuri realize they were using their charms to gather vital intel from the enemy, though Asagi insists that their official report can wait until after they finally wash up. Watching the ladies walk away, the young chef cannot help but feel a bit overwhelmed, realizing that their dangerous charm makes them incredibly powerful allies in this brutal war, before he suddenly notices that the massive armored captain, Gangrave, looks completely drained, looking so incredibly exhausted and pained that the kid immediately asks if he is okay, only for the big warrior to dismiss it and tell him to get back to cooking. Scratching his head in confusion, the young chef wonders what could have caused such a reaction, but he quickly decides to stop overthinking and focus on his duties for the day, while the squad captains hold a serious meeting that ultimately ends without any clear conclusion, as the hungry soldiers gather around the campfires to happily enjoy their freshly prepared meals, taking massive, satisfying bites of the delicious sandwiches that Shuri whipped up for them, allowing our tired chef to finally wipe his brow and ask if everyone has been fed, knowing that even a simple sandwich can bring immense joy and comfort to a weary army. Our young chef and his kitchen crew finally finish their massive shift and prepare to eat, as the mercenary group has grown to over 200 members, doubling their daily workload. But before our boy can take a bite, a fellow soldier calls him over, explaining that his captain wants some quick, easy-to-eat finger food prepared for a special group. Shuri immediately realizes this request is actually meant for Asaga's elite special operations unit, meaning they are planning a lively drinking party right in the middle of a war zone, though the messenger adds that the captain specifically requested some of Shuri's most elaborate cooking. Accepting the challenge, the young chef decides to whip up a special upgraded sandwich, while silently wondering how they can think about partying at a stressful time like this. Standing outside the kitchen tent, Shuri brainstorms the perfect recipe to satisfy the hungry squad, suddenly getting a brilliant idea that makes him pump his fist with absolute confidence. Gathering pork, basil, eggs, breadcrumbs, shredded cabbage, and a few other essential ingredients, including potato starch, which still blows his mind to find in this fantasy world. First, he seasons the thick pork cutlets with salt and basil to build a savory base, before thoroughly coating the seasoned meat in potato starch to lock in all the juices, followed by a dip in beaten egg, powdered cheese, and a generous layer of breadcrumbs, which he deep fries at perfect temperature until the pork turns beautifully golden and crispy. Next, he slathers the crispy cutlet with a rich, savory sauce he prepared earlier, layering it with fresh shredded cabbage between 2 slices of soft, crustless white bread, before slicing them into perfect bite-sized pieces to complete his legendary katsu sandwiches. Satisfied with his prototype, our young chef decides to mass-produce these delicious katsu sandwiches, loading up a massive cart with rows of perfectly sliced treats to feed the hungry camp. As he wheels the food outside and notices a group of Nubis soldiers gathered around a campfire, sensing an incredibly tense and serious atmosphere lingering among these heavily armored royal troops. Suddenly, one of the soldiers calls out to Shuri, demanding to know what he is carrying, prompting 2 massive warriors to march right up to our boy with curious expressions, which makes the nervous young chef quickly explain that these are freshly made katsu sandwiches. Hearing this, the soldiers instantly soften up and eagerly ask if they can try some, catching Shuri completely off guard as he blinks in surprise at their sudden change of attitude, before he politely offers them a plate of the crispy, savory treats to taste. Our boy silently wonders if they were originally planning to pick a fight with him, but his thoughts are cut short as the soldiers take their very first bites, instantly shouting in pure delight at how unbelievably delicious the warm food actually is, urgently asking to know the identity of the genius chef who prepared this masterpiece. Shuri shyly points to himself, leaving the 2 seasoned warriors completely frozen in absolute shock, as they stare at the young kid, unable to believe such a legendary flavor came from him, until one of them politely bows and asks if they could possibly have a few more, explaining that they desperately want to share this incredible dish with their esteemed master. Happy to oblige, the generous young chef hands over another plate of freshly sliced sandwiches, receiving their deepest gratitude as they wave goodbye, leaving our boy quite puzzled by their dramatic exit. Shuri decides to stop overthinking and quickly deliver the fresh food to Asaga's unit, arriving outside a massive tent that makes him wonder if she gets special royal treatment, before he nervously peeks inside to announce his arrival with a polite greeting, only to find a wild, lively party packed with soldiers and the special operations girls. Men are laughing and drinking while shouting at the top of their lungs, while the gorgeous ladies are casually playing cards and enjoying the festive atmosphere, leaving our young chef completely speechless as he realizes they set up a casino mid-war. But his shock is cut short when Asagi spots him and happily welcomes him inside. She looks absolutely stunning, holding a fan and flashing a playful, teasing smile, as she lounges comfortably and eagerly asks what kind of delicious food he brought, instantly blushing with excitement when she sees the perfectly sliced golden katsu sandwiches, which makes our innocent young chef turn bright red, desperately trying to calm his heart. Examining the dish, she notes that it looks incredibly crispy yet wonderfully juicy, prompting Shuri to proudly explain that his secret homemade sauce locks in the flavor, before he hesitates for a moment, looking directly at the beautiful squad leader, to ask if it is truly alright for them to be gambling like this. Amused by his concern, she asks if he is the type who dislikes gambling, but she is caught completely off guard when the kid admits he does not, sparking a highly mischievous, smug grin across her face as she gets an idea, pointing her fan right at our boy and challenging him to a high-stakes match. Shuri blinks in absolute disbelief as the beautiful scout suddenly challenges him to a game, while the surrounding soldiers instantly start whispering and murmuring among themselves in sheer excitement, creating a surprisingly tense atmosphere that makes our young chef feel a bit self-conscious, though he decides learning a local game might actually help him bond with everyone. Watching the crowd react, the gorgeous ladies of the unit exchange highly amused, knowing glances, as Asagi flashes a smug grin and asks what kind of game they should play, prompting a nearby soldier to facepalm as she suggests a math-based game called Kazuace, which apparently requires players to use 2 unique dice and 10 numbered wooden tiles. She explains that the 4-sided die features math symbols while the 20-sided die has numbers, starting the match by rolling the 20-sided die to establish a target number first, before each player draws 5 wooden tiles from the deck to form their hand. Then rolling the math die to determine the calculation that gets them closest to winning. Our boy carefully examines a game piece, noting that relying on a random die makes it tricky. But a soldier laughs and points out that a simple cook probably cannot do arithmetic, causing our offended young chef to snap back that he mastered basic math in elementary school, instantly sending a massive shockwave of pure disbelief through the entire crowded tent. Completely bewildered by their dramatic reaction, the kid asks what is wrong with his statement, only to learn that advanced math is strictly reserved for elite, highly educated royal officials, leaving our boy utterly stunned by how rare basic education is in this fantasy world, with Asagi smiling mischievously, happily raising the stakes now that she knows his secret skill. A nearby soldier whispers to Shuri, asking if he really wants to go through with this. But our young chef confidently smiles and says he does not mind a little friendly fun, which makes Asagi burst into laughter, thoroughly delighted by his surprisingly bold and playful attitude, declaring that it is finally time to get this high-stakes match officially started. She begins shuffling the deck with practiced ease, her fingers moving in a blur, before she confidently places the cards down on the table to prepare for the deal. Flashing a smug, victorious grin as she invites the young chef to make his move, only to freeze in absolute shock when Shuri suddenly reaches out and grabs the deck. Shuffling the cards himself, our boy calmly explains that he is redoing it because she cheated, instantly sending a massive wave of pure disbelief through the entire crowd of watching soldiers, leaving the beautiful scout completely speechless as cold sweat begins to roll down her face. As she nervously asks how he knew, while Shuri deadpans that her trick was incredibly obvious, he explains the mechanics of her stock shuffle, a basic card manipulation technique used to stack decks, silently wondering if she honestly believed a simple cook would not notice such a clumsy trick, though he sighs and decides to let it slide since they are just playing for fun, politely warning her to keep things fair and refrain from cheating for the rest of the night. This surrounding soldiers immediately begin whispering in absolute awe of the kid's sharp eyes, forcing a thoroughly defeated Asagi to meekly apologize and accept his terms with a nervous sweat drop, while our young chef looks down at his newly dealt hand and notes his cards are great, as the beautiful scout quickly regains her composure to put on her legendary, unreadable poker face. Shuri notices a tiny, split-second cloud of doubt pass over the beautiful scout's face, realizing she must have actually dealt herself a pretty decent hand after all, as he silently thanks his old friend Yamagishi for teaching him how to spot card tricks, before Asagi flashes another playful smile and asks what they are going to bet, prompting our boy to reach into his pocket since he still barely understands local currency, tossing down a handful of shiny silver coins right onto the wooden table, which instantly causes the surrounding soldiers to gasp in absolute shock at the massive amount, though the smug squad leader simply grins and declares that his wager is more than enough, picking up the 20-sided die to roll and establish the target number for their game, while Shuri narrows his eyes and focuses entirely on her hand movements, watching the die spin across the table as the crowd waits in breathless anticipation, until our young chef suddenly slams his hand down and snatches the die mid-spin, leaving a completely stunned Asagi staring at him with her jaw dropped in horror, while the watching soldiers freeze in absolute silence, completely unable to process what just happened, as Shuri calmly holds up the die and politely asks her to stop cheating, dropping the game piece back into her hand while telling her to roll it normally, explaining that her Spinto's technique of spinning the die like a top lets her manipulate outcomes, leaving our boy silently terrified of how casually this beautiful scout tries to swindle him, which makes a sweating Asagi nervously ask if he has survived underground gambling dens, though the innocent young chef simply smiles and says he just heard about it from friends. Shuri remembers how his old friend Yamagishi used to teach him all about spotting dirty tricks, leaving a thoroughly defeated Asagi to sigh in heavy disappointment at her failed scheme, as our young chef calmly points out that cheating in a real gamble is a massive deal, explaining that in serious underground dens, getting caught usually means losing a few fingers. This terrifying warning instantly sends a cold shiver straight down the beautiful scout's spine, while the surrounding crowd of soldiers gasps in absolute horror at the kid's intense words. Though Shuri silently wonders if he might have watched a few too many Yakuza movies back home, completely terrified, a sweating Asagi frantically waves her hands and promises to play completely fair, making our boy sweat drop at how incredibly fast her smug attitude completely flipped. He pushes his pile of silver coins forward, asking what she plans to wager in return, which causes the beautiful squad leader's eyes to widen in absolute shock and panic. As her hand begins to tremble violently under the immense pressure of his gaze, Shuri nervously blinks, realizing his casual warning might have sounded like a literal death threat, but his thoughts are cut short when she suddenly slams her bare foot down, dramatically standing up to declare that she is a proud gambler who never backs down, boldly announcing that if she loses, she will offer her entire body to him. Our innocent young chef completely loses his mind, waving his hands in absolute panic, screaming that betting a teammate's freedom is the absolute worst thing someone could do. silently deciding that he should probably just lose this match on purpose to escape this madness, while the watching soldiers go absolutely wild, eagerly waiting to see who wins this legendary showdown. This watching soldiers instantly panic, whispering that there is absolutely no way this match can end quietly. As Asagi dramatically points at our boy, refusing to back down from her high-stakes challenge, though her confident facade quickly crumbles into tears of pure frustration and embarrassment, because Shuri completely dominates the table, winning 3 consecutive matches without breaking a single sweat. Feeling incredibly awkward, our young chef politely tries to excuse himself and quickly head back, only for a heavy hand to suddenly clamp down on his shoulder to stop him. As a nearby soldier insists that a true man cannot simply walk away from a lady's resolve, this crowd eagerly chants that a bet is a bet, leaving no room for escape, prompting the beautiful squad leader to stand tall and declare that she now belongs to him, telling our blushing chef to give her whatever wild command his heart desires. Shuri frantically waves his hands, desperately trying to explain that he does not care about the wager. But his protests are completely ignored as she suddenly lets her outer robe slide to the floor, revealing her stunning, lace-trimmed black undergarments to the entire crowded tent of jaw-dropped soldiers. Our innocent young chef completely freezes, his face turning a bright glowing shade of crimson, as the gorgeous scout leans in close, leaving him utterly paralyzed by her sudden proximity, though her own face is completely flushed with a mix of intense embarrassment and determination. He tries to look anywhere else, but the revealing outfit makes it practically impossible, leaving our poor boy completely overwhelmed by the sheer absurdity of this post-game penalty, as he frantically stammers that he is far too young for this kind of adult trouble, crying out that taking advantage of a teammate like this is just plain wrong. Asaga's face is completely red as she trembles in pure embarrassment from her own bold declaration. While our poor young chef looks away, his face burning up from the sheer awkwardness of the situation, as he frantically stammers that her revealing outfit is just way too stimulating for a kid like him, desperately waving his hands to keep her at a safe distance while trying not to look down. Shuri squeezes his eyes shut, wishing he could just vanish on the spot to escape this madness, only for the beautiful scout to suddenly wink, realizing she has completely won this psychological battle. Bursting into a fit of playful laughter at how incredibly easy it is to fluster our innocent boy, teasingly whispering that her gorgeous body is indeed far too much for a pure-hearted kid to handle. She quickly turns to the watching crowd, laughing off the entire high-stakes bet as a simple joke, which instantly lets the heavily sweating soldiers breathe a massive, collective sigh of pure relief, before she sits down next to Shuri, offering a genuine apology for taking things way too far. Though her playful side quickly returns as she mischievously offers to sneak into his bed tonight instead, our terrified young chef immediately drops into a dramatic doja, frantically begging her to spare his innocence, leaving a highly amused Asagi to boast that she can easily charm him whenever she wants, though she quietly admits to herself that the silly game actually helped distract her from her worries. Shuri blinks in confusion, tilting his head as he wonders what could possibly be troubling her, prompting the beautiful scout to explain her serious thoughts about their mercenary unit's future in this war, mentioning that a major victory could finally earn them a formal, permanent position in the royal army, which makes our boy gasp as he realizes they might actually join the nobility and gain territory. Asagi taps her fan, sighing that the current stalemate prevents them from making any real progress. Shuri notices the deep anxiety in her eyes as she speaks about their current situation, worrying that the enemy might use the stalemate to reinforce their defenses and plan their next move, or that other mercenary groups might swoop in and take all the credit for themselves, since everyone in their unit joined up to chase Gangreve's grand dream to the very end. Asagi sighs deeply on her couch, looking incredibly small despite her usual bold and playful demeanor, admitting that she absolutely hates feeling so completely useless while everyone else works so hard, which makes our young chef smile softly as he listens to her rare moment of vulnerability, realizing how deeply she cares for her comrades and how beautiful her loyalty truly is. Shuri knows he cannot fully understand the heavy burden a squad leader has to carry. But there is one simple truth he knows better than anyone else in this world, that rushing into things out of pure anxiety will only lead to making terrible mistakes. So he cheerfully interrupts her worries by asking if she would like a late-night snack. Presenting a plate of freshly made sandwiches, our boy warmly explains that hunger breeds negative thoughts, insisting that they must fill their empty stomachs before tackling any of their big problems, prompting the surprised scout to smile and gratefully accept his delicious peace offering, taking a big happy bite as she happily chews on the savory treat. Her face instantly lights up with pure joy, completely enchanted by the incredible flavor, as the rich sauce perfectly blends with the juicy meat and crispy cabbage inside, making her praise the amazing texture of the cutlet sandwich that keeps her completely mess-free. Happily declaring that eating his food makes her feel ready to conquer any challenge ahead, Shuri smiles warmly, agreeing that taking a step back is sometimes the best option, which makes the beautiful scout playfully suggest that they should just keep on gambling, prompting our young chef to gently remind her that rushing things never leads to anything good, advising her to eat, drink, and relax instead of letting all this heavy anxiety consume her. Asagi blinks in surprise, completely taken aback by his incredibly mature and comforting words, but our boy suddenly points out that she has a massive stress wrinkle on her forehead, immediately teasing her that he was just kidding, which earns him a very annoyed pout, though he quickly gets serious again, noting that she was clearly aware of her own tension. Shuri gently explains that chasing after empty glory and military exploits just does not suit her, reminding her that her true strength lies in creating a happy, fun environment for her comrades, revealing that he specifically made these delicious cutlet sandwiches to bring some joy to their night, believing that simply eating good food and doing what you love is the ultimate key to happiness. He warmly encourages her to keep smiling and spreading that wonderful positive energy to everyone, promising that the happiness she shares with others will always find its way back to her, leaving the beautiful squad leader completely speechless as his pure kindness touches her heart. As she softly thanks him, wishing that his gentle nature never fades in this harsh world, our young chef blinks in confusion, not quite understanding the deep impact of his words, while Asagi bursts into a bright laugh, declaring that worrying is definitely not her style, quietly whispering to herself that his sweet comfort really hit the spot tonight. Before her eyes suddenly widen in shock as she realizes something incredibly important, Shuri notices a sudden change in Asaga's expression and softly asks if she is all right. But the beautiful scout quickly brushes it off with a gentle smile and says it is nothing, telling our young chef that it is getting late and he should probably head to bed, which makes our boy smile warmly as he politely agrees to call it a night. Before he can walk away, she suddenly calls out to stop him for a brief moment, explaining that knowing his delicious cooking is waiting for her gives her the strength to survive, warmly reminding him that he is absolutely indispensable to their mercenary unit before thanking him. Shuri looks completely touched by her sincere words, softly nodding in quiet appreciation, as the peaceful night slowly passes over the quiet tents of the mercenary camp. This next morning, our boy is suddenly jolted awake by a massive commotion outside, rubbing his eyes as he sleepily peeks out to see what the noise is about, only for his jaw to instantly drop in absolute shock at the chaotic scene, because dozens of fully armored soldiers are frantically rushing around and preparing for battle. Shuri panics, wondering why everyone is suddenly gearing up to attack an impregnable fortress, running straight over to Gangrave to frantically ask what is going on, prompting the giant leader to turn around with a serious look on his face, pointing toward the horizon where thick black smoke is rising from the enemy fortress. Gangrave explains that Asaga's squad successfully infiltrated the stronghold and set it on fire, leaving our young chef completely terrified as he screams to know if she is safe. But the commander firmly grabs his shoulder, telling him to calm down. This commander explains that they are launching a rescue mission alongside a massive castle siege, reassuring our worried young chef that the beautiful scout will definitely return in one piece, promising that they will bring everyone back safely and finally put an end to this war, leaving Shuri to stare up at the mercenary flags as he realizes his own crucial role, remembering how she smiled and told him how much his cooking truly means to her, which makes him resolve to prepare an absolute feast for everyone when they return safely. His commander firmly agrees, knowing that good food is exactly what the soldiers will need, leading into the intense battle that follows as the entire camp pushes forward. And thankfully, the war ends successfully with Asagi returning to a very relieved young chef. She walks back with her squad, sporting a few minor scratches but wearing her signature smile, though she quietly reflects on how the world rarely goes the way we want it to, thinking back to her own tragic past and the harsh journey that brought her here, because she was once the cherished only daughter of a wealthy merchant caravan leader, living a peaceful life until a ruthless band of thieves suddenly ambushed their traveling group, slaughtering her entire family and the caravan members in a matter of mere moments, saving her as the sole survivor, spared only to be sold as a high-value slave, where she suffered unspeakable, cruel treatment at the hands of her brutal captors. Yet she refused to break, resolving to survive through the nightmare no matter what, swearing a silent, tearful oath to one day slaughter every single bandit who hurt her, until her fateful chance at freedom finally arrived when a chaotic battle suddenly broke out. During the chaos, a local gang suddenly launched a surprise attack on her captors, sending the furious bandit leader into a massive rage as he yelled at the intruders, which left a dropped dagger lying right on the ground in front of our girl. Realizing this was her one and only chance to finally secure her freedom, she quickly snatched up the sharp weapon with her trembling but determined hands, catching the brutal bandit leader completely off guard as she lunged forward, and driving the blade straight into his neck to end his reign of terror, unleashing all her bottled-up hatred and grief in one final decisive strike, though the overwhelming trauma of her past immediately made her want to end it all. But a strong hand suddenly grabbed her wrist, stopping her from making a tragic mistake. It was a young Gangrave who gently told her that her life was far too precious to waste, warmly inviting the broken girl to leave her dark past behind and join his crew, promising to build a peaceful country where absolutely nobody would ever have to starve again, which instantly filled her empty, hopeless heart with a beautiful new sense of purpose, resolving to live a happy life and smile for all the loved ones she lost, officially joining forces with Gangrave as they set out to change their harsh world. And when he decided to transition their gang into a proper mercenary unit, she followed. Since then, she has worked tirelessly as their elite scout, handling dangerous covert operations, from stealing enemy supplies and setting fires to charming target commanders with her beauty, leading to the present day where their mercenary group has grown into a massive, legendary force, Gangrav's grand dream of building a peaceful country is finally starting to move forward, as they take on a massive commission from the incredibly wealthy nation of Nubist, which presents the perfect opportunity for their growing mercenary group to finally make a name for themselves, hoping that a flawless victory might even earn them their very own territory to govern. However, their opponent this time is the powerful neighboring nation of Yubai, a massive country boasting incredible wealth, high-quality mines, and a formidable military force, leading to months of brutal clashes before the mercenaries successfully push them back to their final stronghold. But as for what our clever scout is currently up to in this war, she is busy putting on a dazzling dance performance to captivate the enemy, turning a tense military camp into a lively tavern filled with cheering soldiers. One of the rowdy guards happily calls out to get his empty mug refilled, prompting a disguised Asagi to cheerfully serve him with her signature charming smile, revealing that her squad is running a secret business right inside the enemy's fortress. Since the stronghold is built on incredibly rugged terrain, a direct assault was nearly impossible, forcing her special operations unit to infiltrate the castle under the guise of traveling entertainers, though they are highly surprised by how easily the guards let their carriages pass through. But the tragic reason behind this warm welcome becomes instantly clear to everyone. Looking around, they see that the fortress is already pushed to its absolute limit, with the starving, exhausted soldiers completely drained of any remaining will to fight, especially since their water well is rapidly drying up and cannot last much longer. Inside the private quarters, the enemy commander sighs, muttering that they only need to endure 3 more days, because reinforcements from their homeland are scheduled to arrive and completely turn the tide of this war, prompting a disguised Asagi to gently wrap her arms around his shoulders to play the comforting hostess, calling him incredibly reliable while keeping up her flawless act to extract more crucial information from him. However, her eyes secretly narrow as she silently processes the tight 3-day timeline they are working with, while the commander softly thanks her under the dim, flickering light of a single candle. He admits that her troop has brought some much-needed joy and relaxation to his exhausted, starving soldiers, though he quickly admits that they are still standing on the absolute edge of a cliff, explaining that this brutal war will ultimately decide the very survival and future of their nation. Asagi listens closely as he reveals that their famous mines are rapidly drying up and facing total collapse, leaving her completely stunned by this unexpected piece of highly classified economic intelligence, since their production of iron and copper ore has plummeted to almost nothing over the last few years. Realizing the truth, she asks if their invasion was purely a desperate grab for Nubis' fertile lands, which he confirms, explaining that they desperately needed those rich resources just to keep their people alive, leaving them with absolutely no choice but to fight and seize whatever they could to survive, pointing out that his soldiers are just ordinary people with families and loved ones they want to protect. This heavy realization weighs on our beautiful scout, knowing she must still destroy this fortress regardless. But the commander suddenly smiles, apologizing for boring her with such a depressing, serious story, prompting her to offer a gentle, reassuring smile as she softly tells him not to speak so sadly, before her carriage slowly rolls out of the fortress gates to deliver this vital information to her allies. Asaga's squad gathers inside their carriage, quietly reviewing the layout of the enemy stronghold, pointing out the exact location of the armory hidden deep within the fortress corridors, while our beautiful scout carefully notes where the food supplies and soldier patrols are stationed, feeling a bit sympathetic for the desperate enemy soldiers who are just trying to survive. Even though she has steeled her resolve, this harsh mercenary business never truly gets any easier. Soon, the carriage successfully makes its way back to the safety of their own camp, allowing the exhausted girls to finally stretch their limbs and relax after a tense mission. But their peaceful return is instantly interrupted by Shuri frantically shouting about some massive misunderstanding, leaving Asagi completely bewildered as she wonders what on earth has gotten him so worked up. Our young chef blushes furiously, realizing he completely misjudged the nature of her covert operations. She patiently explains that they were simply gathering crucial intelligence under the guise of traveling entertainers, giggling softly as she realizes our innocent boy thought they were doing something far more scandalous, which leaves Shuri looking absolutely mortified as the other girls tease him for his wild imagination, prompting Asagi to quietly reflect on the 3 distinct things she has learned about him. First, his legendary cooking is so incredibly delicious that it easily charms anyone who tastes it, turning even the toughest warriors into helpless foodies who cannot get enough of his amazing dishes. Second, his mysterious past and how he arrived at their camp remain a complete unsolved puzzle, though his kind heart and dedication to feeding everyone make him indispensable to their unit. Finally, she has noticed that our seemingly innocent young chef is secretly a bit of a closet pervert, constantly trying to look away from her chest but failing miserably whenever she gets too close. Shuri stands there blushing furiously as Asagi easily reads his incredibly obvious innocent reactions, gently teasing our young chef about how he still has a lot to learn about women, before she announces that their official mission report can wait until after they all wash up. Heading straight to the bath, the girls happily scrub away all the physical grime from their covert operations, knowing that washing off the dirt is the only way to keep their heavy past from breaking them, which leads to a massive celebration as the squad eagerly prepares to open up their temporary gambling den, turning their quiet camp tent into a lively casino filled with laughter, cards, and cheering soldiers. Asagi firmly believes that letting loose after surviving a tense battlefield is absolutely essential for their mental health. Though she suddenly realizes that all this excitement has left her feeling a little bit hungry, immediately worrying that eating a heavy meal so late at night will ruin her beautiful physique, remembering the absolute horror of recently pinching her waist and realizing she had actually gained some weight. Of course, she blames Shuri's legendary cooking for being so delicious that she simply cannot stop overeating. Telling herself that she must stay disciplined and absolutely avoid any late-night snacking temptations, only for her traitor's stomach to let out a massive, incredibly loud rumble in protest, prompting a nearby soldier to happily salute and offer to fetch one of Shuri's special dishes. Hearing this, our beautiful scout cannot help but smile at the thought of his amazing food, reasoning that it should be perfectly fine to indulge just this once if they all share it together. Bringing out a plate of mouth-watering katsu sandwiches that look absolutely perfect alongside their drinks, leading Shuri to quietly ask if she is truly comfortable hosting such a rowdy gambling party. But she just winks playfully, teasingly asking our innocent young chef if he simply dislikes a little fun. Shuri admits that he does not actually dislike having a little bit of fun, which immediately prompts a mischievous Asagi to test our young chef's true character right here. Pulling out a fresh deck of cards to challenge him to a direct match, and Shuri happily accepts the challenge with his signature innocent, carefree smile. Our beautiful scout smirks inwardly, fully intending to show him who is boss, admitting that she completely underestimated our young chef and just wanted to tease him. But as she swiftly prepares her cards with a highly practiced, sneaky trick, our boy calmly snatches the deck away to reshuffle them himself after easily spotting her cheat, leaving her absolutely stunned as he effortlessly handles the game pieces with incredible precision, politely asking her to stop using cheap tricks since he can see right through them. Shuri's expression suddenly darkens as he mutters about the serious nature of gambling, reminding a terrified Asagi that cheating in this game carries some incredibly brutal consequences, before he casually grabs a massive pile of shiny gold coins from his pocket, slamming his entire wager onto the table with absolute confidence to raise the stakes, and looking up with a chilling smile to ask what she plans to bet. This sudden shift in his aura completely terrifies our beautiful scout as the onlookers gasp, screaming internally about how insane it is to drop such a heavy question right now, while she begins to tremble under the sheer weight of his overwhelming pressure. Sensing a ferocious, wild beast lurking right behind his seemingly innocent face as he waits, but she desperately grinds her teeth, refusing to let this mysterious boy look down on her. Asagi fires up and accepts the challenge, declaring she will not back down from a gamble, but she raises the stakes to an insane level by betting her own body on the game, leaving Shuri completely panicked as she insists that high stakes are the only way to play. While the surrounding crowd watches in absolute shock as their beautiful scout gets completely cornered, summoning a massive, fiery dragon aura behind her to match his terrifying pressure, determined to secure a flawless victory and teach this arrogant young chef a lesson. Unfortunately, her grand confidence immediately crumbles as she suffers a totally miserable defeat, crying comical tears of pure embarrassment over losing a high-stakes gamble to their kitchen boy. Realizing with absolute dread that she actually has to follow through on her ridiculous bet, which means her very freedom now belongs to Shuri in a completely literal sense. Seeing our young chef hesitate, the rowdy soldiers quickly nudge him to accept his prize, teasing him for trying to show her mercy after she lost fair and square, prompting a deeply humiliated Asagi to clench her fist in absolute frustration, before she dramatically flings off her outer robe to declare herself his loyal servant, stepping incredibly close to our blushing boy to prove she is ready for anything, which leaves Shuri looking completely frozen with his mouth wide open in sheer panic, while her own eyes begin to swirl from the overwhelming embarrassment of the situation. Terrified, our innocent chef frantically waves his hands to reject this crazy arrangement, blushing furiously as he admits that a beautiful woman like her is simply too stimulating, leaving our stunning scout completely speechless as his honest compliment catches her totally off guard. Shuri stands there blushing furiously, looking like an absolute innocent boy who knows nothing of women, which makes Asagi giggle softly as she realizes he is just a harmless closet pervert, bursting into a fit of laughter that completely breaks the tense atmosphere of their camp. Before she playfully pulls her robe back up, teasing him for being so easily overwhelmed. Lounging comfortably on the couch, our beautiful scout finally lets her guard down for a moment, admitting to herself that all this silly drama actually helped clear her heavy mind, prompting her to quietly share her deepest worries about the war with our young chef, knowing that their mercenary group is facing a massive challenge with this upcoming siege. Since the enemy fortress is an absolute natural stronghold that will require immense effort to breach, feeling anxious because gathering intel is the only thing she can currently do to help, she looks up to find Shuri staring back at her with a remarkably gentle expression, as he kindly offers her a late-night snack, pointing out that hunger only breeds pessimism, hoping that his legendary cooking can quietly convey the comfort and support she desperately needs. Which leads our beautiful scout to take a massive, eager bite of the katsu sandwich, instantly lighting up her face as the incredible flavors wash over her tired senses, savoring how the rich, savory sauce perfectly blends with the juicy meat and crisp cabbage, realizing that while ordinary bread usually dries out your mouth when you eat it, this masterpiece keeps every single bite wonderfully moist and sweet without any dry texture, proving that Shuri calculated the entire recipe perfectly just to make it easy to eat. Before our young chef smiles warmly, gently reminding her that rushing things never brings good results. Asagi listens intently as Shuri gently reminds her that seeking military glory is not really her style, explaining that he simply wants everyone to share a laugh and find true happiness together, leaving our beautiful scout completely stunned as she ponders the idea of bringing joy to others. While she quietly looks around the lively tent at her rowdy squad playing cards, noticing the genuine smiles on the faces of the people she has sworn to protect, as the soldiers and dancers laugh together, completely forgetting the harsh realities of war. These loyal subordinates were once just desperate souls she picked up and saved from despair, giving them a second chance at life when nobody else would offer a helping hand. Because she simply could not turn her back on people who shared her own painful past, training them into a formidable unit of trusted companions who now have her back. Now she realizes that without even planning it, she has successfully built a warm home, and it was Shuri's delicious katsu sandwiches that finally opened her eyes to this truth, showing her that his cooking is meant to comfort and support them through the darkest times. Savoring another delicious bite, Asagi happily declares that she will not let useless worries weigh her down, letting the rich, savory flavors completely wash away all her lingering doubts and fears. But as she chews, a sudden, shocking realization flashes through her tired mind, remembering that the enemy's supposedly impenetrable fortress actually has one massive, fatal flaw. Everyone was so focused on its legendary defense that they completely overlooked this critical weakness, prompting her to quietly tell Shuri that it is finally time to get some sleep, and our young chef warmly bids her goodnight, leaving her to plan their next move. Asagi watches Shuri walk away with a gentle, appreciative smile on her face, closing her eyes as she prepares to shift back into her serious commander persona, before she suddenly stands up to announce to the rowdy crowd that playtime is officially over. She immediately orders her subordinates to contact Cyril and gather their essential gear, prompting the surprised soldiers to quickly salute and confirm their readiness for the sudden operation, while she instructs everyone to prepare for immediate departure while she briefs their leader. Peeking out of the tent, our beautiful scout looks up at the dark sky, noting that tonight is a new moon with absolutely zero light to expose them, which makes it the absolute perfect opportunity to launch a surprise night raid. This enemy fortress stands tall and imposing against the jagged cliffs in total darkness, where unsuspecting guards patrol the stone walkways without sensing any immediate danger, until a strange sound suddenly catches their attention and makes them look down, only to find a mysterious canister spraying thick, blinding smoke right at their feet. Back in the planning tent, Gangrave nearly chokes on his sandwich in absolute shock, as Asagi confidently explains that she discovered a secret infiltration route during her scout mission, pointing out a steep rocky path leading directly from the mountain into the fortress walls, enabling her highly trained squad to scale the cliffs and slip inside undetected. They will swiftly neutralize the guards under the cover of the dark night, before opening the massive main gates from the inside for their main forces. But Gangrave remains highly skeptical, arguing that the fortress interior is simply too heavily guarded. Gangrave looks completely baffled as Asagi mentions that Shuri actually gave her a crucial hint, asking him if he thinks any wind ever blows inside that deep, enclosed fortress. Which brings us back to the present, where the enemy guards are coughing in thick smoke. As Asagi watches from above, explaining how Shuri's kitchen smoke inspired this brilliant tear-inducing trap, before her stealthy scouts quickly move in to neutralize the blinded guards near the main gate, realizing that such a simple and effective strategy was staring them in the face the entire time, though they were previously too obsessed with flashy, direct frontal assaults to ever think of it. Now they focus on survival and efficiency as they easily slide the heavy wooden gate lock open, while a sudden, loud explosion rocks another section of the fortress to create a massive distraction, leaving the confused guards coughing and screaming as they try to locate the source of the blast, while their panicked commander desperately barks orders for everyone to calm down and find the intruders. Suddenly, the commander freezes in absolute shock as a chilling presence looms right behind him, turning around to find a mysterious, cloaked woman standing calmly amidst the swirling white smoke, revealing Asaga's sharp, determined eyes as she prepares to deliver the final blow to their defense, leaving the terrified commander completely speechless as he recognizes the legendary scout leader right before him, just as a massive, heavy weapon swings through the air with terrifying speed and power, clearing the path instantly as their heavy vanguard forces join the fray to overwhelm the remaining guards. This surviving defenders scream in absolute terror as they realize their secure stronghold is completely compromised, watching in horror as the massive front gates swing wide open to reveal the invading army, led by Cyril charging forward with absolute fury to secure their ultimate victory tonight. This smoke clears over the captured fortress, signaling that their daring night raid was a total success, and with the gates thrown wide open, Gangrave's forces completely overrun the enemy's stronghold, leaving our beautiful scout to reflect on her own choices as she sits under the clear sky. while Shuri brings her a fresh tray of snacks, listening to her call herself a total eccentric, since she is basically betting her entire life on supporting another person's grand dream. Shuri gently points out that by her logic pretty much everyone in this world is an eccentric, which makes Asagi laugh, agreeing that very few people can actually achieve their goals completely alone. Our young chef politely disagrees, wanting to share a much warmer perspective on how society works, explaining that the food we eat and the clothes we wear are all crafted by other people, meaning that every single person is constantly relying on someone else's hard work to survive. Even the blacksmith hammering away at the anvil to create tools for others is playing a part, hoping that the warriors who use his gear will go on to achieve truly great things, which is just another beautiful way of entrusting your own dreams to someone else's hands. Asagi looks at him with wide, curious eyes, completely captivated by his unusually mature way of thinking, before he suggests that she should not just think of herself as riding on someone else's coattails, but rather that her incredible strength is the very key to making their leader's dream come true. This wholesome perspective brings a soft, genuine smile to our beautiful scout's face, giggling quietly as she realizes just how deeply our innocent kitchen boy understands the human heart, as he encourages her to use her sharp eyes to judge if Gangrave is truly worthy of that dream, prompting her to smirk playfully as she wonders what she should do if he fails her test. Shuri smiles warmly as he tells her that he wants their future to be bright, leaving our beautiful scout to watch him walk away while chuckling at his reckless nature, realizing that taking care of their big boss Gangrave is actually a pretty fun job, and once that grand dream is finally achieved, she can focus on her own desires. She reaches down to grab another delicious katsu sandwich from the wooden plate, sitting quietly on the high stone wall while imagining a peaceful world for everyone. Taking a massive, satisfying bite of the savory snack that Shuri made for her, hoping to build a cozy place where people can relax just like this sandwich. But as history always shows us, where there is light, there is also shadow, and this universal truth is no different even within the prosperous unified kingdom, where a bustling, hidden entertainment district thrives right alongside the bright city streets, ruled entirely by a legendary, powerful woman who commands the respect of the underworld. This extraordinary leader is none other than our beautiful and deadly scout Isekai'd, who was famous during the war for her playful, pleasure-seeking personality on the battlefield, while secretly carrying out dangerous, classified missions under the cover of the Dark Night, using her charm to distract targets before swiftly neutralizing them as a silent reaper. Renowned as an absolute beauty, she easily rivaled the kingdom's most famous noble ladies, eventually marrying a mysterious man after the war came to a peaceful end, leaving historians completely baffled by her pure lifelong devotion to just one single person, before she retired to establish her own massive intelligence network disguised as local shops. She gathered secret intel that official channels could not reach, passing it directly to Gangrave. But this incredible contribution remained completely buried until the king's private records were finally uncovered, keeping her absolute loyalty and deep devotion to the kingdom hidden from the public eye. Under her watchful eye, this bustling entertainment district operated under surprisingly strict, peaceful rules, transforming it into a legendary tourist spot that people still happily visit in modern times. Though rumors say she was frequently spotted playing high-stakes games at the local casinos, where a mysterious young chef would regularly borrow her kitchen to prepare some fresh food, serving her those iconic katsu sandwiches to bring her good luck during her intense matches. Meanwhile, as the smoke of battle clears, the long and brutal war finally comes to an end, leaving a powerful noblewoman to celebrate this peaceful new era for her beloved homeland. As her loyal soldiers kneel before her to present a plate of those familiar, delicious sandwiches, prompting her to lick her lips in anticipation of tasting that legendary flavor once again, smiling brightly as she realizes she might finally get to meet the genius chef himself. Our innocent kitchen boy Shuri has no idea his culinary fame is spreading so far, especially since his clever strategy helped Cyril's forces successfully capture the enemy's capital city, allowing their rowdy mercenary squad to happily travel together to collect their massive war rewards, until Shuri decides to strike up a casual conversation with their big boss Gangrave, asking him what their plans are once they finally arrive at the bustling capital, with the commander explaining that he will head to the castle alone to secure their cash, promising to rent out an entire tavern for a massive victory feast featuring Shuri's cooking. Shuri happily agrees to the plan of renting out a tavern for their victory feast, but the long journey quickly catches up to him as he begins to doze off, until a firm hand gently shakes his shoulder to wake him up from his nap, leaving our sleepy kitchen boy rubbing his eyes as he tries to wake himself up, only to suddenly freeze in absolute shock as he looks out of the carriage. He gasps in disbelief at the breathtaking view unfolding right before his very eyes, where towering, ancient trees stretch so high into the sky they defy all logic, welcoming their traveling carriages into the legendary sacred forest of the mysterious Nubis kingdom, which is dominated by massive, thousand-year-old trees that completely block out the sky above them, casting a warm, magical glow that makes the entire forest feel incredibly cozy and inviting. Our young chef is completely mesmerized as they finally enter the bustling castle town, noting the unique wooden architecture and the traditional clothing worn by the local citizens, making him realize just how incredibly fun it is to explore a brand new fantasy world. Before their carriage finally pulls up to a massive, beautifully crafted traditional inn, Gangrave announces that he will head straight to the castle to secure their rewards, prompting Cyril to give him a confident thumbs up while promising to handle everything here. While Asagi quietly notes that this successful operation will surely elevate their leader's reputation, leaving Gangrave to look back at his loyal crew with a proud, determined smile. Shuri beams warmly as he wishes their big boss absolute success in his meeting, and Gangrave happily tells him to prepare a legendary feast for when he returns. Just as they settle in, a mysterious messenger approaches to ask for their commander by name, causing our young chef and the rest of the crew to look up in surprise. Introducing himself as Rono, a loyal servant who directly serves the esteemed Princess Tebis, who has traveled all this way just to deliver a very special royal message. Shuri's jaw completely drops at the mention of a real princess reaching out to them, wondering if this means their mercenary squad is about to hit the absolute big leagues. While Gangrave quickly steps forward to introduce himself with the utmost respect and politeness, though the messenger insists there is no need for such formalities with legendary heroes, explaining that the royal family is highly intrigued by their incredible feat at the fortress. Furthermore, the princess wants to show her deepest gratitude to all the brave mercenary groups, planning to host a massive, luxurious banquet to celebrate their hard-fought victory together. Which is why she is personally inviting Gangrave to attend as their honored representative. Our young kitchen boy can barely contain his excitement over such a massive royal celebration, noticing that even their usually fearless leader looks completely stunned by this sudden invitation. But the messenger suddenly pauses with a serious look on his face, raising his hand to announce that there is actually one very specific condition, requesting that every single representative must bring a unique dish of food to serve. This bizarre requirement leaves our big boss looking absolutely flabbergasted and confused, stammering in disbelief as he tries to confirm if he really heard the word food. While the messenger explains that the princess wants to use regional cuisine to foster true friendship, Rono explains that Princess Tebis is royalty, meaning the food must satisfy her highly refined tastes, adding that the grand banquet will begin in exactly 3 hours at the royal castle. Before he politely bows and takes his leave, leaving the group to process the sudden news, as Gangrave stands completely frozen in shock while the rest of the crew looks on in silence. Suddenly, our young kitchen boy is grabbed by the shoulders as panic fills the room, with Gangrave begging Shuri to help him since he is their only hope for this banquet. But Shuri immediately rejects the idea, frantically suggesting they just bring some pre-made snacks instead. This thought of a humble commoner attending a royal banquet makes his heart feel like exploding, yet Gangrave suddenly realizes they can just use the castle's kitchen to prepare a fresh meal, ignoring Shuri's desperate protests about needing formal attire for such a prestigious event. Right on cue, Asagi steps forward with a beautifully tailored suit already prepared for their leader, explaining that she had already anticipated this exact scenario and got everything ready, while Cyril stands nearby looking absolutely stunning in her own elegant, traditional dress, proudly boasting that she never slacks off when it comes to preparing for important royal events. Gangrave and Cyril smile warmly at our terrified chef, telling him there is absolutely no escape now, leaving the rest of the crew to happily drag him along toward the royal castle. Though Shuri wishes he could disappear, standing in his plain clothes next to a sparkling Gangrave, until they finally arrive at the massive, beautifully designed entrance of the legendary Nubist castle. Our young chef looks around in absolute awe, marveling at the incredible scale of the fortress. As a polite maid quietly guides them down a grand hallway toward their highly anticipated meeting, Gangrave notices Shuri's massive backpack and asks what on earth he is carrying inside. And our young chef casually explains that he brought his own ingredients and cooking tools, prompting the commander to yell that he should have just borrowed everything from the castle. Shuri stubbornly refuses, arguing that he can only cook properly with his own familiar gear, which leads to a hilarious, petty argument as they bicker back and forth in the hallway, with Shuri pointing out that a bad dish could literally get his head chopped off. Suddenly, a polite voice cuts right through their loud bickering to address them both, as the guiding maid remarks on how incredibly close the two of them seem to be, before giving them a sharp look to remind them they are currently inside the castle. Both of them immediately freeze and apologize, feeling completely embarrassed by their childish behavior. But the maid surprisingly agrees with Shuri, noting that the princess is highly particular about food, adding that any chef who does not care about their tools is basically a total amateur. Feeling a bit sheepish, the two guys quickly apologize to each other for overreacting earlier, until they finally step into the grand banquet hall, which is absolutely packed with wealthy nobles, leaving the guests to marvel at the incredible luxury of this massive royal celebration, while Shuri looks around nervously, feeling completely out of place among such high-class people. He stares at the tables piled high with delicious food, wondering why they even need his cooking, when a sudden, loud fanfare echoes through the hall and catches everyone's attention, drawing all eyes toward the royal throne where the mysterious princess is finally seated, where the entire crowd begins to clap respectfully to welcome their royal host. A distinguished-looking older man in traditional robes stands proudly before the gathered crowd, and Gangrave quietly explains that these two are the only remaining royals of the kingdom, identifying the tall man as the king, who is known for his steady political leadership, while the young girl beside him is actually a legendary politician and top-tier gourmet, known across the entire continent as the brilliant and highly respected Princess Tebis. Shuri stands completely frozen in absolute disbelief as he processes this shocking revelation. Clutching his backpack straps while his brain desperately tries to handle the massive information overload, wondering how on earth such a tiny girl could possibly rule the culinary world, before he frantically waves his hands to suggest their commander must be joking. Gangrave maintains an incredibly serious expression, showing no signs of laughter or playfulness, as he explains that the princess's actual achievements are far greater than any rumors. Having single-handedly elevated the brand value of the kingdom's agricultural crops and food supply, while establishing advanced training facilities to raise the next generation of elite chefs, pushing their nation's culinary technology a whopping 30 years ahead of neighboring countries. Every single policy she has ever implemented has turned into a massive, undeniable success, backed by her legendary palate that remembers every single dish she has ever tasted, making her presence at a simple mercenary banquet an incredibly big deal for them, which finally helps our young kitchen boy understand the sheer gravity of their situation, looking over at the young royal sitting confidently on her grand wooden throne, realizing that true, once-in-a-generation geniuses really do exist in this magical fantasy world. Elegant, pearl-adorned platform shoes slowly step forward from beneath a beautifully decorated royal gown. As the young princess gracefully clasps her hands together in front of her traditional fur-lined robes, leaving our young kitchen boy to stare in absolute silence as the royal presence fills the room, before a royal announcement suddenly echoes through the hall, calling out Gangrave's name directly to step forward. Our big boss steps out of the crowd alongside another distinguished mercenary leader to face the throne. While Shuri cannot help but notice just how incredibly beautiful the young princess actually is in person, offering a warm, welcoming smile to the brave warriors who fought so hard for her kingdom, prompting both commanders to instantly drop to one knee in a highly disciplined, respectful salute. This sudden display of extreme royal etiquette leaves our poor chef sweating bullets in absolute panic, realizing he is the only one still standing completely upright like a total sore thumb, until he notices the princess's gaze shifting away from the leaders to look directly at him, sending a massive shiver down his spine as her sharp eyes lock onto his plain clothes, wearing a highly amused, mischievous smirk that spells absolute trouble for our terrified kitchen boy, before she suddenly calls out to him directly, demanding to know his name in front of everyone, causing Shuri to nervously stammer out his name while his heart beats right out of his chest. Princess Tebis tilts her head, curiously asking what specific role he plays within the mercenary group, which completely stumps our young chef as he tries to figure out how to explain his job, but she smugly interrupts to reveal that she has already thoroughly memorized their entire official roster, noting that his name is absolutely nowhere to be found on any of the official military documents, leaving her to openly question if he is just some random chore boy sneaking into her castle. Shuri realizes this young princess possesses an incredibly sharp mind that sees right through people, politely introducing himself to her as a member of Gangrave's legendary mercenary squad, before explaining that his actual role in the group is serving as their cook, which instantly brings a wide, highly amused smile to the young princess's face. She briefly pauses to look him over before casually brushing off her sudden curiosity, only to turn back and ask him to clarify his duties as their chef. Our boy proudly explains that his job is to serve the absolute best meals to his hungry comrades, prompting the princess to find his humble dedication to cooking to be incredibly amusing, until she suddenly commands him to prepare a dish for her right this instant. This sudden demand leaves Gangrave facepalming in absolute dread as his worst fears come true. While Princess Tebis proudly boasts about having already eaten every single delicacy across the land, smugly pointing out that he must now back up his big words with his cooking, this big boss can only stammer in nervous agreement while Shuri panics in the background, desperately trying to deflect by asking if the other mercenary leaders brought dishes too. Princess Tebis closes her eyes and reveals that the whole requirement was actually a lie, explaining that she only has eyes for one very specific culinary goal, which is to finally taste a dish that she has never experienced in her life. Having eaten every known luxury on the continent since childhood, she has completely run out of new flavors, but she believes a strange traveler with unique clothes and features might actually surprise her, leaving our young chef completely speechless as he realizes the massive culinary challenge ahead. Our young chef sweats profusely as he tries to process this impossible culinary challenge, wondering if this clever princess had planned to drag him into the kitchen from the very start, since there is no logical way she should even know about a humble mercenary cook. But since she has set the stage and openly provoked him, he has no choice but to deliver. Suddenly, a brilliant realization flashes in his mind as he looks closely at the young royal, recalling a very specific detail about her behavior that might explain her current mood, deciding right then and there to prepare a legendary dish that will perfectly solve her secret problem, noticing that her elegant feet have been nervously fidgeting beneath her gown this entire time. This subtle clue suggests she might actually be hiding a very common, relatable physical discomfort, prompting our boy to confidently step forward and request full permission to use the castle's kitchen, which she happily grants with a smug smile, eagerly anticipating the absolute best meal of her life. leaving the gathered nobles to whisper in absolute shock at this incredibly bold commoner. Entering the royal kitchen, Shuri notes that while the space is clean, the tools are slightly outdated, so he proudly unpacks Cyril's custom-made knives and his own portable magic stoves instead, causing the royal kitchen staff to stare in utter bewilderment at his bizarre cooking gear. While our young chef scans the massive pantry to see if they have his key ingredient, fortunately, he spots exactly what he needs sitting neatly inside a cold water container, remembering how he used to prepare delicious hot tofu dishes back in his old world, having previously sold the recipe and specialized tools to merchants to spread the food nationwide, hoping the kingdom of Nubist would have adopted it, which turned out to be absolutely correct. Shuri gathers his ingredients, including fresh tofu, minced pork, green onions, garlic, ginger, and various savory sauces, recalling his past training in a Chinese restaurant where he mastered this legendary recipe, starting by cutting the tofu into bite-sized cubes and boiling them in water over high heat, while finally mincing the fresh garlic, ginger, and green onions to release their rich aromas, before mixing a smooth potato starch slurry in a small bowl to thicken the sauce later. Draining the hot tofu cubes carefully in a strainer once the water comes to a boil. Next, he heats up some oil to stir-fry the minced pork before tossing in the chopped aromatics, blending in the spicy doenjang, sweet tianmianjiang, soy sauce, and oyster sauce to simmer together, gently folding the boiled tofu into the bubbling mixture before pouring in the starch slurry, and finishing it off by sprinkling freshly chopped green onion tops over the steaming pan, creating a gorgeous, mouth-watering plate of authentic mapo tofu that looks absolutely perfect. Our young chef proudly carries his masterpiece back to the grand banquet hall, only to freeze in absolute shock at the bizarre scene unfolding before him, as the guests whisper about the intense board game match happening between the princess and Gangrave, with the pieces scattered across the board in a highly complex strategic layout, leaving our usually confident commander sweating bullets as he struggles to find a winning move. Shuri can hardly believe his eyes seeing their big boss completely cornered by a little girl, until the princess suddenly catches a whiff of the delicious aroma and calls for a break, making our boy realize her tactical genius easily matches or even surpasses their legendary commander, as she smiles in pure delight at a wonderful scent she has never experienced before. Shuri presents his steaming creation, which the royal maid immediately recognizes as the trendy new tofu, prompting our young chef to explain that this unique ingredient is perfect for a legendary gourmet, which only makes the smug princess chuckle at his bold confidence as she demands a taste. Our boy happily offers the plate with a warm smile, ready to serve his masterpiece, but the stern royal maid suddenly steps in, blocking his path with a cold, protective glare, leaving Shuri completely startled as he realizes he might have violated some strict royal protocol. He quickly apologizes, realizing that a royal dish must always undergo a mandatory poison test first, while the serious guard keeps her eyes locked onto the mysterious, steaming red plate, until Princess Tebis suddenly waves her hand, casually dismissing the need for any safety precautions, explaining that since she personally requested this meal, she wants to eat it without delay. This loyal maid can only sweat in absolute anxiety, deeply worried about her mistress's safety, before reluctantly serving the incredibly vibrant, bubbling dish directly onto the princess's table, as the young royal marvels at the intense, fiery red color of the sauce, curiously questioning Shuri about the exotic spices that somehow managed to escape her intelligence reports. Shrugging off her doubts, she scoops up a generous portion of the steaming tofu, and slowly brings the spoon to her lips, eager to experience a brand new flavor, taking a delicate bite as she begins to chew the soft, savory ingredients, only for her face to instantly flush a bright, sweaty red from the overwhelming heat, sending her panicked maid into a total frenzy as she rushes to help her, while the terrified princess frantically chugs a cup of water to survive the legendary spice, after chugging down a massive cup of water to cool her burning mouth. She lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh of relief from the intense heat, angrily demanding to know if this crazy chef is trying to destroy her royal tongue. Shuri just stands there with a completely blank, unbothered expression on his face, which immediately prompts the royal guards to surround him with their sharp spears, locking our young chef in place as the tense atmosphere fills the massive hall, leaving the gathered nobles and mercenaries sweating bullets over this sudden life-or-death situation. Calmly closing his eyes, our brave cook refuses to back down from the threat, politely asking Princess Tebis to take just one more bite of his masterpiece, which completely shocks the young royal, who cannot believe his absolute audacity. He explains that she has only experienced the initial heat without tasting the actual flavor, sending her loyal maid into a state of absolute vein-popping rage at his disrespect, as she instantly draws a sharp dagger and holds it directly to his throat, ready to execute him on the spot for daring to lecture the princess. Princess Tebis suddenly raises her hand, telling her furious maid to stand down, deciding she cannot back away from a direct culinary challenge from a mere cook, scooping up another steaming portion of the vibrant tofu onto her spoon, taking a brief moment to mentally prepare herself for the fiery heat, before she bravely pops the delicious food right back into her mouth, closing her eyes tightly as she begins to chew the mysterious bubbling dish. Princess Tebis takes a second bite and immediately notes the intense, burning heat of the spices, but her eyes suddenly widen in sheer shock as she realizes there is something more. discovering that beneath the fiery red surface lies a complex blend of rich, savory seasonings, which perfectly balances the natural sweetness of the soft tofu with the sharp bite of green onions, adding a subtle hint of sourness that dances beautifully across her tongue with every single spoonful, leaving her completely amazed by this brilliant, innovative way of preparing a trendy new ingredient. She feels a comforting warmth spreading deep within her body, wrapping her in a cozy embrace, prompting her to joyfully declare that she has never tasted anything so incredibly delicious. While Shuri and the royal maid watch her dramatic change of heart in absolute silence, this surrounding crowd of nobles murmurs in utter disbelief at the princess's glowing praise, as she proudly proclaims Shuri to be the most talented and surprising chef she has ever met, allowing our young cook to finally breathe a sigh of relief as the guard lowers her spear, though the shocked onlookers still struggle to comprehend how a commoner pulled off this miracle. Smiling warmly, Shuri politely asks the young royal how she feels after eating the spicy meal, and she happily replies that the gentle breeze now feels incredibly cool and refreshing on her skin, which is exactly what our clever chef had planned all along to cure her hidden physical discomfort. Tebis gasps in total shock, completely stunned that a random traveler saw right through her, as he explains that he noticed her rubbing her cold hands and feet earlier. Realizing that a hot, spicy dish would perfectly boost her circulation and drive away the chill, leaving her to wonder if he is a doctor, though he humbly claims to be just a caring cook. Tebis stares at him in complete silence, processing the fact that he read her so easily, before her stunned expression slowly melts into a mischievous, highly amused smirk, bursting into a fit of hearty laughter that echoes throughout the entire banquet hall. As she happily orders her guards to put away their sharp weapons immediately, this sudden change of heart allows Gangrave and the other mercenaries to finally breathe again, while the young princess looks directly at Shuri with newfound respect in her eyes, pointing her finger to boldly demand that he become her personal royal chef. Hearing this incredible offer sends another massive wave of shock through the gathered crowd. But our boy just scratches his head and politely declines with a bright smile, leaving every single noble in the room completely speechless at his sheer audacity. Fortunately, he manages to explain his choice and gently lets the disappointed princess down, reminding her that his true place is cooking for his beloved mercenary group, though he secretly admits to himself that he thought he was going to die, apologizing to his commander for causing such a heart-stopping scene in the palace. Still, the mission is a massive success, earning them a handsome reward of gold, along with piles of rare ingredients carried by a long line of royal servants, prompting a relaxed Gangrave to suggest throwing their own wild banquet back at camp, which Shuri happily agrees to since he barely got to eat anything tonight. Walking back as heroes, our favorite chef is ready to cook up another legendary feast, while Princess Tebis sits happily on her throne, forever changed by his magical food. Princess Tebis is actually a 12-year-old royal prodigy from the prestigious Nubist family, who showed signs of absolute genius to her tutors when she was just 2 years old, thanks to two incredible mental abilities that set her far apart from normal kids, possessing a perfect photographic memory alongside an ultra-fast processing speed that lets her analyze anything, allowing her to easily grasp complex political situations and help run the kingdom from a young age. Even her father, the king, fully recognized her brilliant mind and trusted her with major policies, since their peaceful kingdom of Nubist was blessed with incredibly fertile lands and massive food production, keeping their economy completely stable and their citizens well-fed for generations. But everything changed when the neighboring militaristic nation of Yubai suddenly declared war on them, launching an aggressive campaign with absolutely zero room for any kind of peaceful diplomatic negotiations, forcing the princess's personal intelligence network to quickly dig up the real motive behind this sudden invasion. It turned out that Yubai's vital resource mines were completely running dry, threatening their entire empire with ruin, meaning war was inevitable, though Nubis still believed they had a strong diplomatic advantage, because they had generously provided food aid to neighboring countries during past famines and disasters. Shockingly, almost every single one of those allied nations immediately turned their backs and declared total neutrality, choosing to wait and see because Yubai had secretly promised them a share of Nubis' conquered territory, leaving the royal council in a state of absolute panic as they argued over their next move. While their own military could easily match the enemy in sheer numbers of soldiers, this overwhelming quality of Yubai's elite forces meant their actual chance of winning was barely 30%, yet her father ultimately made the difficult decision to stand their ground and fight to the very end. When her father ordered her to escape with her maid, Princess Tebis flatly refused to run away, since the king wanted her safe while he led their army into a highly uncertain battle. But she passionately argued that she could never abandon her beloved citizens, soldiers, or her father, declaring that she would stand by their side to face whatever destiny awaited them together. Her loyal maid immediately stepped forward to present the young princess with a ceremonial sword, which Tebis proudly raised high as she vowed to defend their kingdom from the invaders, instantly inspiring the gathered nobles and generals to let out a massive, thunderous cheer. Though they still desperately needed to recruit powerful outside mercenaries to match Yubai's elite forces, reviewing the final recruitment list later, the young princess could only let out a disappointed sigh, complaining to her maid that their massive budget only managed to attract 3 mediocre groups, until her eyes suddenly widened in absolute shock as she read the very last name, realizing that the legendary Gangrave mercenary group had actually answered her call to arms.